Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. When the hired assassins surrounded him, thinking this was his end, the main hero didn't even raise an eyebrow. He simply told them to put away their weapons and get lost while they still could. The mercenaries grinned, just some puppy in front of them. Then he silently drew his sword. They charged into attack with screams, thinking they'd overwhelm him with numbers. But he deftly parried all their strikes, not even moving from his spot. Then his eyes flashed. He instantly saw through their weak points, and he started butchering them like the last trash, one after another. In a moment, nothing but bloodied corpses lay around him, all because Yunseol had mastered several demonic martial arts at once, and within his body flows inhuman energy of chi. But his story began completely differently. An old grandfather found him abandoned in the snow, blue and weak. The old man taught him the craft of embalming. He was always there, and was the only one who believed in him. Until the judgment day came, a stranger appeared before their house, accusing the grandfather of betraying the demon palace. They moved into the forest, not to drag innocent people into it. The hero, sensing something wrong, rushed outside and dashed toward the forest. But he was too late. By the old tree, his half-dead grandfather was already lying. Then he threw himself toward him. Yunseol tried to speak through tears, but the old man could only apologize. He admitted that his time was ending. Even while trying to warn Yunseol away from the Undertaker's life, he was seized by bloody coughing. Yunseol begged him to stop talking, but the old man insisted on calling him by his full name and making him listen. His final command was that Yunseol must never seek revenge. The words stunned the child. He tried to refuse even before the thought had fully formed. Overcome by grief and rage, Yunseol swore he could never forgive the people who had done this. Clutching his grandfather, he could not accept being left behind. He confessed that a world without his grandfather was worse than hell, and he would rather follow him than remain alone. The old man heard that desperate plea in silence. He admitted that he had believed death would let him let go easily. Instead, his last request became a plea for Yunseol to flee far away and survive. Even at the end, he told Yunseol that their life together had made him truly happy. With that, his strength finally gave out. The old Undertaker died in Yunseol's arms. Yunseol could barely comprehend that his grandfather was gone. The stillness of the body confirmed what he could not bear to accept. His grief hollowed him out until even tears felt distant. Shock turned that emptiness into something colder. His expression went blank as grief hardened into resolve. Later, while preparing the body, Yunseol realizes his grandfather's ban on revenge had been meant to protect him. Even so, his hands continue the work with the same sharp eye his grandfather taught him. Inwardly, he rejects that final command and decides he cannot obey it. His sorrow begins to burn into murderous intent. Examining the corpse, he concludes the attacker severed both arms in a single simultaneous stroke. The cut pattern tells him the blade moved in a rare upward to downward path. He notices an even more telling detail. The killer altered the technique midway to stab out his grandfather's eyes as well. That cruelty leaves Yunseol with a grim, certain smile of recognition. He realizes the sword's style is not ordinary at all. The wounds point to a demonic martial art, specifically the Tianju yoga technique. Further inspection reveals 93 hidden weapon impacts across the back, far beyond the count of known orthodox techniques. From that, he infers the attack came from a single user wielding a hidden weapon capable of firing in overwhelming numbers. He also checks beneath the tongue for internal signs. The darkened nails confirm another clue. His grandfather had also been poisoned with a lethal toxin that rots flesh and blood. Putting the clues together, Yunseol narrows the killer to someone from the demonic path who knows Tianju yoga. That person must also possess a high-caliber hidden weapon, and they must use deadly poisons of putrid flesh and spoiled blood, making the suspect pool small. Yunseol silently vows that he will hunt such a person down. Beside him, his grandfather's face now rests in peace. Yunseol closes his eyes for a moment, sealing his resolve. He swears that no matter what it takes, he will find the killer. A tear falls onto the application papers for the Demon Palace competition. The name on the document ties his path forward directly to the Demon Palace. Back in the present, Yunseol stands at the registration table before two officials. One official mocks the Janyang clan as provincial cowards and assumes Yunseol will flee after reading the contract that surrenders bodily autonomy. He starts to dismiss Yunseol if he will not seal the agreement, but he stops when Yunseol acts without hesitation. Yunseol bites his finger and marks the contract in blood, his eyes burning with purpose. The officials are caught off guard by how decisively he commits. He reflects that the moment his grandfather died, his old life ended with him. From that ruin, only revenge remained to guide him. As the officials react, Yunseol sees this competition for what it truly is. To him, it is not an opportunity but a weapon. He decides the competition will be his first step toward revenge. The story then explains the larger conflict between the orthodox and unorthodox factions that has shaped the Murim for ages. The orthodox side, led by the Murim Alliance, claims to pursue justice. The unorthodox side is centered on the Demon Palace, which values power above all else. For a long time, those two forces remained in balance. But when the orthodox factions tried to press their advantage by creating the 18 martial masters, the masters for the greater good, the balance shifted. In response, the Demon Palace sought its own way to strengthen itself. That plan became the creation of the 10 Demon Masters. To do it, the Demon Palace announced it would choose 10 prodigies from any background and teach them the arts of the 10 demonic sects. Hearing that, Yunseal understood he had found the path he needed. The offer drew countless ambitious youths to the Demon Palace, all hoping to rise. Among the applicants, many already stand out as dangerous talents. Yunseal studies them carefully, searching for any trace that might connect to his grandfather's killer. He senses formidable presences among several of the competitors, and he becomes certain that one of them is tied to the murder. In his mind, the crowd overlaps with the image of the hooded killer, narrowing his suspicion onto the people gathered here. He fixes on the thought of the killer hiding somewhere among them. Yet, he also knows the murderer is a martial master far beyond his current ability to judge or challenge. So he concludes that revenge is impossible unless he first becomes a martial master himself. For that reason, becoming one of the 10 demon masters is the fastest path to the strength he needs. Nearby applicants react in surprise as the event finally begins. A line of Demon Palace enforcers arrives, escorting a fearsome elder whose presence dominates the courtyard. He introduces himself as the head instructor, Hyuk Ryan-young, known as Gold Dagger Blood Eyes. The crowd is shaken that the head instructor himself has appeared. Hyuk Ryan-young declares that this place exists to identify the greatest prodigies among all demonic sects. He announces that only those who survive every trial prepared by the Demon Palace will even become candidates for the 10 Demon Masters. Yunseal listens without flinching as the first test is introduced. The first trial, Hyuk Ryan-young says, is a direct inspection of each applicant's physical aptitude by Demon Palace martial artists. The crowd protests that such an inspection is not a real competition at all. The enforcers answer by physically dragging complainers away without discussion. Those deemed acceptable are simply told to move on. Yunseal calmly processes the rule and realizes passing means advancing immediately to the next stage. Then he notices one of the black-clad inspectors and recognizes him at once. The moment the inspector's hand reaches toward him, Yunseal knows the man he has been searching for is finally here. A frail young man carrying a wooden box is stopped and physically checked before the trial begins. One examiner is startled to sense something unusual from him. He quickly judges that the boy should be hopelessly outmatched. Even so, he cannot understand why someone so unsuited would choose to enter. The boy answers that doubt with a terrifyingly real killing intent. The examiner realizes this is not bluff or desperation but genuine murderous resolve. Still, duty wins out, and the examiner decides he cannot let the boy through on that alone. The boy remains calm, as if this resistance was expected. He reflects that all he has ever learned is how to handle corpses, not how to fight like a warrior. By ordinary standards, he should have no chance of passing a martial trial. Yet he refuses to believe this is where his path ends. Just as he steels himself, the first trial is abruptly declared over. The sudden ending leaves the competitors stunned. One furious contestant openly denounces the result as unfair. He argues that if raw physique alone decides everything, the competition itself is meaningless. The old master answers that complaint with cold contempt. He explains that strong bodies are the foundation of martial arts, and the contest exists to gather those with natural aptitude. When the protester still begs for a chance, the master decides to give one on his own terms. His gaze alone crushes the crowd into silence. He tells them not to worry, but his reassurance carries menace rather than comfort. He announces a second trial for those lacking physical talent, promising to choose anyone who can still prove worthy. The next test begins immediately, before anyone can recover. Its rule is brutally simple: fight each other and survive. The master clarifies that the battle continues until only one person remains alive. The competitors recoil in disbelief at being ordered to slaughter their own side. For one ambitious fighter, however, the rule is a gift. He decides that if killing is required, this trial will finally let him rise. His eyes settle on the quiet boy with the box as his first prey. He seizes his weapon and commits to the attack. With murderous intent, he raises a heavy blade for a killing blow. He charges straight at the boy, declaring him the first victim. The boy notices the strike only at the last instant. The attack closes in too fast for anyone else to intervene. The blade descends with lethal force. Before it can land, a red-haired fighter cuts in and intercepts the assault. The attacker reveals that he has long wanted this chance to kill his rival. The red-haired fighter recognizes him as Wei Wuncheng and braces despite already being wounded. Wuncheng kills the red-haired fighter in a single ruthless strike. The crowd is horrified that the trial has turned into real murder so instantly. The quiet boy immediately reads the killing blow with clinical precision, noting how the heart was pierced through a narrow opening. He judges Wuncheng to be physically weak but exceptionally fast and accurate, then watches him boast over the corpse. The masters dismiss Wuncheng as decisive yet foolish, because his display has made him the obvious target. One examiner reflects that anyone who stands out in a battle like this invites attack. Still, they expect his brutality to force the rest of the field into motion. Among the shaken competitors, the quiet boy realizes that if panic spreads, he will die unless he acts carefully. The massacre begins in earnest as fear drives contestants to attack first and think later. One fighter realizes too late that he stepped into danger without meaning to. Wuncheng kills him as casually as swatting aside an inconvenience. The old master notes that the younger contestants are the ones least able to endure the sight of death. The courtyard dissolves into screams, blood, and blind violence. Some fighters freeze in terror while others lash out wildly. A few still try to fight properly, but discipline is collapsing. As death closes in, most of them lose the ability to think at all. That breakdown catches the old master's attention. He begins to suspect that someone in the chaos is behaving differently. The examiner beside him also notices a hidden pattern. They realize not everyone in the arena is a fool. The quiet boy calmly wipes blood from his face while remaining detached from the panic around him. From a distance, he and another survivor stand apart from the frenzy while the rest butcher each other. Bodies continue to fall all around them. The boy judges the others harshly for surrendering themselves to fear. To him, they are no longer fighters but people consumed by the terror of dying. He remembers that the master's true order was not to kill but to survive until the end. That realization becomes his strategy. Stay rational, stay cold, and survival is possible. A memory of a corpse on a slab hardens his resolve to live at any cost. So instead of fighting, he studies the dead with the same care he once used in the morgue. Elsewhere, another skilled swordsman cuts through opponents with terrifying speed. That swordsman notices the quiet boy among the corpses and dismisses him as a pathetic weakling hiding in the shadows. The boy, however, keeps examining wounds and reconstructing the killer's swordplay from the bodies. The swordsman decides to finish him personally. He hurls a chained weight toward the kneeling boy. The projectile smashes the wooden box beside him to pieces. The box that had seemed useless is destroyed in front of him. The attacker mocks him for carrying it, assuming it was nothing but dead weight. The boy does not answer, but the loss clearly matters to him. For a moment he is pulled inward by the shock. Among the wreckage, a short sword and a folded note are revealed. The note is a birthday message from his grandfather, and the memory cuts deeper than the attack. Grief and rage awaken something dark inside him. He rises with the hidden blade while the attacker finally senses real danger. The swordsman still taunts him and invites him to try. He laughs at the tiny sword, convinced it cannot threaten him. A blindfolded swordsman suddenly appears and cuts him down in one stroke. The arrogant attacker is killed before he can even understand what happened. The blindfolded man casually tells the quiet boy that saving him was merely convenient, not an act of kindness. The boy remains silent, measuring this new figure instead of reacting emotionally. The blindfolded swordsman praises the boy's eyes but notes that he has never truly learned martial arts. He proves his point by killing another attacker without even taking the threat seriously. The boy keeps watching, storing away every detail. The old master recognizes the sword in the blindfolded man's hand as the extermination sword, legacy of the legendary Black Soul. He reveals the wielder's name as Num Wungang and recounts the rumor that he found Black Soul's secret manual and blade in a hidden valley. Though self-taught and full of openings, Num Wungang inherited a terrifying legacy. For now, that makes him Black Soul's sole successor. The master judges that despite lacking physical strength, Num Wungang may be the strongest candidate in the arena. He also warns that Wungang is still immature and unworthy of the sword's full legacy, though no one present seems stronger. The examiner agrees, unless something truly unforeseen happens. At that same moment, the quiet boy notices that one corpse bears rough, unrefined cuts unlike Wungang's usual work. That discrepancy gives him a crucial clue. Wungang, bloodied but confident, realizes the boy has survived to the end. He admits he did not expect this weak-looking survivor to last so long. Now the battlefield has narrowed to the two of them amid a sea of corpses. Wungang declares that killing the boy will make him a true candidate for the 10 demon masters and invites him to come forward. The boy finally stands to face him. Inwardly, he concludes that Wungang is indeed the strongest person left, but he has already found the flaw that can bring that strength down. His confidence does not waver as he commits to that conclusion. He grips the short sword hidden in the shattered box. His expression settles into cold resolve. He watches Wungang's movements while the last scraps of chaos fade behind them. Then he lowers himself and prepares his body for a single decisive gamble. He convinces himself that victory is possible if he does not miss this one chance. He advances with the short blade, forcing the final duel to begin. Wungang welcomes the challenge with amused curiosity. He attacks first, rushing in with overwhelming speed. A barrage of swords strikes tears into the boy from every angle. Wungang mocks him for doing nothing but barely dodge and endure. But the watching examiner notices that the boy is not simply being overwhelmed. He is twisting his body at the last possible instant to turn fatal hits into shallow wounds. By sacrificing flesh, he keeps his vital points untouched. Even as blood sprays, he continues to preserve the one opening he needs. The examiner realizes in shock that the boy memorized Wungang's attack patterns by studying the corpses. The old master is impressed by such extraordinary observation. At last the boy speaks, dismissing Wungang's swordsmanship as crude and incomplete. He points out that despite the storm of attacks, Wungang has only managed to cut flesh, not kill. The examiner understands that the boy is deliberately provoking him into a more committed strike. Because with such a frail body, the boy cannot win through ordinary counters and needs a perfect opening. Stung by the insult, Wungang abandons restraint and decides to kill him immediately. He launches a full-force finishing attack. The boy recognizes that the moment he has been waiting for has arrived. He knows he will only get one chance to exploit Wungang's habit. Remembering the corpses, he recalls the pattern behind every finishing blow. Wungang always aims his final strike at vital points. More specifically, his killing intent always drives the blade toward the heart or the head. So the boy moves on the assumption that the upper body will be targeted once again. Wungang realizes too late that something about the boy's response is wrong. The boy slips inside the attack and drives the short blade toward a hidden weak point near Wungang's neck. As he strikes, he recalls his grandfather teaching him about the vulnerable Tien to acupoint. That point, his grandfather said, is difficult even for masters to harden. A full force blow there can drop even an adult instantly. Trusting that lesson, the boy commits everything to the thrust. The strike lands cleanly, stunning one gang before he can finish his own attack. The swordsman's body seizes as the hidden weakness is pierced. The boy follows through and cuts him down. Even while bleeding heavily, he forces the finishing motion to completion. Surrounded by the dead, he realizes the battle is over and that he is the last one standing. The examiner can only call him the unexpected variable that overturned every prediction. The old master admits that Black Soul's sword art had raised his expectations, but this outcome came from somewhere else entirely. He declares Yunseal the one who has passed the second trial. Yunseal stands bloodied among the corpses, transformed by what he has endured, and as his name is spoken, he remains upright as the sole survivor of the trial. In a hazy vision, an old man desperately calls for Yunseal, unable to find her. Yunseal answers him at once, overjoyed to hear her grandfather's voice again. She runs toward him, trying to reassure him that she is right there. But when she reaches him, he still cannot perceive her, leaving her confused. A sudden dread overtakes her as something about the moment turns wrong. Her grandfather appears as a bloodied, hollow figure, confessing that he cannot see her form at all. The nightmare shocks Yunseal into terrified silence. She jolts awake with a gasp, dragged out of the vision. Back in reality, she finds herself on a ship among the survivors of the previous trial, watched by other candidates. The vessel continues through rough water toward its next destination. The ship presses onward as the sea crashes against its hull. Yunseal realizes she must have blacked out from blood loss, and wakes inside the ship. She notices her grave wounds no longer hurt much and suspects the demonic palace treated her with exceptional care. Putting that aside, she begins carefully assessing her surroundings. She notes that the people around her are trained and vaguely familiar, and hears that they are the ones who passed the first trial. Their smug expressions confirm the contempt she expected from such company. Yunseal accepts their disdain as natural and keeps her head down. An order to disembark interrupts the tense quiet. A palace attendant announces that they have reached the next trial site. The destination is revealed as Hell Island. The ship pulls in against the island's landing point. The attendant formally identifies the place as Hell Island. She orders the candidates to follow her inland. They are led from the shore into a harsh island landscape of cliffs and forest. At a rocky lodging area, the attendant assigns them caves to sleep in and orders them to change into prepared clothes and carry the provided swords. The candidates are told they may choose any cave they like. Yunseal studies the area in silence before deciding. She finds the climate unexpectedly comfortable, though the new clothes feel restrictive. Around her, other candidates immediately begin quarreling over better spots. Their petty arguments make Yunseal realize they have no idea how brutal the second trial truly was, and that their guard is dangerously low. She keeps watching them with growing wariness. Seeing their expensive clothes and polished manners, she suspects many of them come from prestigious clans. From that, she concludes the second trial was designed to eliminate people the sect could kill without consequence. While she is still thinking, the attendant presses her to choose a cave quickly. The attendant singles Yunseal out for moving too slowly and warns her to stop hesitating. He addresses her by name, making clear he has been paying attention to her survival. Privately, he admits he noticed her unusual stare earlier and is curious what choice she will make now, but still urges her to decide fast. Yunseal points out a cave she wants. The cave she chooses has a narrow, shabby entrance. Others mock her for picking such a filthy-looking place. The attendant immediately recognizes the significance of her choice. He is impressed, realizing she understood the cave's value at a glance. He explains that the cave only looks poor because the cramped opening hides what lies beyond. Inside, the space is large enough for training, while the tiny entrance makes it easier to defend. The attendant praises Yunseal for judging the cave properly and tells her to get ready. Yunseal changes into the provided black training clothes. Once everyone is gathered again, the attendant begins explaining the purpose of Hell Island. He reveals that the island contains 10 training facilities, each tied to one martial art of the 10 demonic sects. The candidates are told they may study one art or all of them as they please. They are also given complete freedom over how they spend their time, whether resting, playing, training alone, or learning techniques. That freedom strikes Yunseal as suspicious after the cruelty of the previous trial. Meanwhile, the others excitedly discuss which martial art to pursue first. Many immediately decide to seek out the Fire Rain Sword sect because of its reputation as the strongest. Yunseal notices the crowd moving in one direction and realizes nearly everyone is heading there. The Fire Rain Sword sect's fame and power draw the candidates like moths to flame. Yunseal admits such a sect would be useful to learn from, but she has never relied on martial arts and does not feel bound by their prestige. A different memory suddenly catches her attention. Remembering what she truly needs, Yunseal slips away from the crowd on her own. She heads through the forest toward a secluded building. As she approaches, recognition hardens into certainty. She realizes this is the place she had in mind all along. The building belongs to the Wandering Beast Pavilion, a sect that has declined so badly it barely remains among the 10. Its status survives mostly because it once produced a notable number of top masters. Yunseal recalls hearing about the pavilion from her grandfather when he spoke of the Mirim. She prepares to commit herself to this path, then senses something strange beneath her feet. The ground itself begins to shift under her. A hidden presence rises from below, startling her. A man buried in the earth introduces himself as Sa Wu, the secret pavilion master of the Wandering Beast Pavilion, and asks whether she came to become one of the 10 demon masters. Yunseol faces the bizarre master as he emerges enough to confront her. Caught off guard, she gathers herself before answering. She respectfully states that she came to learn the Wandering Beast Pavilion's martial arts. Her answer leaves a brief, awkward silence. Sa Wu studies her with sharp suspicion. He rises further from the ground, making his dominance unmistakable. His interest turns into a rough, dismissive amusement. Sa Wu tells her not to rush toward death, refuses to teach her, and mocks her frailty. Yunseol counters that the pavilion's martial arts are said to grant the power to survive anything, which is exactly what she needs. Sa Wu warns that even geniuses struggle with his art because it begins by remaking the body, and in her current condition she would die within a day. He tells her to leave if she understands that. Instead of leaving, Yunseol suddenly bows deeply before him. She declares that since he agreed to teach her, she must pay proper respect to her new master. Her shameless insistence leaves Sa Wu speechless before he mutters that she is insane. Despite himself, he starts reconsidering her. At last, Sa Wu relents and agrees to teach her. He immediately clarifies that he is only doing so because the Demon Palace ordered him to accept a trainee. He formally names himself as Sa Wu, master of the Wandering Beast Pavilion, and orders her to call him Mr. Sa. When Yunseol begins to introduce herself, he cuts her off. To him, she is not a person of importance yet, only trainee number 1. Without wasting another moment, Sa Wu begins her training at once. Yunseol braces herself as the lesson starts with terrifying intensity. She is overwhelmed by what he does to her senses. Her vision is swallowed by darkness. Blinded, Yunseol panics because she can no longer see anything. Sa Wu calmly tells her not to worry. He explains that he has temporarily sealed her sight with a secret technique from the Wandering Night Pavilion, calling it a necessary first step toward learning the Wandering Beast Path. He tells her that the Wandering Beast Path heightens every sense and grants reflexes like those of a beast. He adds that their martial arts change drastically depending on the learner, which makes even the basic path difficult to master. That difficulty is why so few people still attempt it, leaving the art nearly abandoned. But he promises that if she does master it, the reward will be extraordinary. He reveals the goal in full. She will gain the senses of a wandering beast. Then he undercuts the promise by noting that most trainees die before reaching that point. He steps away, leaving her alone in the dark with the challenge. Sa Wu tells her she should adapt to blindness within an hour. He leaves, promising to return after that time. The training ground falls quiet once he is gone. Yunseol quickly realizes that losing sight has not automatically sharpened her other senses at all. When Sa Wu returns, she understands she has already failed to meet his expectation in time. She accepts that it is too late for easy adjustment, and resolves to force herself to adapt. Determined not to die, Yunseol decides she must adjust as fast as possible. She begins stumbling, crawling, and moving through the darkness by sheer effort. Imagining the kind of ambush that would kill her in the struggle to become a demon master, she turns the training into a fight for survival. In her mind, a hidden enemy raises a blade from behind her. That imagined threat drives her body into desperate alertness. She throws herself into evasive movement, as if escaping a real strike. Through repeated trial and error, she realizes balance matters more than anything now that she cannot rely on sight. Time passes into the night as she keeps training under the open sky. When Sa Wu returns, he expects to find her helpless and disoriented. Instead, he sees her already moving across the field on her own. He is genuinely surprised by how unusual her approach is. He realizes that while most trainees wait passively for their senses to recover, Yunseol has been fighting an imaginary enemy to force adaptation. Watching her footwork, he begins to understand why she is progressing. Yunseol suddenly launches herself with sharpened movement, as if chasing the phantom opponent she created. Her body twists through the dark with far more control than before. Sa Wu is astonished that she has adapted so quickly. He acknowledges that she has become accustomed to blindness, and decides to raise the difficulty. Drawing his sword, he orders her to try evading a real blade. The air itself tightens as the next phase of training begins. 3 days pass under this brutal regimen. By the 3rd day, Yunseol is battered and exhausted but still forcing herself through the training. She faces Sa Wu again in the rain, barely standing yet refusing to stop. Her movements now carry a feral intensity, as if the beast path is taking root within her. Sa Wu's strike finally lands and sends her reeling, proving how deadly the gap still is. Even so, Sa Wu is struck by her endurance, and notes that she has never once complained about his methods. Yunseol clings to her sword for support, worn down but still listening. Sa Wu finally asks why she never questioned how to evade his attacks or the theory behind the training. Yunseol answers that he taught her the art's essence was personal enlightenment, so she trusted there had to be meaning in everything he was doing. Her answer catches Sa Wu off guard. He admits that she is right and, for the first time, seems to respect her understanding. Encouraged, he urges her to continue and attacks again. This time Yunseol senses the incoming strike in a new way, as if the motion itself is becoming visible to her. She realizes she can feel the attack's course before it reaches her. What she perceives is not sight returning, but the path of the sword itself. She knows she still cannot evade the blow in time, so she makes a different choice. Instead of dodging, she drives her own sword up to meet the attack head-on. Her blade collides with Sa Wu's, and she successfully blocks the strike. Sa Wu is stunned by what just happened. He stares at her in disbelief as the meaning sinks in. He realizes she has just blocked his silent attack. The feat leaves him wondering how she could reach this level after only 3 days. As the clash explodes around them, Yunseal hangs in the air gripping her sword, proving that her desperate gamble has begun to bear fruit. Wounded and frustrated that he still cannot properly defend himself, the young fighter is given a drink by the bearded master. He accepts the help with gratitude, still too drained to understand what he has been handed. As he raises it, he notices the master watching him with unusual intensity. The first sip shocks him when he realizes it is no ordinary water. Power floods back into his body so suddenly that it feels as if his lost blood and strength are being restored. The master reveals he has just spent the ultimate spring spiritual water he had saved for his entire life, and he considers the boy worthy of it. In the boy, he believes he has finally found the once-in-a-lifetime genius he had been waiting for. The stillness breaks as the duel resumes. Revitalized, the boy launches a fierce counterattack with renewed speed and force. Their clash explodes into a storm of sword energy as he presses the master from multiple angles. Instead of being cornered, the master enjoys the exchange and grows more excited. He taunts the boy to try receiving the same attack again, turning the fight into a lesson as much as a test. The boy braces himself against another overwhelming wave of power. The master breaks through his defense and dismisses his effort as still insufficient. The boy realizes he is being completely outclassed. A decisive strike crashes down and forces him back once more. When the assault suddenly stops, he hesitates, unsure whether the attack is truly over. The master bursts into laughter, thrilled that what he had been searching for was right in front of him all along. That reaction makes the boy look at him differently. He realizes his eyesight has returned, and the master addresses him by name, Yunseal. The master urges him to abandon any dream of becoming like the 10 demon masters and instead become an official disciple of his pavilion. He promises that if Yunseal accepts, he can raise him into one of the demonic faction's 10 strongest martial masters within 10 years. The offer tempts Yunseal because he believes the man truly has that ability. But his thoughts return to the highly skilled murderer who killed his grandfather, reminding him that ordinary strength will not be enough. He concludes that learning only the Wandering Beast Pavilion's arts cannot satisfy what he needs for revenge. That realization hardens into resolve. He declares that he will become a demon master. The master is taken aback by the answer. He warns Yunseal not to chase that goal by trying to learn the martial arts of all 10 demonic sects, because even a supreme genius could not master so many incompatible arts. He explains that each martial art suits a different body and energy type, so even the most talented person can only properly learn a few, while true supremacy comes from devoting oneself to one path. Yunseal apologizes, but he does not withdraw his ambition. The master wonders whether there is any way to change the boy's mind. After thinking it over, he relents. He agrees to teach Yunseal a different martial art instead. When Yunseal protests that he has only learned the basics of the pavilion's art, the master explains that his school is not passed down through theory alone. He reminds Yunseal that the barrage of sword strikes he unleashed earlier was itself instruction. The boy suddenly understands that the attacks he endured were demonstrations meant to imprint the wild beast path into him. The master confirms that Yunseal has already been practicing the wild beast path through that experience. Yunseal finally grasps the method. He realizes the master's earlier sword storm had been the actual forms of the wild beast path. Yunseal thanks him sincerely, but the master insists he was only following the demon palace's order. Even so, Yunseal cannot forget that the man also saved him with precious elixirs. The master tells him to forget the debt. Yunseal is confused by that response. The master explains that in Jianghu, it is best to let go of both favors and grudges whenever possible. Yunseal falls silent, unable to accept that advice so easily. After a pause, he prepares to leave. He bows deeply and announces that he will be on his way. The master watches him depart in silence. Left alone, he marvels at where such a hidden dragon could have come from. As Yunseal walks on, he senses that a bloody storm will soon sweep through Hell Island. Since learning the wild beast path, his senses have become so sharp that even simple awareness is exhausting. He realizes he will never rest properly unless he learns to control that heightened perception. He decides to suppress his senses as much as possible from now on. He begins training that control by imagining the stillness of a single water droplet. He focuses until his awareness settles and his mind stops overflowing. His gaze steadies as the exercise takes hold. Once the pressure eases enough, he decides that will have to do for now. He turns his attention to what comes next. He reasons that the Demon Palace would not keep people on Hell Island forever just for training, so time may already be running out. If that is true, he concludes he has only one choice left. He decides to seek out the founder who once rivaled the great heavenly demon emperor 700 years ago. That means going to the Fire Rain Sword Emperor, Jik Wawan. Because the Fire Rain Sword sect is the strongest of the 10 demonic sects, Yunseal sees it as his only path forward. He arrives at the Fire Rain Sword sect and is struck by how grand it is compared to the Wandering Beast Pavilion's rough martial hall. He knocks at the gate. A sect member answers and demands to know who would visit at such an hour. The guard quickly senses there is something unusual about him. Yunseal bows and states plainly that he has come to learn the Fire Rain Sword sect's martial arts. Rather than reject him outright, the sect member tells him to follow. Inside, Yunseal is told that the sword arts here are the broadest and most time-consuming among the demonic martial arts. The instructor explains the trial system and notes that everyone else has already cleared the elementary stage and moved on, then asks why Yunseal arrived half a month late. Yunseal answers that he spent that half-month learning at the Wandering Beast Pavilion. When he confirms that he truly learned the Wild Beast Path, the instructor is stunned but doubts anyone could master it so quickly. He privately assumes the pavilion must have dismissed Yunseal early rather than truly train him. He introduces himself as Jean Gak, the instructor in charge of the beginner trial. Jean Gak asks whether Yunseal truly intends to learn the Fire Rain sword art and suggests another trial might suit him better. Yunseal politely but firmly insists that the Fire Rain sword sect is exactly what he came for. Seeing that resolve, Jean Gak decides to test him. He demonstrates the sect's power with a blazing sword movement that fills the hall. Then he presents the introductory form and training method of the Fire Rain's 13 forms and tells Yunseal to study it on his own. Yunseal stares blankly at the manual. He admits he has no idea what he is supposed to do with it. Jean Gak is baffled and asks if he is seriously saying he cannot read a sword manual. Yunseal answers without embarrassment that he cannot. He explains that before coming here, he had never learned swordsmanship at all. Jean Gak can hardly believe that someone who has never studied the sword is standing in this trial. Yet, as he recalls Yunseal's earlier feats, he realizes the boy had been fighting by instinct and perception rather than formal sword technique. That makes Yunseal's lack of even basic sword steps seem absurdly out of place. Still, Jean Gak begins to reconsider, remembering Yunseal's extraordinary observational skill and reactions from earlier trials. He also recalls the sharp judgment Yunseal showed when choosing the cave dorm. Jean Gak concludes that if such a blank slate is taught properly, his potential could be enormous. So he changes approach and asks whether Yunseal can at least read the written instructions. Yunseal reads the opening line aloud and begins to grasp the principle. Jean Gak explains that full body relaxation means using the body flexibly in swordsmanship, especially loosening the core and waist. Yunseal tries to imitate the idea, but his first attempt is clumsy enough to make the lesson almost ridiculous. Jean Gak physically adjusts his stance and tells him to calm his mind, relax, and let his body flow together. This time Yunseal immediately corrects himself. Jean Gak is startled that the boy understood and fixed his posture almost as soon as he heard the explanation. Impressed, he declares Yunseal's posture sufficient and decides to teach the Fire Rain 13 forms right away. He begins guiding Yunseal directly through the sword's starting position and movement. Yunseal throws himself into the lesson with fierce concentration. His intensity borders on desperation as he tries to absorb everything at once. Even the training turns chaotic because his eagerness overwhelms the form. Jean Gak notices the exact point where Yunseal's grip and intent begin to sharpen. Once Yunseal starts moving with the sword, his motions suddenly become far more dangerous than a beginner's should be. A red-killing aura begins to seep into the Fire Rain techniques as he practices. Jean Gak realizes with excitement that the boy truly is gifted beyond expectation. He tells Yunseal to imagine a real enemy before him and perform the Fire Rain 13 forms. He explains that this is the exam for entering the intermediate chamber, meant to reveal the sword intent hidden in one's basic movements. Yunseal understands that his chance has come sooner than expected and resolves to prove himself here. He plants his feet and commits to the test. As he imagines an enemy he must defeat, his focus narrows into something personal and violent. In his mind, the opponent takes shape as a sinister swordsman. Yunseal grips his sword as hatred surges to the surface. He unleashes the first Fire Rain technique, but what comes out is not the sect's intended style. Jean Gak immediately senses something is off. The imagined enemy moves, and Yunseal reacts as if facing a real life-and-death threat. He follows with the third technique, turning it into a ruthless killing strike rather than a drifting sword form. Jean Gak is stunned that Yunseal is already producing something recognizable as the Fire Rain 13 forms. He knows the third technique should be soft and airy, like clouds and fog spreading. But in Yunseal's hands, that same technique becomes unnaturally sharp. Its edge is so severe that it feels wrong for the form and yet terrifyingly effective. Jean Gak wonders if Yunseal is consciously rewriting inherited sword basics, something only a master should be able to do. What shocks him most is that every altered motion is saturated with murderous intent, as if Yunseal were striking at the killer of someone precious. He cannot understand what kind of life could have carved such hatred into a boy this young. Yunseal himself senses something strange, as though the flow at his fingertips is changing the sword paths on its own. He suspects the Wild Beast path may be the reason his sword keeps mutating. The more he uses the Fire Rain forms, the more the Wild Beast path heightens his senses and interferes with them. He wants to fuse the two completely, but he realizes that would create an entirely different swordsmanship rather than the Fire Rain 13 forms. So he tries to force himself back toward the original basics, but the hatred in his eyes only deepens instead of fading. The imagined battle escalates until the enemy's presence feels overwhelmingly real. Then Yunseal recognizes the figure at last as the bastard who killed his grandfather. That revelation freezes him for an instant in raw shock. Shock turns immediately into rage. The phantom answers with a devastating Fire Rain strike of its own. It follows with the seventh technique, pressing him with overwhelming force. The killer's sword closes in before Yunseal can fully recover. Yunseal realizes too late how dangerous the counterattack is. He is forced to admit that this enemy is terrifyingly fast. Compared with everyone he has fought before, this imagined killer moves on another level entirely. The phantom raises its blade again, ready to finish him. Yunseal charges straight in rather than retreating, refusing to be overwhelmed. He decides he cannot give the enemy any room to dodge or control the pace. His grip tightens as he abandons restraint. He resolves to pour every remaining technique into a single desperate burst. Blue sword energy erupts from him in a final all-out release against the red killing force. The clash reaches the enemy's blade at point-blank range. The murderous figure remains standing within the red storm, leaving the outcome of Yunseal's desperate strike unresolved. The swordsman is jolted by a sudden surge of murderous pressure, as if the fight has crossed from training into real danger. For an instant, the threat feels overwhelming enough to blot out everything except raw violence. He braces under that killing aura, facing an opponent who seems ready to strike without restraint. The tension breaks with blood hitting the floor, proof that the clash has already drawn a real price. Exhausted and drenched in sweat, the black-clad trainee struggles to keep hold of his sword after the brutal exchange. His grip finally loosens, and the weapon slips from his hand. Watching him, the red-robed instructor concludes that he lost the duel, but the instructor immediately revises that judgment. Instead of failure, he declares that the trainee has actually passed, leaving the battered swordsman stunned. He explains that the elementary chamber does not judge victory itself, but whether a student understands the sword and can use the Fire Rain 13 forms in a real fight. To emphasize the point, the instructor casually sends the fallen sword spinning through the air. The trainee catches it, and the instructor confirms that his performance proved the required understanding. The sword is returned to him as recognition rather than a weapon taken from a loser. The instructor praises his execution of the Fire Rain 13 forms and orders him to proceed to the intermediate chamber. The trainee thinks back on instructor Jean Gak, who patiently taught him swordsmanship from nothing, step by step. With sincere gratitude, he bows and thanks his teacher for everything. The instructor accepts the respect warmly, and urges him to keep pushing himself even harder from here on. Then his tone turns more serious. He warns that the trainee's sword carries unusually strong killing intent and that he must not let that intent control him. The warning leaves the trainee quietly unsettled. As the trainee departs, the instructor realizes the rumors were true. The boy really did learn the wild beast path in only a fortnight. He tries to explain it away as mere talent, but the speed of the boy's progress still feels abnormal. Seeing the boy move on to the intermediate hall far sooner than expected, the instructor admits his earlier doubts were wrong. He becomes convinced that the boy can keep advancing, and opens the way forward with new certainty. The trainee steps through the doors into the next stage of testing. The instructor of the intermediate chamber comes into view. Inside, the new instructor addresses the newcomer coldly in front of the seated students, acting as though he is an intruder. Cheon Wongang, the intermediate trial instructor, dismisses him at once and says there is no room left, while privately deciding that Byunseal will end up fixated on this boy. The place is formally identified as the intermediate hall. The trainee stands his ground instead of leaving. The instructor and students stare at him in silence, waiting for an explanation. Cheon Wongang assumes the boy only barely cleared the beginner hall and mocks him as someone too untalented to belong here if it took more than 20 days to learn the Fire Rain sword art. The trainee calmly explains that his delay came from spending the first 15 days in Langya Hall instead. The instructor interprets that as proof he ran away from learning the Beast Dao and sneers at him even more. Still, he grudgingly allows the boy to sit in, while warning that he likely will not keep up. He begins the lesson by introducing the Fire Rain Thunderclap sword as an art built on swift movement. He warns that without proper sword skill, such speed will only injure the user, and that like the earlier Fire Rain forms, it is difficult to apply in a real fight. He adds that this stage is still only part of the fundamentals, so he will judge technique rather than simple winning or losing. To demonstrate, he calls Bayak Hansong forward and orders him to choose an opponent for a duel. Hansong asks whether he may challenge absolutely anyone, and receives permission. He immediately points to the newcomer, choosing him as his opponent. The trainee looks up, realizing he has been singled out. When the instructor hesitates, Hansong reminds him that he was told he could pick anyone. Cheon Wongang calls Hansong reckless for targeting someone fresh from the beginner hall and tells him to choose another opponent. The trainee cuts in and says he will do it. He goes further and formally accepts the duel himself, surprising both challenger and instructor. He explains that he learned from instructor Jean in the beginner hall and believes crossing swords with others is the fastest way for him to improve. The instructor suspects the boy is just trying to protect his pride with beginner-level skills. After a moment of irritation, he decides to allow it. He frames the duel as a test of self-knowledge and says the boy's ability will determine whether he deserves to reach the advanced hall. Hansong, meanwhile, sees the match as an opportunity to kill the newcomer and secure his own standing among the many prodigies. The two face each other in the center of the hall before the watching students. Hansong acknowledges the boy's nerve, but treats it as foolish bravado. He lectures that spirit alone cannot keep someone alive in the martial world. Without further warning, Hansong launches a savage opening strike with his wooden sword. The trainee slips inside the attack instead of meeting it head-on. Hansong is delighted rather than alarmed, taking the evasion as proof he can toy with his opponent. He presses down with another heavy blow, forcing the trainee to defend at close range. The trainee barely catches the strike, his face tight with effort. Feeling the awkward resistance through the clash, Hansong concludes with contempt that the boy truly is a beginner. Laughing, he unleashes the Fire Rain Thunderclap sword in earnest to overwhelm him. Golden arcs of rapid sword force fill the space as Hansong drives the technique forward. He keeps laughing, convinced the match is already decided, but the trainee threads through every attack, and Hansong realizes his opponent is avoiding the barrage completely. For the first time, Hansong starts to panic. From the sidelines, Cheon Woongang dismisses Han Song's swordsmanship as crude and unimpressive. At the same time, he begins to reassess the newcomer. He realizes the boy is not surviving through raw speed, but through movements so precise they border on prediction, and suspects the Beast Dao may be involved. He recalls that the Beast Dao is publicly treated as a basic art of Langyahal. In truth, however, it is a supreme martial art mastered only by seasoned experts. That makes the idea absurd, because no prodigy should be able to master it in 15 days. Cheon Woongang steps forward mentally, paying much closer attention to the duel. He reminds the trainee that dodging alone cannot earn a passing evaluation, because this test is about swordsmanship, not just reflexes and insight. The trainee plants his foot and changes his rhythm. He finally reaches out to engage Han Song's weapon directly. His expression settles into calm focus as he commits to a counter. Red sword force erupts from his movement as he turns defense into attack. The watching students recognize the pattern in shock as fire rain sword art. Han Song scoffs at first, assuming it is merely a familiar move he can crush. But Byun-seol, watching closely, realizes the technique only resembles fire rain on the surface and is actually altered in a subtle, dangerous way. Han Song remains arrogant, convinced he can handle it effortlessly. That confidence breaks the instant the exchange turns against him. He is startled by the feel of the counter, and cannot understand what just happened. The trainee's modified fire rain sequence tears through Han Song's offense, and exposes him completely. Han Song starts wondering whether the boy had been hiding his true skill all along and deliberately reshaped fire rain to mock him and attract the instructor's attention. Desperate not to lose his chance at advancement, he decides to end the fight with a real killing move. His expression hardens with murderous resolve. He invokes the Asura sword method, declaring that he alone will be the one to rise to the advanced hall. Han Song unleashes blood-breaking strike, a lethal technique from the Asura sword sect, turning the spar into attempted murder. Cheon Woongang immediately recognizes it as a killing move and notes that he never restricted the duel to fire rain techniques alone. But even as he says that, he is shaken by what the trainee is about to do in response. He notices that the boy's footing remains perfectly stable despite the life-or-death pressure closing around him. At last, the instructor accepts the truth that the trainee really did learn the Beast Dao. Han Song keeps attacking wildly, praising the boy's evasions even as he tries to corner and kill him. He declares that the next strike will finish everything. Cheon Woongang suddenly recognizes the counter forming and is jolted in alarm. A decisive flash cuts through the chaos. The trainee answers with blood wind annihilates the moon, a killing strike from the Asura sword method itself. His grip remains exact and controlled as the counter lands. The collision explodes in a burst of force. The students recoil in shock, realizing the duel has gone far beyond a lesson. Even Cheon Woongang is left staring, momentarily speechless. Before Han Song can recover, the trainee follows with the 13th move of the fire rain sword art, beginningless extremes martial art. Han Song is struck hard enough to spit blood, his confidence shattered. His body is hurled away while the trainee remains standing in control of the exchange. The trainee lowers his sword and watches the result without triumph. Around them, the other students stare in disbelief at what they have just witnessed. As Han Song collapses in a pool of blood, the hall begins to wonder whether he has been killed. A rack of practice weapons rattles as the room reacts to the violence. The trainee calmly returns his weapon, while the instructor stands over the fallen boy in the background. Cheon Woongang judges that Han Song is dead, struck precisely in the Danjong vital point. The body lies motionless, making the verdict seem final. The instructor asks the trainee whether he was originally a disciple of the Nanjia Pavilion. When the trainee denies it, Cheon Woongang presses further, asking if he is claiming to have mastered the beast sword in only half a month, and the boy answers that he has learned only the basics. That answer sounds like a lie to the instructor, who mocks the Nanjia Pavilion for teaching deceit before swordsmanship. He cuts off any further explanation and orders the supposed corpse removed immediately. The surrounding students protest in outrage that a simple spar turned into murder and demand punishment. Cheon Woongang silences them by declaring that this hall is no safe classroom, but a living hell where anyone who uses a killing technique must be ready to die by counterattack. With that, he coldly announces that the test will continue as if nothing unusual happened. Another duel begins in the hall under that brutal rule. The other students try to steady themselves and resume their places despite the shock. Han Song remains on the floor, bloodied and unattended. Some students react with fear, others with excitement, revealing how warped the atmosphere of the hall already is. A small group finally gathers around the fallen Han Song while the instructor keeps his distance. Cheon Woongang formally declares that Han Song's group has failed the test and orders them to leave and find another martial hall. They beg for another chance, arguing that it was only one test, but he refuses outright. He explains that physical potential may have carried them through the beginner hall, but mastering the wall sword requires a rare genius who can surpass personal limits through relentless effort. He states bluntly that they failed because they lack that quality. Then he dismisses them without sympathy. The rejected students begin to shuffle away. Cheon Woongang suddenly notices that one person has not moved. The trainee is still standing in the center of the hall, facing him directly. When asked why he remains, the trainee innocently asks whether he must leave too. Cheon Woongang clarifies that the trainee won the duel and passed the test, so he should proceed to the advanced hall. The trainee refuses, saying that if passing means moving up immediately, he would rather stay here. Puzzled, the instructor asks why he would choose that. The answer hangs over the very sign of the intermediate hall. The trainee explains that he has only learned the wall 13 forms so far, and since he has not yet learned anything from the intermediate hall, he cannot honestly move on. Cheon Wongang is taken aback by the blunt sincerity of that answer. He finally relents and agrees to teach the boy the wall biocrow sword, the art that follows the wall 13 forms. But he warns that he despises students who rely on flashy tricks to impress others, and makes clear that he will be watching for any trace of outside sword styles. He threatens that if he catches the boy using anything other than the wall 13 forms, he will cut off his head on the spot. 4 days later, that threat still lingers in the instructor's mind. As he watches the trainee train, he admits to himself that the boy's fundamentals had been almost non-existent when he started teaching him. Yet the trainee now moves with astonishing force and precision, making it hard to believe he only recently began learning the sword. Cheon Wongang can no longer hide his growing admiration. He sees that the boy throws his entire life into every instant of training, as if failure in martial arts would mean death itself. At last, the instructor understands how the trainee could master the beast sword in only half a month. The boy drives forward with the wall biocrow sword's extreme line lightning bolt, showing explosive progress under his new training. Someone suddenly shouts for him to stop, interrupting the strike before it can fully land. The instructor stops the sparring and acknowledges that the disciple has finally grasped the essence of the wall biocrow sword, even if the disciple still feels uncertain. He explains that the style relies on rapid body rotation to switch forms, yet its movements are so impractical in ordinary combat that it would normally get its user killed. Even so, the instructor sees that something unusual is happening. He points out that the disciple is forcing every form into real combat as if each strike were meant to kill, and the disciple argues that killing is what swordsmanship is for. The instructor answers that demonic martial arts are born from killing intent, but the wild forest abandoned the killing sword to pursue a higher state beyond mere slaughter. He warns that if the murderous intent in the disciple's mind is not erased, the art being forged will only destroy its own user. The disciple realizes this teaching matches what instructor Jin Gak once said. The instructor admits he too once lived by a killing sword, cutting down everything before him without hesitation. That path ruined his standing, his honor, and even degraded his martial arts. He says the killing sword only seems to open the way upward, when in truth it blocks the endless path ahead, so the disciple must abandon murderous intent from now on. Addressing Seo La, he adds that the lives of swordsmen are always stained by sorrow and misfortune. He explains that this is why people of the martial world hate speaking of their pasts. Their history is something they would rather bury than revisit. The disciple, shaken by the confession, asks why he is revealing this at all. He reminds the disciple that he already said he once harbored a killing sword himself. Then he asks the disciple's name directly. The disciple introduces himself as Bu Yunseal. The instructor realizes that the survivor Jin Gak mentioned from the second hall was Bu Yunseal. He immediately tells Yunseal that this means a serious problem remains. Yunseal asks what that problem is. The instructor bluntly says Yunseal has no real martial foundation at all. He explains that Yunseal's rivals are prodigies trained since childhood, and once they begin serious WoW sword study, the gap will only grow wider. To close that gap, Yunseal must first learn a superior art quickly and build the missing foundation before returning to WoW sword arts. He makes his decision and prepares to offer that alternative path himself. He declares that he will pass on the Jianro Muzang martial art he personally created. But he immediately reveals the cost. He failed while learning it, and the nerves in his fingers were severed. He stresses that it is a dangerously destructive sword style that could even leave Yunseal unable to use both arms. Instead of safely entering the advanced hall, Yunseal could end up crippled, and he demands to know whether that risk is still acceptable. For the sake of revenge, Yunseal makes the decision without hesitation. Yunseal accepts the offer with gratitude, driven by a colder purpose than simple advancement. A month passes as Yunseal studies Jianamasang and prepares to leave the intermediate hall. Even the head instructor considers that pace fast, though it still took longer than Yunseal expected. After mastering the beginner hall's basics and the intermediate hall's advanced sword arts, Yunseal moves on again. Yunseal enters the senior hall, where the atmosphere and the trainees themselves feel markedly different. The move places Yunseal among a far more serious class of disciples. The senior hall's elderly instructor studies the newcomer with interest. Yunseal immediately senses that even the air in this hall carries a different weight. The other trainees also seem sharper and more composed than those in the intermediate hall. Yunseal senses a distinct pressure from them, unlike anything felt before. The contempt once directed at Yunseal is gone, likely because killing Bayak Hanseong has changed how the others see this newcomer. Yunseal reflects bitterly that men who clean corpses are mocked, while those who kill are admired. The senior instructor welcomes Yunseal, says he has heard of the newcomer, and invites a seat as the lesson begins. Because of the new arrival, he restarts his explanation of the Song of Huayu Sword and its 7 teachings. He begins laying out the principles of bodily power, balance, posture, and restraint that underpin the style. Yunseal realizes these teachings only make sense now because of the advanced sword arts already learned in the intermediate hall. When the lecture ends, the instructor singles Yunseal out and asks for a private moment. Yunseal follows, unsure what is coming next. The instructor leads Yunseal into the garden for a direct test. He explains that true swordsmanship reaches a state where one can defeat an armed opponent even without holding a blade. To demonstrate, he casually takes hold of a bamboo branch as if it were enough. In the next instant, That branch becomes a deadly weapon in his hands, and Yunseal is forced to evade. He asks how Yunseal would use swordsmanship if attacked suddenly while unarmed. The question catches Yunseal off guard because the attack is already real. The instructor adds that the other senior trainees have already mastered the first Yu technique and moved into sword discourse, so Yunseal will be expelled if unable to keep up. He warns that failure to understand his question now will mean immediate rejection from the senior hall. Pressed under the attack, Yunseal begins searching for an answer in motion rather than words. A flash of insight arrives as Yunseal reads the attack at the last possible moment. Yunseal decides that if no sword is in hand, then the opponent's blade will become the sword to use. That answer becomes intent as Yunseal reaches toward the attacking weapon itself. The instructor is startled when Yunseal acts on the idea instead of merely stating it. He criticizes the move as rash, but he is clearly testing whether the judgment can still bear fruit. Yunseal realizes too late that the instructor has already slipped behind the line of thought and movement being followed. The instructor's footwork proves impossible to predict, and Yunseal cannot even track where he will evade next. Yunseal admits inwardly that catching him was already unlikely. What truly shocks Yunseal is being unable to follow the instructor's movements at all. Knowing expulsion is at stake, Yunseal resolves to show something here no matter the cost. Yunseal pushes beastly perception to its limit, trying to read the direction of the instructor's movement. At last the instructor's path becomes visible for a single instant. Yunseal reaches out for that one opening. The hand closes on the bamboo branch at the crucial moment. Using that contact, Yunseal is still blasted away by the instructor's overwhelming force. Yunseal crashes to the ground, battered and thrown back despite the attempt. Even in pain, Yunseal forces himself upright. The instructor grabs Yunseal by the shoulder and studies the result. Then, laughing with satisfaction, he declares that Yunseal has passed. Yunseal is stunned, unable to understand how passing is possible without landing a single hit. The instructor explains that from tomorrow Yunseal will begin learning Haiyan and must arrive before dawn ahead of everyone else. Yunseal accepts the order immediately. The two part ways in the garden, the test complete. Left alone, the instructor looks at the bamboo branch with renewed interest. A small detail on the branch confirms what he sensed in Yunseal's response. He smiles, having seen enough to judge the disciple's nature. He concludes that even as a wolf cub, Yunseal is still unmistakably a wolf. That realization only deepens his interest. He looks forward to what Yunseal will become. Later, Yunseal considers the day's lesson over. Though rest or cultivation would be sensible, Yunseal decides to probe the hell path further instead. Remembering the second hall, Yunseal knows violence can erupt at any time in this place. Soon enough, approaching footsteps confirm that trouble has come looking again. Yunseal calmly prepares to assess the threat. By the sound alone, Yunseal counts multiple pursuers before they appear. The count reaches 5. 5 senior trainees step out and call Yunseal by name. Their leader accuses Yunseal of growing arrogant since the intermediate hall, and says that because Yunseal killed first before, there is no right to complain about unfair retaliation. He boasts that the 5 of them were already famed as the 5 peak swords before entering this place and warns Yunseal to be ready. Yunseal realizes the threat is not limited to the 5 in front. There is one more presence hidden behind them. Before the group can properly surround Yunseal, the hidden 6th attacker lunges in. The ambusher is cut down instantly. A red-haired swordsman appears behind the fallen man, having struck him down in a single blow. The remaining attackers freeze in shock as their own side loses a man first. None of them can understand why this new arrival attacked one of their own. The red-haired man is identified as Seo Jinha. He addresses Yunseal directly, making it clear he came for Yunseal rather than the others. Seo Jinha says they need to talk. The others nervously ask why he is here at all. Seo Jinha tells them to get lost because he has no business with losers. His killing aura alone is enough to make them falter. Unable to challenge him, they retreat while vowing revenge later. Yunseal notes that Seo Jinha is genuinely strong. Seo Jinha dismisses the fleeing group as cowards and turns his attention fully to Yunseal. His eyes sharpen with dangerous intent as he studies Yunseal. He decides to ask Yunseal something directly. Pointing his sword at Yunseal, he demands to know whose side Yunseal is on. The question catches Yunseal completely off guard. The next day in class, the instructor explains that learning the first technique of the fire rain sword is not the same as truly making it one's own, and he now wants to see what each disciple has created from it. He calls Yunseal first. Then he orders Yunseal to demonstrate. Yunseal steps forward with sword in hand. After a breath to settle, Yunseal prepares the technique. At the last moment, Yunseal's expression hardens with a different resolve. Instead of merely repeating the fire rain sword's first technique, Yunseal unleashes a far more aggressive variation shaped by personal killing intent. The strike erupts across the hall with overwhelming force. When the motion ends, Yunseal stands alone amid the marks carved by the technique. The instructor judges it as grounded and precise, but also notes that Yunseal has transformed it into something saturated with murderous intent. He sends Yunseal back and calls for the next demonstration. The next disciple is Seo Jinha. As Seo Jinha passes by, the two stand back to back in open tension. Yunseal senses that the earlier question was not random after all. Seo Jinha begins his own technique, his aura turning colder and sharper than before. He addresses Yunseal in his mind while demonstrating. Rather than simply showing the fire rain sword's first technique, Seo Jinha reveals a move that would have countered Yunseal's attack directly. His demonstration makes that threat unmistakable. The technique is not just a display of skill but a deliberate message aimed at Yunseal. Yunseal realizes Seo Jinha is warning rather than challenging blindly and demands to know what he meant by asking whose side Yunseal is on. Seo Jinha snaps back, refusing to let Yunseal pretend ignorance. His words force Yunseal to confront the possibility that not everyone here seeks the same future within the demonic sect. Yunseal reflects that while learning the arts of the 10 demonic sects is an extraordinary chance, the system surrounding that chance is deeply rotten. That realization makes the opportunity itself feel like a trap set to catch something hidden. Yunseal likens it to baited bamboo spikes meant to seize prey. A new suspicion forms that there may be a spy inside this place. But after reading Seo Jinha's face and tone, Yunseal concludes he is not lying. Seo Jinha says the spy is not Yunseal after all, though he sounds annoyed to lose the excuse for a fight. He warns Yunseal to stop stepping out of line. Then he adds that if Yunseal keeps provoking him, he will kill Yunseal too. With that threat hanging between them, the two separate. Yunseal is left turning over the idea of a spy and realizing that far more is happening beneath the surface than expected. Even so, Yunseal decides there is no point dwelling on hidden schemes after having focused only on the Wandering Beast Pavilion and Fire Rain Sword sect arts. What matters now is continuing to sharpen strength for the fights ahead. Yunseal concludes that spy or demonic martial artist, anyone who stands in the way is simply another opponent to defeat. A grim warning hangs over the island as the next ordeal is about to begin. Life still seems ordinary for the weak and small, just before the trial turns ruthless. That fragile calm is broken in an instant, hinting that survival will depend on being seized first or devoured. Above the training grounds, ominous signs gather over the isolated place where the disciples are being tested. The instructors announce that the period of preparation is over. An elder acknowledges that studying rules and doctrine felt tedious to many of the trainees. He insists that true martial artists must understand principles as deeply as they understand combat, because knowledge and execution are not the same thing. He frames everything they have learned as only the first foundation for entering the Mirim world. With the lesson concluded, he turns to what comes next. A bell signals the start of the real test, and the trainees are sent off with only a cold wish for luck. The disciples are confused by the sudden signal and sense that something serious has changed. They are ordered to head to the stone mountain at the island's center immediately. The mountain becomes the stage for the next phase of the trial. All of the remaining candidates gather before the examiner's intense formation. The overseers confirm that every surviving trainee has arrived. Among the crowd, one quiet disciple stays alert and uneasy. The chief examiner pauses just long enough to sharpen everyone's dread. He announces that they are skipping ahead to the third trial. The trainees are stunned, realizing the sequence has changed without explanation. One disciple understands that the earlier fight to the death was already the second trial, though the rest had not grasped it. The examiners declare that all caves will soon be sealed and that no one may return to their quarters until 10 demon masters are chosen. The crowd reacts with alarm as the scale of the trial begins to sink in. Someone dares to ask how those 10 positions will be decided. The examiner mocks them for failing to understand the obvious nature of the demon palace. He reveals the rule with brutal clarity. They are to kill one another. Only when the number of survivors is reduced to 10 will the trial end. Shock spreads through the trainees as the order becomes real. At least one disciple, however, responds not with fear but with quiet interest. The examiner tells them they may hide or flee if they wish, but only temporarily. He adds that the safe zones will steadily shrink over time, forcing everyone into confrontation. Anyone trapped in forbidden areas will be hunted down by killer demons. The quiet disciple immediately senses that those enforcers carry terrifying killing intent. She judges them to be monsters of martial skill, far beyond ordinary trainees. Another trainee asks whether the killer demons themselves can be attacked. The examiner welcomes that ambition instead of discouraging it. He confirms that the killer demons may indeed be fought and even killed. Anyone who kills one instantly earns a place among the 10 demon masters. That reward makes the choice clear for some. Hunting one demon may be easier than slaughtering nearly everyone else. The examiner openly encourages alliances, betrayals, and ambushes as valid paths to victory. He pushes them further, declaring that killing by any means is the only road forward. In his eyes, murder itself is the qualification for becoming a demon master. The mountain and its many caves become a deadly maze where the hunt will unfold. The long-haired disciple moves at once, determined to avoid being trapped in the initial chaos. She remembers that her strength has already drawn too much attention from the other trainees. If she lingers, she knows she will likely be swarmed by a group attack. She decides her first priority is to reach a place where she can disappear and control the battlefield. A lonely hut in the forest becomes her chosen refuge. She arrives at speed, still ahead of the worst of the bloodshed. Before settling in, she notices that the ground around the hut feels strangely different. She tests the earth and realizes there is something unusual beneath the surface. Her attention sharpens as she pieces together what the place was prepared for. At that moment, she senses several people rushing toward her position. A panicked young trainee bursts in, begging for help and claiming others are trying to kill him. She keeps her weapon ready and studies him without lowering her guard. He offers repayment for protection, and she quickly judges that his desperation is not entirely fake. Still, she watches him closely for any sign of deceit. His injuries appear genuine, suggesting he really has been hunted. She also senses 3 pursuers closing in behind him, and wonders whether they are working together. She would rather avoid the conflict, but letting him expose her hiding place would be worse. The boy waits anxiously for her decision, trying to look harmless. Instead of answering, she acts on her discovery beneath the hut. A concealed mechanism opens a hidden space in the ground. She reveals that the area was prepared as a buried shelter. The pursuers arrive too late and are baffled when both targets vanish from sight. Frustrated, they vow to kill the boy and rush off to continue the search. Their footsteps fade as they abandon the spot. The hut stands quiet again, hiding the secret beneath it. Once the danger passes, she emerges from the underground refuge. The rescued boy climbs out after her, relieved and breathless. He thanks her enthusiastically for saving his life. She realizes the hidden shelter was likely prepared by Mr. Sa, and that it served a purpose beyond simple concealment. While buried in the earth, she discovered that her wild beast path could sense vibrations far more widely than before. She learned to read the push of footsteps through the ground. She also learned to distinguish the movement of drawn blades and attacks through those same vibrations. The world around her becomes legible without sight, as if the earth itself is telling her everything. She understands that this new sensory method was likely the lesson Mr. Sa intended her to grasp. The rescued boy watches her with growing fascination while she quietly processes her breakthrough. She tests the new awareness again, confirming its precision. Satisfied, she prepares to move on. The boy hurriedly introduces himself as GM Kialiang of the Blood Sect and asks for her name. She ignores the question and starts to leave, but he refuses to be left behind. He explains that he fled into the forest the moment the third trial began and was chased relentlessly. Using her earlier help as proof of trust, he asks to join her. She gives no clear answer, only a silent glance ahead. He takes her silence as acceptance and happily falls in beside her. His cheerful expression lingers a little too easily for someone who was supposedly terrified moments ago. A violent clash erupts somewhere nearby, drawing their attention. She places a hand to the ground and reads the disturbance through the earth. She determines that a battle is underway and decides they must change course, while he marvels at her ability and asks to learn it. She offers only a vague promise and keeps moving, revealing nothing more. As they travel, the thought of revenge resurfaces in her with renewed force. The memory of her master's death and her own hatred rises to the surface again. That old wound makes the nearby battlefield personally significant. She recognizes in it the same kind of hatred that drives her, and the boy notices her sudden change. She abruptly decides they are no longer avoiding the fight but heading straight into it. They approach carefully and find a wounded man surrounded by assassins in the forest. One assassin launches a concealed strike from above, but she intercepts it before it lands. Her sudden intervention shocks the attackers and saves the surrounded man from a killing blow. The assassin is stunned that his concealment technique was read so easily and assumes she must be an assassin too. She answers with action instead of explanation. In a single decisive slash, she cuts him down before he can recover. She realizes how dangerous the concealment art would have been if she had not learned to read vibrations through the wild beast path. The rescued boy, meanwhile, is distracted by the bloodshed rather than the danger. She notes that the surrounding fight is still ongoing and not yet resolved. Her attention fixes on the wounded survivor at the center of the ambush. She wonders whether helping him defeat the assassins will let her understand what revenge feels like once fulfilled. The wounded man insists the fight is nearly over and tries to dismiss her help. He tells the last assassin he will grant him a quick death out of respect for being the final one left. Before he can finish, she cuts into the exchange and forces her way into the duel. The assassin is horrified to discover there are more enemies interfering than he expected. The wounded man reacts sharply, his hidden ferocity surfacing as he turns on the new threat. Another assassin tries to exploit the confusion, but the battlefield has already shifted against them. One of the assassins is struck and realizes too late that the balance has broken. She presses forward through the chaos, cutting down anyone who stands between her and the answer she wants. Even while attacking, she struggles to understand the wounded man's state of mind. When she demands to know what revenge feels like, the man is momentarily stunned by the question itself. Blood covers her as she stares at him with desperate intensity, making clear that this is not a casual curiosity. She kills another assassin in front of him, trying to force an answer through shared violence. The man's body and expression shift into something monstrous as his own revenge reaches its climax. He laughs through the blood, intoxicated by the moment. At last he declares that he has obtained his revenge. The forest falls quiet around the corpses as the slaughter ends. From a distance, the boy timidly asks whether it is finally over. She remains fixed on the Avenger, still trying to read what revenge has done to him. The boy praises her skill, but his tone carries a new edge. He suddenly warns that she should never have relaxed around him. In the next instant, he reveals his true nature and attacks her from behind with a hidden dagger. She is caught by surprise for the first time and realizes the harmless act was a lie. He boasts that he understood her strength all along and still chose to strike only after she lowered her guard. He explains that he had recognized from the beginning that she was carrying concealed weapons under her clothes. Her rigid movements had exposed the hidden blades to him long before now. He kept close not out of gratitude, but because he wanted to see how a deceiver like her would behave. He claims he studied her tricks so he could use that knowledge later for himself. He cannot believe she saw through him anyway, because he thought his performance had been flawless. He hurls a storm of hidden weapons at her and insists his deception was perfect. Even wounded, she realizes he may be anticipating her reactions and begins recalculating how to fight him. She reads the pattern of his attack and understands his betrayal truly began the moment they first hit underground together. That was when she noticed the arsenal concealed on his body. His stiff posture had betrayed the weight and placement of those hidden weapons. She had tolerated his company only because she wanted to see what he would eventually do. Watching his attempt to deceive her was, to her, another lesson worth learning. He refuses to accept that she understood him from the start. In rage, he unleashes his hidden blades and insists his acting could not have failed. She slips through the barrage, bloodied but composed. He finally grasps that she may have been reading his intentions the entire time, and wonders if she can predict his every move. The duel turns into a contest between his concealed weapons and her ability to perceive and anticipate through the wild beast path. One of his attacks lands and tears into him instead, leaving him suddenly exposed and reeling. She closes the distance while he staggers, his confidence collapsing with his blood. She reminds him that hidden weapons mean nothing once the opponent has already seen through them. Holding one of his own blades beside her bloodstained face, she makes clear that his deception has failed, and the fight now belongs to her. A wounded trainee realizes with terror that someone he thought finished is still standing before him. He turns toward the blood-soaked swordsman, who advances with a calm that makes the situation feel even more hopeless. Despite being splattered with blood, the long-haired fighter remains cold and unreadable, already in control of the aftermath. He moves first again, launching another decisive strike before his opponent can recover. Using a hidden blade and precise swordwork, he cuts through the man's last attempt to fight back. The blow tears through the trainee's neck and ends the duel outright. The dying man can only scream in disbelief as his killer passes him. The victor stays on his feet, while the other collapses behind him in a spray of blood. He admits to himself that the fight was dangerous, and that prior knowledge of the man's concealed weapons is what saved him. Even after winning, he stays alert, sensing that the danger around him is far from over. He looks down at the corpse and the discarded hidden weapon, confirming the kill. Watching the life leave the man's eyes, he recognizes the same desperate attachment to survival he has seen in every dying person. He turns away without sentiment, already thinking ahead to the next threat. The forest path around him is littered with bodies, showing he has survived a brutal culling. Yet one fallen trainee catches his attention because something about him feels different from the others. That thought pulls him back to the question that has driven him through all this killing. He remembers wondering whether revenge would finally let him smile the way the dead sometimes do at the end. The memory of a corpse's faint smile lingers in his mind as an answer he still cannot grasp. He forces a small smile himself, testing whether vengeance has brought him any peace. Instead of peace, he reaches for another weapon, preparing to keep moving. He takes up a sheathed sword from the fallen and arms himself more fully. As he leaves the battlefield, someone watching from afar recognizes him and takes interest. A hidden observer withdraws into the shadows to report what he has seen. The watcher disappears completely, carrying news of the swordsman's performance. From concealment, the observer judges that the trainee has been killing assassins with only the basic forms of the fire-rained sword sect. He acknowledges the boy's talent but decides talent alone will not be enough on Hell Island. His conclusion is harsh. Unless the trainee grows much stronger, he will die here. Back on the ground, the long-haired fighter hears pursuit closing in behind him. A group of trainees spots that he is alone and orders an immediate chase, eager to overwhelm him by numbers. They rush after him with flexible bladed weapons, trying to cut him off in the open. He deflects one incoming strike, but the pressure from multiple attackers keeps building. The barrage continues from several angles, forcing him to give ground. One slash gets through and wounds him, proving he cannot keep trading blows like this. He realizes the pursuers will never stop and that staying in this fight will only get him killed. From above the battlefield, he urgently searches for any terrain that can change the odds. Far above, two senior figures watch the island from a cliff as if the slaughter below is just an experiment. The older man asks for an update, and his subordinate reports that only 41 of the original 86 trainees remain alive. The old man is intrigued that so many are still alive after 3 days. Below, the long-haired trainee keeps parrying while the overseers continue their detached assessment. The old man decides the survivors are skilled enough now to deserve a harsher test. He orders the map brought to him so he can alter the trial directly. As the command is carried out, the chase below continues without pause. One pursuer lunges in confidently, certain he has finally cornered the fugitive, but the long-haired trainee catches the attack at the last instant and turns the opening against them. He breaks away again, and the frustrated group realizes he has escaped their grasp once more. While running, he concludes that fighting these weapons in open ground is a losing proposition. He decides his first priority is to change the battlefield itself. At the cliff, the old overseer studies the map and chooses where to tighten the trial. The trainee senses that the situation is about to become even worse, though he does not yet know why. The overseer orders the killer demons in the fire-rained sword sect area to be released. That decision shifts the danger from trainee against trainee to something far more lethal. Unaware of the new threat, the long-haired swordsman races up the steps toward the fire-rained sword sect building. A trail of blood marks his path, showing how hard the pursuit has already worn him down. The pursuers follow him inside, still armed and confident that numbers will finish the job. They enter the sect hall after him, believing he has trapped himself. Inside, the stillness of the building briefly hides the ambush he is setting. As they spread through the corridor, they assume he is cornered and cannot escape. One of them smugly starts to say that no matter how far he runs, he is finished. He suddenly senses danger too late as the hunted boy appears behind the group. The long-haired trainee attacks from the rear, using the corridor to reverse the hunt. The pursuers realize they have not fooled him at all and that he deliberately led them here. He moves through the narrow hall with practiced precision, turning the confined space into his advantage. He slips around their shortened swings and positions himself where their weapons interfere with each other. His blade meets theirs in tight, efficient exchanges that deny them room to unleash full power. One attacker overcommits and leaves himself exposed in the cramped corridor. The group finally understands that he can read the trajectories of their techniques and anticipate them. He stays silent, letting their confusion deepen while he keeps control of the rhythm. A sweeping counterattack forces the front line back and breaks their formation. One trainee is cut down, and the others are shaken by how quickly the trap is working. The long-haired fighter presses forward before they can regroup, refusing to let panic settle into discipline. Another pursuer tries to answer with a whip blade strike from behind the line. He suddenly realizes the corridor is too crowded for their own weapons to be used safely. The swordsman seizes that hesitation and closes the distance again. His slash lands before the man can recover, drawing another scream through the hall. The survivors finally grasp that he brought them here on purpose to dismantle them one by one. He confirms their fear in his own mind. In an enclosed space, their attacks must shorten, weaken, and become predictable. He adds one more judgment that seals their fate. These opponents are not skilled enough to overcome that disadvantage. With the corridor now stained with blood, he believes he truly has a chance if he keeps isolating them. The remaining trainees lash out desperately, trying to overwhelm him before the trap closes completely. One strike smashes into the wall, splintering the corridor and sending debris flying. He notices the ricochet and instantly understands a new danger in the environment. A rebounding whip blade crashes through the structure and turns the corridor itself into a hazard. He is knocked into the wreckage and curses himself for not anticipating how the weapon would bounce in such a tight space. The others try to retreat from the corridor at once, realizing the trap can kill them too. One of them is abruptly stopped mid-escape by a force he does not understand. He looks up in confusion as his movement is halted from above. A terrifying figure appears and coldly demands to know why they are running away. The newcomer mocks their fear, making it clear that retreat is forbidden. The trainees immediately recognize him as their captain and try to justify themselves. Before the excuse can finish, he cuts them down for their cowardice. He kills his own subordinates without hesitation, proving he is more dangerous than the boy they were chasing. He dismisses the dead as worthless failures who never even reached the advanced chamber. From cover, the long-haired trainee studies this new enemy instead of rushing in blindly. He steps out and asks whether this man is the group's leader. The captain praises his skill and identifies the technique the boy used as belonging to the fire-rained sword. He introduces himself as Wu Munching and casually asks for the boy's name, treating the fight like a conversation. The corridor falls quiet around the bodies as the two finally face each other directly. The long-haired trainee starts to answer, still trying to read the man's intentions. Munching laughs off the idea of learning the name of someone he expects to kill soon. He attacks in the middle of his taunt, showing he has no interest in fair exchanges. The sudden strike nearly catches the boy off guard, and he realizes this opponent is operating on another level. Munching's weapon tears through the surroundings with brute force, shattering wood as if it were nothing. He reveals that the advanced chamber of the fire-rained sword sect teaches only one defensive method, exposing knowledge the boy should not expect an enemy to have. The long-haired trainee is startled that Munching even knows about Shining Mystique, the sect's defensive art. That knowledge makes him suspect Munching has access to information far beyond an ordinary trainee. Munching mocks him for thinking in the middle of battle and attacks again before he can sort it out. He drives forward with a vicious grin, enjoying the pressure he is putting on his opponent. The long-haired trainee is forced into a desperate retreat as Munching's strikes rip through the hall. He realizes this man is not relying on terrain or finesse at all, but simply destroying every obstacle in front of him. That means the enclosed space that helped against weaker foes offers no safety against Munching. Munching crashes into him with overwhelming force and blows through his guard. The boy skids back but refuses to collapse, resetting his stance despite the damage. He steadies himself and prepares to rely on Shining Mystique to survive the next exchange. Munching advances, openly disappointed that the boy's current level still falls short of his expectations. He boasts that techniques like the boy's are no match for him. He follows that boast with another crushing attack meant to end the fight outright. The corridor fills with looping steel as Munching's weapon cages the boy in a storm of force. The long-haired trainee braces inside the whirling assault, searching for a way to turn defense into victory. He becomes trapped within a tightening sphere of strikes, with almost no room left to move. Munching promises that death is only moments away. The barrage intensifies until the boy can do little but endure. He realizes Shining Mystique can redirect the attacks enough to block them, but not generate enough power to stop Munching head-on. So he searches for something else he needs in this moment, reaching back to a lesson he barely understands. He remembers an instructor emphasizing a single finger and the principle behind a far stronger technique. That memory focuses his mind on how force can be concentrated rather than merely deflected. He understands that what he needs is a destructive power great enough to cut through steel itself. Munching notices a change in him but does not yet grasp what is happening. He laughs at what he thinks is the boy's last futile resistance. Before he can finish dismissing Shining Mystique, a new power erupts from within the defense. For the first time, Munching is visibly shocked. A violent burst of golden force tears through the steel cage and blasts outward. The long-haired trainee emerges wrapped in crackling light, his sword now carrying a completely different presence. He unleashes the technique called Unrivaled Lightning and Thunder. The golden strike flashes past Munching with enough speed and force to overwhelm his confidence. Munching can only stammer in disbelief as blood begins to spill. He turns and sees the boy standing behind him, realizing too late that the attack has already landed. The long-haired trainee stares back in grim focus, barely holding himself together after forcing out the technique. Munching's body starts to fail as the delayed effect of the strike catches up to him. His eye widens with the final understanding that he has been beaten. The boy lowers his gaze, exhausted and weary even in victory. He stands over the bloodied floor, breathing hard and trying to assess what that technique just did to him. He recalls that Unrivaled Lightning and Thunder carries exactly the overwhelming force his instructor described. But the effort leaves him shaken enough that he has to cover his mouth to steady himself. He admits that the technique is far too advanced for him to use freely at his current level. Even so, he accepts the win and reminds himself he has already lost too much time and must move before the restricted zones change again. Just as he prepares to leave, a new presence makes him freeze. Dark energy gathers nearby, and he turns toward it with immediate alarm. He can hardly believe what he is seeing. A hooded figure stands amid the wreckage, and he wonders in shock why such a being is here. When the figure raises its glowing red eyes, he recognizes the new threat at once as a killer demon. In the middle of her fight, the swordswoman is startled to find a killing demon standing inside the hall. She realizes the area may have been turned into a restricted zone while she was battling. Even so, she refuses to flee in disgrace and weighs what will happen if Anjin leaves that zone. She shifts her footing, preparing to test the intruder instead of retreating blindly. A brief breath steadies her as she studies the demon for any reaction. The masked figure remains perfectly still, offering no clue at all. Taking that silence as confirmation that she should escape immediately, she decides to break away. She bursts forward, trying to slip past the demon before he can respond. Her focus hardens as she commits fully to the dash. At once, a monstrous killing intent like a giant serpent closes over her path. The pressure shocks her, revealing how badly she misjudged the danger. A lethal strike flashes toward her throat before she can even sense it. For an instant she feels death brush past her neck. She barely twists away and skids aside as the unseen slash tears through where she was. She is horrified that the attack was launched without any warning she could detect. Only the beast path instincts save her, and she knows she would already be dead otherwise. Forced back on all fours, she faces the demon again with no room for complacency. She raises her bloodied sword and steadies herself for a fight she now knows is far above her level. She warns herself not to be fooled by his calm, because the moment she moves he will seize the initiative. A lesson from her master returns to her mind about predators catching prey not through speed alone, but through timing. She remembers that prey survive by zigzagging, yet true hunters still bring them down. The answer, her master taught, is that superior predators attack in rhythm with the prey's movement. They do not simply chase. They strike at the exact moment the target commits. So the way to survive is not mere evasion, but breaking that rhythm. With that realization, she settles on a desperate plan. She lets out a raw shout to throw off her own cadence and disrupt the demon's read on her. She decides her movements must become completely unpredictable. The demon finally shows faint interest as she changes her approach. She darts erratically across the floor, scattering after images and false lines of attack. Her first step is to abandon any readable zigzag pattern. That unpredictability lets her close the distance before the demon can cleanly intercept. Her second step is using Beast Path to evade the attacks he has already set in motion. Her third is to force a real opening through movements he cannot prearrange against. She believes for a moment that the gamble may finally be working, but the demon has already placed his blade where her opening will end. She realizes too late that she has run straight into his kill zone. Then the fatal blow stops short for no obvious reason. She quickly guesses that he halted because she crossed into the restricted zone boundary. The two end up facing each other outside the hall, with the demon no longer pressing. The escape leaves her bitter, because all she truly managed was to run with everything she had and still create no opening at all. She is forced to admit she has just witnessed the level of a true master, and that her own experience was pitifully narrow. Outside, the night forest settles around her as the shock sinks in. She concludes that the killing demon's martial arts have reached a realm she can barely comprehend. That realization makes her think of the beast that killed her grandfather. She now believes that creature too must have possessed terrifying martial prowess. If she wants revenge for her grandfather, she understands she must surpass even that realm. Before she can dwell further, a young man calls her by the name Bugounciel. He says he has searched for her for a long time and knows she trained in the beast's path. His familiarity alarms her, and she wonders whether information about her has spread among her enemies. He begins to answer her unspoken suspicion. Instead of giving his name, he coldly declares that someone about to die has no need to know it. He launches himself at her with murderous intent and a massive blade. She remains outwardly calm as his attack descends. At the last instant she slips aside, letting the strike pass by a hair. The attacker praises her beast path instincts for predicting his blade in advance. He adds that she is certain to become one of the 10, which only makes him more determined to kill her now. Declaring he will cut down a seed of the demonic sect, he unleashes a far fiercer sword technique. She is startled that his sword style has changed completely, and the phrase seed of the demonic sect catches her attention. His words make her suspect that not everyone gathered here came for the same public purpose. A dangerous possibility forms in her mind about who this man might really be. She forces herself to cast aside that distraction and meet the next barrage head-on. Their weapons collide, and she feels something unusual in the clash. The sensation is familiar enough to shake her concentration. As they exchange again, she recognizes the same strange pull in his technique. The realization hits her with sudden clarity. He is using a suction-like force that drags in everything nearby. That pull triggers a memory of her grandfather examining a corpse. In that memory, he identified the killer as a master of Hebei's Pun clan using the Oho Danmun blade. He explained that the style leaves no outer wounds while shattering the victim's bones through internal force transmitted in weapon clashes. Back in the present, she blurts out the name of the technique and the Pun clan. Her opponent is visibly shaken that she knows it. He demands to know how she recognized the style, and the answer in her memory continues. Her grandfather had taught that the absorption technique is a fundamental inner force art that draws in whatever is near like a vortex. Used with every movement, it disrupts the opponent's weapon path and ruins their form. That is why the Pun clan devours panicked enemies like a tiger closing on prey. But the same lesson also warned that the technique is double-edged, because it drags the user closer to danger as well. Remembering that weakness, she decides to turn the absorption technique against him. She adjusts her grip and commits to a direct counter. Instead of resisting the pull, she drives her sword along it straight toward him. As he flips into another attack, he finally names himself as Ping Ak of Hebei and vows to cut down the demonic sex seeds. He throws the full weight of his clan's mission behind the strike. She narrows her focus and waits for the exact moment his path becomes fixed. Then she plants her sword into the ground rather than keeping it in his vortex. Ping Ak is stunned when he realizes she has anchored her blade and broken his pull. Using that anchor as a pivot, she whips herself around and counters from an angle he did not expect. Her blow lands hard enough to drive him back and make him spit blood. He stumbles away, forced to absorb the impact instead of dictating it. She regains her stance with new confidence. The success proves to her that his technique can be countered. Ping Ak dismisses it as a petty trick, trying to recover his pride. She judges that the hit was not decisive, but it has shown her the path to victory. Now certain she has found a counter, she prepares a more refined answer. Another teaching surfaces. True speed is decided in the split second of collision, a principle called the late strike technique. She realizes that by reversing the absorbing force, a sword can be made to move faster than its own visible path. So she deliberately stops resisting the pull and lets it draw her in. At the instant of contact, she twists the force through her blade. Ping Ak dives in from above, confident the vortex has trapped her. She meets him from below with a strike that seems to arrive after the path is already set. Then she changes the blade's direction at the very end. The sudden shift catches Ping Ak in midair before he can adjust. He barely blocks, shocked by a speed that should have been impossible. As he lands, he wonders if she is somehow using the absorption technique herself. He rejects the idea, telling himself no young swordsman should be able to wield the white tiger palm's pull with such precision. Yet she repeats the feat, proving it was no accident. Her sword keeps threading through his openings with accelerating precision. She understands the cruel logic now. The stronger his absorption becomes, the faster her counter can become. His own technique is feeding the speed of her sword. She slips past him in a blur and carves through his offense. Ping Ak rages that her trick cannot keep working, but his confidence is cracking. Then he suddenly notices something missing in the flow of battle. The absorption force has vanished at a critical instant. Even without it, he surges forward on raw strength, acknowledging her power while trying to overwhelm her directly. He commits to a decisive finishing slash. Certain he has forced her hand, he bares his teeth and presses in. But she has been waiting specifically for the moment. He abandons the pull. She unveils Firestorm Sword Hall's first move, Mystic Profound Sword Technique. Her composure turns cold as the defensive art blooms around her. The technique erupts upward in a red storm that swallows his attack. The clash passes, leaving both fighters separated in the aftermath. Blood streaks across her face, showing she endured the exchange rather than escaping it cleanly. Ping Ak also seems to think he has survived the moment. Then a delayed effect begins to manifest behind him. A hidden strike from the converted defense tears into him, and blood bursts from his body. The force of it drives him off balance. As he collapses, he realizes what she has done. She calmly names the technique and remarks that the exchange had been genuinely dangerous. She explains that to turn Mystic Profound Sword from defense into attack, she had to endure every strike aimed at her until the right moment. Ping Ak, kneeling and wounded, is stunned by such an interpretation of the art, and asks if she is simply going to leave. She answers that he has nothing to do with the revenge she seeks. His reaction shifts from disbelief to a grudging fascination with her. She tells him they should never meet again and starts to walk away. Her departure is quiet, as if the duel is already over in her mind. Behind her, Ping Ak struggles to rise instead of accepting defeat. His body buckles under the damage she inflicted. Even so, another presence approaches him from behind. A newcomer asks whether he really came all this way just to kill a minor player like her. The masked killing demon identifies Ping Ak of the Hebei Ping family, and remarks that he was useful for an orthodox fighter. Ping Ak bitterly realizes the demon knew his purpose from the beginning. The demon answers that Ping Ak made the mistake of underestimating the demon's sword. With a curt farewell, the demon strikes. The night mountains stand silent over the sudden execution. The forest canopy sways as the violence settles back into stillness. The demon steps forward from the kill without haste. Elsewhere, the swordswoman falters as the delayed cost of the battle catches up to her. Blood runs over her hand, revealing she was not unscathed after all. She slumps against a tree, her sword slipping as her strength gives out. Her breathing turns ragged and her eyes burn with pain. The killing demon appears before her and addresses her by name, Seo Jinha. Already weakened, she can only glare up at him warily. He reveals she was struck by a special Garami needle from Hell Blood Fortress and warns that without the antidote, trying to flee will only end in death. A wounded swordsman realizes in frustration that organized enemies are combining memorized techniques with poison, exposing the limits of fighting alone. As several opponents close in, one of them points out that his attempt to switch hands with the sword has already given away his weakness. She presses the advantage, explaining that even a gifted right-handed swordsman cannot suddenly fight properly with the left. Confident that he has been figured out, she tells him to stop resisting. Instead of surrendering, he braces himself as the whole group launches a coordinated assault. The attackers rush him from multiple angles, mixing blades with hidden projectiles. He tries to cut through the barrage, but the pressure keeps mounting. A poison needle slips through and strikes him again, worsening his condition. He realizes the poison will finish him unless he gets an antidote within a very short window. Even so, the enemy formation surges forward to finish him before he can recover. Accepting that he may die anyway, he prepares to gamble everything on one last stand. Before he can act, a sudden disturbance interrupts the fight and shocks him. One of his attackers is abruptly cut down by an unseen ambusher, leaving everyone searching for the new threat. The newcomer drops into the middle of the group and attacks without hesitation. The surviving enemies recoil in alarm as the ambush turns against them. He recognizes at once that whoever intervened is far more dangerous than expected. The mysterious fighter draws with calm precision, already in control of the exchange. In a blur, the newcomer carves through the surrounding trainees and scatters them. Watching the massacre, he is left stunned by how quickly the balance of power has changed. When the motion stops, bodies are strewn across the clearing and only a few survivors remain. The attacker is revealed as a composed young swordswoman standing alone among the dead with a bloody blade. He swallows his fear, realizing she could kill him just as easily. Desperate, he tries to stop her from leaving by insisting he means her no harm. She pauses only long enough to search one of the fallen while keeping him in sight. Finding an antidote bottle, she recognizes it as something that would make dealing with the hellish blood castle much easier. Seeing his chance vanish, he urgently begs her not to walk away. She turns back and coldly asks what he wants. He admits he has been poisoned by the hellish blood castle and has less than 10 minutes before it spreads through his body. She rejects his attempt to frame her as a savior, making clear she came here to kill everyone and is sparing him only because he is beneath her concern. He bitterly points out that leaving him behind is no different from killing a rival by neglect. So he offers a bargain. If she gives him the antidote, he will join forces with her. Her blank reaction shows she is not moved by desperation alone. She asks why she should accept such a deal. He argues that only about 20 trainees remain, and nearly all of them are already operating in groups. He warns that even someone as strong as her cannot defeat every remaining faction alone, and claims his knowledge of their martial arts would be useful. To make the offer more convincing, he swears that if she saves his life, he will never betray her. She weighs his words against what she has seen of his character, and decides he does not seem like someone who would scheme behind an ally's back. Still cautious, she asks what terms he wants. He proposes that they cooperate honestly until only the two of them remain at the end. She studies him in silence, measuring whether the pact is worth the risk. He waits anxiously, knowing his life depends on her answer. At last she looks down at the antidote in her hand and makes her choice. She tosses the bottle to him, granting the alliance and his chance to live. He catches it in disbelief and starts to thank her. Before he can drink, she suddenly hears a signal and turns alert, while he fumbles with the stopper. Recognizing the sound, she realizes another restricted area may have just been created. She immediately orders them to leave, but he protests that this place does not seem restricted. She forces him to think it through. Most of the island is already closed off, so a new restriction means the survivors will be funneled here. Their warning comes too late, as footsteps begin closing in around them. One hostile trainee appears first, smiling at the trap that has sprung. Others emerge carrying concealed weapons and prepared techniques. More fighters step out behind them, confirming that several groups have converged together. In moments, the two new allies find themselves surrounded from all sides. She concludes that the fresh restriction has drawn the remaining trainees straight to this spot, and escape is no longer simple. Among the arrivals, unfamiliar figures watch with unsettling calm. One woman with a red ribbon smiles as if she has already anticipated the outcome. Byunseal notices one man in particular, and senses that he is far more dangerous than the rest. A taunting opponent suggests that whatever rivalries exist among the others, everyone can agree on killing these two first. Her ally identifies Byunseal by name, and reveals that he learned the wild beast path of the Wandering Beast Pavilion. He also names Seo Jinha, acknowledging her swordsmanship and the fact that she has investigated the other trainees well enough to be a serious threat. Realizing the enemy already knows both of them, Seo Jinha concludes that these factions have been sharing information and coordinating. The two allies exchange a tense glance, understanding how bad their position has become. Even under pressure, he finally starts applying the antidote to his poisoned wound. Seo Jinha recognizes the bottle as the powdered antidote she had seen before and understands what he is about to do. Byunseal hurls the powder into the air and declares that using the hellish blood castle's own poison against the crowd is their only chance. A thick purple cloud erupts across the battlefield, instantly disrupting the encirclement. The surrounding trainees panic as they recognize the hellish blood castle poison and scramble to protect themselves. Using the confusion, Seo Jinha and Byunseo break through the opening and flee together. One pursuer quickly realizes they have been deceived and tries to stop the others from overreacting. He shouts that the cloud is not real poison after all. Byunseo confirms to himself that the powder was only a visual trick, but it brought exactly the distraction he needed. As they run, he decides that fighting in open ground will get them killed and that they need terrain that limits numbers. Seo Jinha agrees at once and says she knows a cave suitable for a defensive stand. She describes a cave with a narrow entrance and a long corridor that would neutralize the enemy's group advantage. Byunseo is impressed that she had already mapped out such a fallback and begins to doubt the simple label attached to his own martial art. While following her lead, he wonders who she really is. Behind them, the remaining trainees regroup and give chase in force. The two sprint side by side, trying to stay ahead of the converging hunters. They reach the rock formations, only to find the area already swallowed by strange fog. Byunseo thinks they have finally made it to safety. But the cave entrance is engulfed in an unnatural haze that blocks the path and changes the atmosphere completely. Both of them immediately sense that this fog was not here before, and that something is deeply wrong. Within the mist, red-eyed hooded figures begin to appear. More of the silent, masked beings emerge, confirming that the fog marks a deadly boundary rather than shelter. They realize they have run straight into a restricted area inhabited by killer demons, and that someone may have deliberately steered them here. Seo Jinha concludes that the restriction was likely placed on this location precisely because their enemies knew they would head for the rocks. Byunseo asks what they can do now, and she notes that the demons will not attack unless they cross the border. Since they must fight somewhere, she decides this edge is still usable ground. She reasons that if they keep the restricted area at their backs, it will function like a cave wall and prevent attacks from behind. Byunseo accepts the logic and prepares himself for a desperate last defense. The two settle into a back-to-back formation, trusting the pact they made only moments earlier. Their pursuers close in and mock them for running out of places to flee. The enemy groups advance carefully, tightening the circle. Several notable trainees step forward together, confident that numbers will finally crush the pair. Byunseo and Seo Jinha answer by raising their swords in perfect mutual cover. Behind them, the killer demons remain motionless inside the fog, turning the battlefield into a narrow killing zone. One enemy leader decides the two have become too troublesome to leave alive any longer. He orders everyone to attack at once. The entire crowd surges forward in a coordinated wave. From a distant ridge, hidden observers watch the clash unfold under the night sky. An elder among them judges that this confrontation will likely decide the final selection of the 10 demon masters. As the observers speak, the battlefield below erupts into the decisive melee. Thrown blades and hidden weapons streak toward the defenders first. Seo Jinha bursts forward to intercept the opening assault before it can pin them down. She cuts through the incoming barrage and turns defense into an immediate counterattack. Byunseo follows by sweeping a wide killing arc through the attackers pressing his side. His heavy blade smashes through one opponent and forces the others back. He keeps moving through the crowd with brutal momentum, cutting a path despite his injuries. Even while fighting, he notices something unusual in the flow of the battle. He meets a strike head-on and senses a familiar principle hidden inside the exchange. The movement of one enemy technique triggers a memory rather than simple alarm. Seo Jinha also catches the shift in rhythm and realizes someone dangerous is about to exploit it. The two regroup back-to-back for a breath, both already strained by the pressure. Around them, bodies fall, but fresh enemies keep circling in to replace the dead. Byunseo's sword begins to tremble under the accumulated strain of repeated clashes. The weapon's instability warns that he cannot keep forcing power through it much longer. For the first time, he wonders if this battlefield may truly be where he dies. He tries to steady himself by insisting he has already given everything and should have no regrets. Seo Jinha catches that thought and silently questions whether he really believes it. A memory surfaces of an older master reaching out to guide him. Another image follows of that same master, bloodied yet serene, as if leaving behind a final lesson. The memory sharpens Seo Jinha's attention to what Byunseo is about to do. Refusing to accept death here, Byunseo forces his will back into focus. At the same time, Seo Jinha is targeted by multiple assassins diving in from different angles. She tightens her grip and prepares to answer instinctively rather than think her way through. With a single explosive motion, she unleashes a sweeping sword force that catches all of them at once. The attackers are cut down mid-charge before they can even understand what happened. She lands from the strike surrounded by falling bodies, having instantly thinned the enemy ranks. A surviving opponent lunges again, trying to exploit the aftermath. Byunseo intercepts with a violent counter, his blade carving through the assault and shocking the onlookers. The enemy is left reeling, unable to identify the sword art he just witnessed. Recognizing Byunseo as the greater threat, the remaining fighters decide to focus on killing him first. As they rush him, he recalls his master's teaching to let movement follow sharpened senses. The lesson continues in his mind, urging him to trust instinct over conscious calculation. He realizes with a jolt that he has already absorbed his master's sword technique without fully understanding it. His perception changes, and the battlefield seems to open before him. In that heightened state, the incoming attacks resolve into clear lines he can cut through. He explodes forward and slaughters the attackers in a single devastating sequence. Even the distant observers are startled by the sudden leap in his ability. When the motion ends, more enemies lie dead around him and the formation has been broken again. Seo Jinho recognizes the style as Pavilion Master Sa Wu's sword arts and realizes Byunseal may have inherited something extraordinary. Before she can process it further, she senses a new attack aimed at her blind side. A hidden enemy darts in with a precise thrust, exploiting the instant her attention wavers. She turns too late and knows she is about to be struck. The attacker believes he has finally caught her. Byunseal appears in time and catches the killing blow with his bare hand, stopping it through sheer force and awakened power. His grip locks the blade in place, denying the assassin his opening. He immediately counters with a crushing burst that blasts the attacker away. The enemy is hurled across the battlefield as the shockwave tears through the air. Seeing Byunseal save her, Seo Jinha can only watch as another enemy coldly remarks that, despite this display, he is still as good as dead. Someone refuses to let Byunseal stay down and urgently demands that he rise. Badly injured and coughing blood, Byunseal struggles to regain his senses. He realizes in shock that he has been dragged into the island's forbidden central zone. The discovery leaves him stunned, because this is the one place he was never meant to reach. A masked figure with blood-red eyes looms over him through the haze. Before the masked killer can finish him, a sudden slash of light cuts across the scene. Byunseal sees the attack reflected in his eye and understands someone has intervened. A furious shout follows, announcing the arrival of overwhelming authority. The head instructor appears and halts the killing with sheer force, shocking everyone nearby. The other trainees and instructors freeze, realizing the trial has been interrupted. Byunseal can barely process what is happening as the danger around him shifts. The head instructor stands between him and the masked assassin, openly taking responsibility for saving him. Byunseal stares in disbelief at the man who has just protected him. Recognizing his rescuer as Master Sa Wu, he is left even more bewildered. The weight of that revelation hits him, and he can only stare in silence. Sa Wu immediately orders the trial stopped and rushes everyone to save the dying boy. He demands a physician at once, even as others protest that suspending the third trial will cause trouble. Sa Wu accepts all consequences without hesitation if it means Byunseal lives. That resolve leaves the onlookers shaken. Privately, Sa Wu reveals that he has finally found the talent he has been searching for. He judges Byunseal to possess the exact balance of reflexes, killing intent, and spirit needed to become one of the future 10 demon masters. Later, in a formal chamber, Sa Wu is confronted over what he did. The elders remind him that the plan was to select 10 future sect heirs and 2 additional prodigies to serve as the 10 demon masters' eyes and ears. By saving 2 extra people, he has broken the structure of the trial and turned 12 candidates into 14. Sa Wu calmly accepts that punishment was inevitable. Even the elder judging him is unsettled by how far he was willing to go. They worry about how the emissaries from the 10 demonic sects will react when they hear the results. Sa Wu remains confident that the sect's representatives will see what he saw. Time passes, and the island settles into an uneasy calm before the next stage. Byunseal lies unconscious in a treatment room, recovering under careful care. At last, he wakes. He looks around in confusion, unsure where he has been taken. The smell of medicine tells him he is in a place for the wounded, not a prison or execution ground. When he checks himself more carefully, he realizes something impossible has happened. Not only have his external injuries vanished, even the internal damage that nearly killed him has been healed. He concludes that the Demon Palace's physician is far more skilled than he ever imagined. Drawn by voices outside, he quietly opens the door. He steps into the corridor and begins to take in the scale of the hidden compound. A servant greets him respectfully as a young master and invites him to follow. Still weak but curious, he lets himself be led deeper inside. What he sees next catches him off guard. The restricted center is not a dungeon at all, but a fully functioning inner stronghold filled with attendants and daily life. From the windows he sees an entire settlement hidden within the island's center. When he asks where he is told plainly that this is the center of Hell Island. He finally understands why this region had been sealed off during the inspection. Once seated, he is asked what he wants, and the treatment is unexpectedly hospitable. He hesitates, still trying to understand the situation. Then he asks for 2 bowls of noodles. The request is granted without question. As the food arrives, the simple sight of it stirs something deep in him. He is reminded of a warm memory of sharing noodles with his grandfather, and the loss hits him quietly. Even surrounded by servants, he feels alone with that memory. Seo Jinha arrives and jokes about how much he must like noodles to order 2 bowls for himself. She sits across from him and, after some awkwardness, finally addresses what happened between them. For once, her usual confidence falters. She thanks him sincerely for saving her life. Byunseal, who had not even realized he had saved her, is left confused by the gratitude. Seo Jinha explains that he killed the enemy in front of him and asks if he truly does not know what that meant. She reminds him that only 12 people were originally meant to survive the third trial. Because the head instructor stepped in to save Byunseal, the number of survivors became 14 instead. She clarifies that her thanks are specifically for that intervention, since his actions led to her survival as well. When he still seems lost, she realizes he has been unconscious too long to know what followed. She tells him he was out for 4 full days. He is startled, having believed only a single day had passed. Seo Jinha explains that he survived because the infamous mad physician happened to be nearby. She recounts the physician's legend, Once hailed as the divine hand, he went mad after failing to save the woman he loved. Even so, his skill remains so great that anyone still breathing can be dragged back from death. That only deepens Byunseol's regret that his grandfather never had the chance to meet such a healer. Seo Jinha keeps talking, partly out of concern and partly because she still sees him as an old ally. She begins explaining the truth about the killers they fought during the trial. Those murderers were not random criminals but martial masters sent by the 10 demonic sects to evaluate the candidates and choose successors. Byunseo finally understands why their strength had matched the instructors. He then asks the question that has been bothering him most. Why did the head instructor save him? Seo Jinha admits she has been wondering the same thing, because Sa Wu clearly wanted him to become one of the 10 demon masters. Byunseo denies any prior connection to Sa Wu or any special tie through his sect. That makes the mystery worse, especially after Seo Jinha reveals Sa Wu was heavily punished and stripped of his post for intervening. Byunseo is left brooding over a sacrifice that makes no sense to him. He cannot understand why a man with no known link to him would ruin himself just to keep him alive. A great bell suddenly rings through the compound. Seo Jinha recognizes it at once and says the time has come. She explains that the bell summons everyone still remaining on Hell Island. The emissaries and executives of the 10 demonic sects have arrived to claim their chosen successors. The hidden stronghold opens itself to the next decisive gathering. The surviving candidates assemble in a grand hall and wait to be judged. Byunseo studies the room carefully, trying to read the mood. What unsettles him most is the silence. So many powerful figures are moving, yet not a single footstep can be heard, making their presence feel inhuman. The sect representatives stand before the survivors like predators choosing prey. One elder surveys the candidates and begins the selection. He points toward a blonde survivor and singles him out. The vice master of the necromancer sect asks whether Yang Munho will become one of their demon masters. Byunseo watches the first offer in surprise. Yang Munho can hardly believe he is being chosen. The elder confirms the offer and calls him forward. When Yang Munho protests that he trained only in swordsmanship and has never used a spear, the elder dismisses the concern. He insists that Yang Munho was born with the perfect body and talent for the necromancy spear, and that his failure with the sword only proves he pursued the wrong path. Overwhelmed, Yang Munho obeys and follows the elder away. Another representative steps forward, eager for his own turn. He introduces himself as Jik Jahan, Vice Castle Master of the Hellish Blood Castle and the feared Venerable of 10,000 Poisons. The survivors immediately recognize him as a poison arts monster whose mere gesture can kill everything nearby. Jik Jahan turns his attention to Seo Jinha. He asks whether she will become a demon master of the Hellish Blood Castle. The offer catches her completely off guard. Inwardly, she cannot believe that someone once praised as a sword prodigy is being invited into a sect of poison artists. Jik Jahan declares that the deadliest poison is a poisoned heart. He reveals that he already knows she used a girl from his own castle's martial office to try to wipe out the trainees before the third trial began. He also knows she killed that accomplice afterward to keep her silent. Seo Jinha protests that the girl approached her first and tried to kill her as well, so calling it simple silencing is unfair. Jik Jahan waves away the excuse and makes clear that he is not condemning her for it. To him, her willingness to kill many people without hesitation for her own objective proves she is perfectly suited to poison arts. He goes further, telling her that sword talent alone will never let her rise far in the Murim, because only a rare chosen few can truly rule with the sword. In his eyes, her real aptitude for poison surpasses her aptitude for swordsmanship. Seo Jinha falls silent, shaken by how accurately he has seen through her. The idea of chosen swordsman makes Byunseo listen even more closely. He recalls hearing that someone learned the sword only recently yet reached a level others would need a decade to attain. That thought hardens Seo Jinha's resolve. She accepts Jik Jahan's offer and agrees to go to the Hellish Blood Castle. Jik Jahan is pleased to have secured her. He tells her to follow him, and she leaves the line of survivors. Then another representative announces that it is his turn. A man in red robes steps forward with a presence that dominates the hall. He introduces himself as Yahello, the sword demon of the Fire Rain Sword Sect and the strongest swordsman currently walking the demonic path. The name strikes Byunseo like a blow. The others also recognize him as the former disciple of the previous Fire Rain Sword Sect leader and the unrivaled blade of the demonic world. Tension spreads as everyone wonders whom such a figure will choose. Yahello points and chooses Byunseo. He calls him by name and singles him out before the entire hall. He praises the way Byunseo absorbed the Wandering Beast Pavilion Master's philosophy and earned admiration from multiple elders. He says he looks forward to Byunseo's future growth and admits that even his own sect's swordsmanship cannot yet measure the boy's depth. Byunseo feels the weight of that recognition and the danger that comes with it. The surrounding executives watch closely, especially those who already know how valuable he is. Byunseo hesitates, gathering himself before answering. Then he shocks the hall by declaring that he will not go to the Fire Rain Sword Sect. Yahello stops cold, unable to believe he heard correctly. The refusal is repeated, leaving no room for misunderstanding. Yahello's killing intent erupts as he demands to know how a mere trainee dares reject a demon master of his sect. Byunseo forces himself to speak through the crushing pressure. He insists that, from what he has heard, candidates are allowed to refuse an offer. Even under that murderous aura, he stands by his right to choose. Yahello asks where Byunseo thinks he can possibly go after rejecting him. Byunseal steadies himself despite the fear. He answers that he wants to join the Wandering Beast Pavilion. That answer provokes Yahello even more, because he cannot believe Byunseal would choose the declining pavilion over him. He openly scorns the Wandering Beast Pavilion as a fallen place unworthy of comparison. The nearby trainees panic, realizing Byunseal has insulted one sect while invoking another in front of monsters. Even so, Byunseal does not take the words back. Yahello's aura bears down so hard that Byunseal feels as if his body will tear apart from pressure alone. The hall is reminded why Yahello is feared as the strongest swordsman in the demonic path. Before the pressure can crush Byunseal completely, another powerful figure steps forward to intervene. The onlookers recoil in alarm as the confrontation escalates toward a clash between sect monsters over Byunseal's fate. Byunseal recognizes the man blocking his path and immediately bristles with killing intent. He openly scorns Sawu as an insignificant secret pavilion master and demands that he stop interfering. Even the sword demon's hand moves toward his blade, showing he is ready to kill over the insult. The onlookers are horrified that anyone would dare draw a sword in front of the sword demon at all. Sawu's side realizes the situation is spiraling beyond his authority. Byunseal sees that Sawu is overstepping only because of his ties to Pavilion Master Jin, yet he keeps advancing anyway. Sawu desperately thinks that if the sword demon loses control, the other candidates could be caught in the slaughter, so he has to stop this somehow. The tension peaks as the sword demon's weapon is on the verge of coming free. A sudden interruption cuts into that deadly moment before the blade can be fully drawn. The crisis is halted at the last possible instant. Dan Chong arrives amused by how tense everyone has become. With a casual command, the vice master of the Wandering Beast Pavilion steps in and shuts the confrontation down. From behind Sawu, Byunseal watches the newcomer take control of the room. Dan Chong casually takes hold of the object that marks his authority, making it clear he can intervene here. Byunseal narrows his eyes, recognizing that this smiling man is not harmless. Dan Chong introduces himself and asks Byunseal to let this matter pass for his sake. The surrounding elders quickly support the idea, reminding everyone that the Wandering Beast Pavilion had to claim one person anyway. Byunseal measures Dan Chong in silence, weighing whether to yield. The chosen candidate and Sawu both look up, waiting to see whether bloodshed will resume. Sawu can only tense helplessly as the decision hangs in the air. Byunseal finally relents, warning that if Dan Chong lingers any longer he may not be able to keep his sword sheathed. Dan Chong accepts the concession with an easy smile, as if he had expected to win. The candidate, shaken, realizes just how close he came to being killed. Dan Chong tells the candidate to come with him, and the candidate obediently follows. As he leaves, the candidate keeps replaying the sword demon's murderous aura and understands that the threat had been real. Behind them, Byunseal is left standing alone after the Wandering Beast Pavilion takes its new recruit away. The candidate cannot stop thinking that without Dan Chong's intervention, he would have died there. Sawu is left with a faint, bitter smile after being unable to protect him. Dan Chong leads the candidate onward while the large man accompanying them remains calm and watchful. On the way, the escort praises the candidate's growth, and the candidate humbly credits his teacher for it. The escort admits surprise that the candidate chose the Wandering Beast Pavilion, while the candidate says its values matched his own. Dan Chong cheerfully announces that they have arrived. He reveals the Wandering Beast Pavilion not as a secluded fortress, but as a lively settlement built around ordinary work and trade. The candidate is stunned by how different this place is from what he imagined. He had expected a grim and silent sect, but instead finds a bustling, almost domestic community. Dan Chong explains that unlike other sects that dominate commerce, their pavilion values self-sufficiency. The candidate's surprise quickly turns into a more practical concern. Looking around, he realizes almost everyone here is elderly, and wonders if there is no one near his age. Dan Chong hesitates awkwardly before answering. He admits that young disciples once came drawn by the pavilion's legends, but most either fled or died during training. The candidate accepts the answer, though the warning about training clearly lands hard. Dan Chong points out a shabby hut and matter-of-factly declares that this will be the candidate's home from now on. He adds that if anything in the hut needs fixing, the candidate should ask the man nearby for tools and help. That man is introduced as Wang Gul, the pavilion's blacksmith. Dan Chong then turns to leave with Sawu, as if his part in the matter is already done. The candidate is startled that his master is not staying with him. Dan Chong explains that Sawu is only the secret pavilion master, and had neither the standing nor the strength to oppose the sword demon, so he now has to answer for that failure. The candidate is alarmed by what that punishment might mean. His master reassures him that it will only be a light punishment, and should not take long. Even while jokingly smacking the candidate on the back, Sawu warns him not to slack off because Wang Gul will be watching. The candidate steadies himself and accepts the separation more calmly than before. Sawu leaves with a final request that the candidate take care of himself. Dan Chong stops the candidate from calling himself a true disciple of the Wandering Beast Pavilion just yet. The candidate is baffled by that distinction. Dan Chong explains that being named one of the 10 demon masters does not automatically make him an official disciple of the pavilion. He states the pavilion's rule plainly: the weak have no place among its disciples. The candidate is jolted by the bluntness of that standard. He immediately seizes on the implication and asks if becoming strong is all that is required. Dan Chong confirms it, saying the pavilion has no interest in empty rituals or formalities. To him, each disciple embodies the pavilion itself, So oaths and belonging mean nothing compared to strength. What matters is simple: learn martial arts, grow stronger, and earn recognition through power alone. He tells the candidate that everyone in the pavilion can become his mentor, but whether any of them will actually teach him depends entirely on their own judgment. The next day, the candidate climbs Iron Peak to seek out the person Dan Chong promised would teach him internal energy cultivation. He arrives exhausted and out of breath from the ascent. Still panting, he tries to gather himself at the summit. He finds himself alone on a narrow ledge high above the pavilion grounds. Remembering Dan Chong's words, he wonders if the top is finally close and recalls that a master awaits him here. Dan Chong had promised that the best internal energy cultivation method available would be taught on this peak. At last he reaches the summit proper. As he peers over the edge, someone appears to meet him. A voice immediately asks whether he is the one chosen as one of the 10 demon masters. The speaker is a scarred monk-like martial artist standing alone at the peak. When the candidate confirms it, the man already knows he has come to learn internal energy cultivation. The man then shocks him by saying he already possesses a cultivation foundation and should not need another technique. He has sensed true chi overflowing from the candidate's body, as if it had been accumulated since childhood through systematic training. The candidate denies ever learning such a method and explains that he simply grew up as a mortician's child. The monk concludes that only two explanations remain: either the candidate is lying, or he somehow learned to gather true chi unconsciously, as if in his sleep. The candidate insists he is telling the truth and invites the man to verify it himself. The monk studies him more seriously, no longer dismissing the claim outright. The candidate even offers that if the man thinks he is lying, he may destroy all the true chi inside him. He accepts that risk without hesitation, proving how serious he is. The monk grabs his wrist and begins examining him directly. What he senses leaves him visibly startled. He realizes the candidate's body is overflowing with true chi, yet none of it is circulating through a proper technique. That means the candidate somehow gathered a massive reservoir in his lower dantian without formal cultivation, something that should be impossible. The candidate winces under the probing force but endures it. The monk demands to know who taught him to gather true chi in the first place. He presses harder, desperate for the name of the person behind this anomaly. The candidate is stunned by how much significance the monk places on this hidden training. Still held in place, he can only ask what the monk means by all this. The monk shifts his approach and asks whether anyone ever taught him how to calm his mind or breathe in a special way, and the candidate remembers his grandfather's breathing exercise. He begins to reenact that breathing method on the spot. The breath falls into the old rhythm naturally. As soon as he does, the true chi in his body responds and flares visibly around him. The monk is astonished that the candidate can activate it while standing, which means he could circulate chi in any posture, and he realizes the technique is extraordinary. He abruptly tells the candidate to stop before revealing more. Once the candidate does, the monk asks if his grandfather was the one who taught him that method. The candidate confirms it, and recalls how his grandfather taught it as a way to breathe comfortably inside a coffin. The monk explains that this was never a mere breathing trick but a method for collecting true chi in the dantian, though not one for actually wielding that power. He reveals that the candidate has already stored roughly 10 years' worth of internal energy without realizing it. Then he asks for the grandfather's name. The answer is Bujanyang. That name immediately convinces the monk that there can only be one man in the martial world it refers to. He identifies Bujanyang as the former vice master of the Demon Palace and once the strongest swordsman of the demonic path. The revelation leaves the candidate speechless. He is forced to confront the possibility that the kindly mortician he called grandfather had once stood at the summit of the demonic world. The monk himself struggles to reconcile that legendary figure with the life of an ordinary mortician. Yet, he also recognizes another contradiction. The breathing method Bujanyang taught is actually a Shaolin technique from the orthodox side. The candidate is stunned again, now realizing his grandfather may have had ties to both the demonic and orthodox worlds. He instantly understands how dangerous that truth would be if it ever became known. If the Demon Palace learned that his background was tied to such a secret, he fears he could lose his title and perhaps even his life. The monk tells him there is no need to panic, because the Demon Palace likely already investigated his background and still accepted him. He promises to teach him anyway in order to honor the debt he owes the Wandering Beast Pavilion, regardless of whether the boy's roots are orthodox or demonic. But he turns grave and warns that the breathing method must never be passed on to anyone else. He makes the threat absolute. If even a fragment of that technique is exposed, he will kill the candidate and everyone connected to him. The candidate accepts the warning without flinching. He seals the promise with a formal martial salute. The monk acknowledges the pledge and prepares to proceed. After a final measuring glance, he decides to reveal himself properly. He gives his name as Yahello Jumgang. The candidate is confused by the strange Dharma name, sensing it does not fit an ordinary monk. Yahello Jumgang changes the subject and asks whether the candidate understands the difference between orthodox and demonic internal energy methods, and the answer is no. He explains that orthodox cultivation builds internal energy in harmony with the body's natural order. Demonic cultivation, by contrast, uses whatever means are necessary to force rapid growth. That brutality creates great power quickly, but it violates the body's nature and carries hidden damage. Because of that, orthodox masters who endure the long road often end up with purer and superior internal energy in the end. Yahello Jumgang says the method he will teach goes beyond ordinary demonic arts and stands among the most miraculous cultivation techniques of all. but he warns that such excellence demands a terrible price. The candidate listens without retreating. Hyeol Jumgang confesses that learning this technique was so agonizing that he once bit off and ate his own fingers during the process. Only someone who can endure pain beyond words, he says, can forge a body perfectly attuned to internal energy. He reveals his own past as a martial master of the Azure Dragon Temple in Yunnan who was framed for murder, sealed, and later saved by the Wandering Beast Pavilion, to whom he promised this technique in repayment. Because teaching the technique is part of that promise, he now intends to test whether the candidate is worthy of receiving it. The test will be brutal. He will drive True Chi through all 365 acupuncture points at once to clear every vessel in the candidate's body. He warns that this process is normally done slowly and carefully, but doing it in a single stroke will cause overwhelming pain, so the candidate may still back out. The candidate considers the warning only for a moment. He accepts immediately and says he will do it. Satisfied, Hyeol Jumgang unleashes his power and tells him not to regret the choice. Golden True Chi crashes into the candidate's body as the test begins. The force erupts across the peak like an explosion, engulfing both master and student in blinding light. The torrent of energy tears through the area with overwhelming violence. Hyeol Jumgang drives the chi through every point at once, a process he compares to scraping bone with a blade. He braces to see how long the candidate can endure before breaking, then notices something unexpected. Instead of screaming, the candidate remains silent and eerily composed in the middle of the agony. Even more strangely, none of the foul impurities that should be forced out of the body appear at all. Hyeol Jumgang begins to suspect the candidate's body is far more abnormal than he first believed. He probes again, trying to confirm what his senses are telling him. As the golden light settles around them, the impossible truth hangs in the air. The candidate is enduring the cleansing as if his body had already been prepared for it. A grim smile hints that someone has realized the boy's body was never corrupted by tainted energy in the first place. That discovery reframes everything about his condition and potential. The monk studies the exhausted youth more carefully, sensing he may have found someone extraordinary. When he confirms the boy is Buyunseal, the monk decides to take him in personally. He offers Buyunseal his own internal energy circulation method, choosing to become his teacher. Half a year passes under that harsh mountain training. By then, Buyunseal stands transformed, no longer the frail child who arrived. The monk tests him with brute force, hurling a massive boulder into motion. He attacks with confidence, expecting to measure the limits of his student's progress. The stone is sent hurtling straight at Buyunseal as part of the trial. Buyunseal does not evade, letting the attack come all the way in. Instead, he meets the boulder head-on with complete composure. For a breath, the impact seems inevitable. Then his power erupts and the boulder shatters around him without moving him at all. The result makes clear that his body has been fundamentally remade by training. The monk admits Buyunseal has truly mastered the circulation method he was taught. He addresses him by name with open recognition rather than mere instruction. Buyunseal now carries himself like a seasoned martial artist, not a rescued novice. The monk is stunned that Buyunseal learned in half a year what took him 3 years, and realizes his disciple has exceeded expectations. He reflects that the method let Buyunseal disperse the true chi trapped inside him, unlocking his latent strength and restoring his health at astonishing speed. With that foundation complete, master and disciple move on to the next stage of training. Buyunseal settles into meditation, intent on pushing further. He knows reaching the first level came quickly thanks to his teacher, but he also knows the technique has 8 levels and he is still far from safe. He resolves not to leave this place until he reaches at least the 2nd level. As he concentrates, something in his body begins to shift faster than expected. The monk notices the change at once and realizes this is no ordinary breakthrough. He understands with alarm that Buyunseal is forcing open the 2nd level already. Buyunseal breaks through into the 2nd realm, where bone and muscle become fully optimized. That level should maximize the body's physical efficiency. But such a sudden leap places unbearable strain on flesh and bone. The monk immediately recognizes the danger hidden inside the success. Buyunseal's body begins to burn under the burden of rapid transformation, and the breakthrough turns into a crisis. The monk rushes in, ordering him to abandon stray thoughts and focus if he wants to survive it. He realizes Buyunseal cannot contain the true chi surging through him and will suffer severe internal damage if nothing is done. To save him, the monk decides to spend his own primordial essence true chi. He pours that precious power into Buyunseal, surrounding them both in blazing energy. Buyunseal sinks inward, trying to steady himself under his master's support. Then he jolts back to awareness as the foreign power settles inside him. He is shocked to find the destructive pressure easing instead of worsening. He realizes the stabilizing energy came from his teacher. Seeing the monk collapse from the cost, Buyunseal panics and calls out to him. He understands that his master gave him true chi directly and cannot comprehend why he would pay such a price. The monk brushes it off and insists Buyunseal must be taught properly before he can leave the Wandering Beast Pavilion. Buyunseal sees through the roughness and recognizes genuine care beneath his master's stern manner. Moved by gratitude, he vows never to forget what the monk has done for him. The monk immediately rejects that sentiment and tells him to forget he ever existed. He warns that whether a bond is born from hatred or kindness, forgetting it is often safer. Buyunseal is left wondering why every important figure in his life tells him to let go of them. When he asks how he can ever repay such a debt, the monk finally gives him an answer. He says repayment would mean reaching the 8th level, the realm of great origin, a height he himself never attained beyond the end of the 5th. Byunseol absorbs that impossible request in silence. Then he accepts it as a real promise rather than empty encouragement. Having reached the 2nd level, he is told he no longer needs more circulation lessons and must now complete the basics of martial arts instead. The monk orders him to train by climbing the western cliff of the pavilion and hone his body there. Byunseol is briefly stunned by the abrupt dismissal into a harsher phase of training. Even so, he bows and asks his master to take care of himself. The monk hides his reaction behind his usual severity. He quietly returns the sentiment, and 3 more months pass. Later, ordinary disciples gossip over drinks while the sect continues its routines. News spreads that the founding divine squad has returned after wiping out the Azure Dragon Pavilion. The disciples treat it as justified revenge for harm done to one of their own and praise the squad's strength. They also note that the Wind Cloud squad should be returning soon. Their casual talk is interrupted by the sight of figures arriving over the rooftops instead of through the gate. The newcomers land with practiced ease, making an entrance that draws attention. More members sweep in behind them, confirming the Wind Cloud squad's return. One of them plants himself on the roof, as if claiming the whole courtyard. He waits there in deliberate silence, letting everyone look up at him. Someone mocks the theatrical pose, but the complaint carries familiarity rather than fear. The speaker calls out the man for acting dramatic instead of simply coming to the Azure Wind Pavilion. The rooftop figure is revealed to be Baekhyun, leader of the Wandering Beast Pavilion's Wind Cloud squad. Baekhyun answers his superior with formal respect. The superior, a relaxed and flamboyant vice pavilion master, tells him to stop being stiff when they are alone. Baekhyun refuses, insisting the pavilion's rules are already loose enough. The vice master drops the teasing and says he actually needed to discuss something important. He brings up the talented newcomer chosen as one of the 10 demon masters and asks why Baekhyun accepted him into their pavilion after opposing that plan and despite the Fire Rain Sword sect expecting to claim him. Baekhyun explains that the choice was the boys', not his, because Byunseol rejected the Fire Rain Sword sect's offer. The vice master is delighted that the boy chose them and jokes that he nearly had to fight the sword demon over it. He takes Byunseol's decision as proof that the pavilion was worth choosing. Baekhyun remains cautious, unwilling to celebrate too quickly. The vice master adds that the Fire Rain Sword sect was so displeased they refused to select any of the 10 demon masters, and openly showed their resentment. Baekhyun snaps that the demon palace has always distrusted them and that their pavilion has already suffered enough because of that suspicion. The vice master counters that the Wandering Beast Pavilion exists to pursue martial mastery, not political influence. Baekhyun dismisses that as an ideal too pure for the reality they live in. Still, he has a pressing matter and asks where their new demon master is. He wants Byunseol found immediately because his position is already under threat. At that same time, a leaf drifts across the surface of a pool. A foot lands beside it with such precision that the water barely breaks. The leaf flips up from the ripple, showing how exact the movement is. Byunseol races across the water itself, training his footwork at impossible speed. He recalls the old master Go-Wool, once known as the Grand Thief Swift Phantom, who taught him the agility art. Go-Wool had explained that this art erased the boundary between movement and footwork, and even named it after himself. He also warned that many disciples were crippled trying to keep up with its rapid changes, making Byunseol's progress a dangerous gamble. Yet Byunseol reached the 3rd mastery in only a month, astonishing even that veteran teacher. Go-Wool declared his art inherited at last, closed his training ground, and left Byunseol to refine it through real combat. Now Byunseol's steps skim the water with near weightless control. His speed becomes so extreme that even observers can barely track him. From the cliff above, Baekhyun and the vice master watch the display in disbelief. The vice master identifies the technique as Go-Wool's Swift Phantom and notes that such an agility art should not be mastered this quickly. Baekhyun begins to suspect Byunseol has spent his entire time in the pavilion learning nothing but movement techniques. The vice master rejects that as impossible, reminding him Byunseol only joined half a year ago and also learned a circulation method from Hyeol Jumgang at Iron Peak. He adds that the rumors were true as well. Byunseol mastered the Wild Beast Path in just 2 weeks on Hell Island. On top of that, Sawu gave him every drop of the ultimate spring spiritual water, which likely opened his transcendental nerve plexus unusually early. Even so, the vice master admits that should not have been enough to explain everything, especially since Byunseol's arrival already forced the number of 10 demon masters from 12 to 14. Baekhyun turns the conversation toward the pavilion master's continued seclusion and the burden of handling the fallout alone. He explains that the original 10 demon masters' plan came from the demon palace, and every demonic sect has grievances about how it was imposed. Unlike the Wandering Beast Pavilion, which lets the strongest survive and rise, the other sects had already chosen heirs and resented being told to train outside candidates. The vice master bluntly states the real purpose of the plan was to raise martial artists capable of eventually killing the renowned masters themselves. Baekhyun confirms that he understands this, though many sects still seem blind to the implication. Those sects simply entered their chosen successors into the 10 demon masters competition as if it were ordinary succession politics. The vice master says that approach would have been acceptable under normal circumstances. But everything changed when Kong Murian, the White Demon Temple leader's only son, died because of Byunseol. That death still weighs on Byunseol, even when unspoken. Baekhyun notes that although the 10 sects agreed to the 3rd trial, several of them already disliked Byunseol, so the White Demon Temple is not alone in wanting him checked. The Fire Rain Sword sect is also furious that an outsider learned their advanced sword art, unrivaled lightning and thunder. The sword demon Yahello is demanding punishment, and the man who taught Byunseol has already been stripped of position and confined. The Vice Master calls that vindictive and asks what the sects are really after. Baekhyun says they want to test whether Byunseol truly deserves to remain one of the 10 demon masters and to ensure he never wields that sword again. The Vice Master rejects the demand outright, arguing that Byunseol is already their disciple and forbidding him from using a sword is absurd. Even so, the threat behind the demand is serious enough to unsettle him. Below them, Byunseol pauses alone on the water, still training in silence. He launches himself from the surface and heads back toward them at once. Arriving in a blur, he greets the Vice Master respectfully. The Vice Master praises his mastery of movement and asks directly if he is truly their pavilion's demon master. He then formally introduces Baekhyun as the leader of the Wind Cloud Squad. Byunseol returns the greeting with proper courtesy. When the Vice Master tries to stop Baekhyun from explaining the political mess, he realizes too late that Byunseol has already heard enough. He admits there is no point hiding it from him anymore. Byunseol faces them calmly, waiting for the truth without flinching. He states that whatever happened, it happened because of him, and he will bear the responsibility. The Vice Master groans that Byunseol heard everything, and Byunseol apologizes for using the Wild Beast Path's Chi Vibration Mind's Eye to listen in. Baekhyun is stunned that Byunseol combined a sensory Chi technique with movement training at all. Byunseol explains simply that he followed the vibrations traveling across the water's surface. The Vice Master treats this impossible answer as just another example of Byunseol's monstrous talent, while Baekhyun can only stare. Baekhyun's shock turns into tense frustration at how far beyond normal Byunseol has become. He finally admits to himself that Byunseol is a genius on an entirely different level. That realization pushes Baekhyun toward a hard decision. Instead of shielding Byunseol, they should trust him. The Vice Master is horrified that Baekhyun would even consider sending the boy to the Demon Palace when the test could be a disguised execution. Baekhyun argues the Demon Palace mainly wants to soothe the White Demon Temple's anger, not openly murder a child, which is why the test would be held there rather than in a hostile sect. He warns that refusing the demand will only create more trouble, though the Vice Master still hates the idea because Byunseol is so young. Before they can decide for him, Byunseol says he will go. He repeats the choice clearly, taking the burden onto himself. Byunseol reasons that if the sects truly care about their reputation, killing someone like him would only damage them further. More importantly, he refuses to live as a disciple who avoids the fights that come to him. Baekhyun accepts that this confrontation was inevitable and decides they should use it to stop future harassment. The Vice Master wrestles with the risk, still unwilling to let Byunseol walk into danger cheaply. He finally agrees on one condition: if Byunseol passes, the sects must promise to let the matter go. Byunseol accepts those terms immediately and formally acknowledges the decision. Soon after, he stands before the Demon Palace gates, escorted in as the next trial begins. As he enters, he remembers that when he first came to this world of martial arts, he knew absolutely nothing. Now he walks toward the Demon Palace not as a helpless outsider, but as a recognized demon master of the Wandering Beast Pavilion. Byunseol is brought to the all-encompassing pavilion, the strategic center of the Demon Palace, and is told someone inside will handle what comes next. As he enters, he understands he has stepped into the place that governs the palace's planning and administration. He braces himself, knowing this is where he will finally learn what kind of trial awaits him. The moment he opens the doors, he prepares to face the test directly. What he finds inside immediately catches him off guard. A composed official waits for him in a quiet office, making it clear this meeting has been arranged in advance. An attendant formally announces that Byunseol of the Wandering Beast Pavilion has arrived. Byunseol offers a respectful greeting to the master of the pavilion. The pavilion master, Baek Jianshin, welcomes him warmly and notes that Byunseol's presence is even more formidable than rumor suggested. Baek Jianshin confirms that Byunseol already knows the recent incident has left the Demon Palace in a politically difficult position. When Byunseol questions why the Demon Palace must answer to the 10 demonic sects, he reveals how little he has been told. Baek Jianshin realizes the Wandering Beast Pavilion has been kept ignorant of the broader situation in the Murim. He explains that the Demon Palace was created by the 10 demonic sects and remains tied to them, though the two are either fully separate nor truly the same. He adds that the former palace master did not come from one of the sects, and many demonic factions are not actually friendly toward the palace. Byunseol concludes that the palace and the sects cooperate only when interests align, which also means many sects resent the palace. Baek Jianshin reveals that the 10 demon masters competition was never mainly about choosing successors, but about raising people capable of killing the orthodox Murim's leaders. In plain terms, the competition was part of the Demon Palace's long-term plan to strike the upper ranks of the Murim alliance. Although the 10 demonic sects initially opposed the idea, they eventually sent disciples, and the deaths that now matter occurred during that competition. Baek Jianshin makes it clear that the current crisis exists because of Byunseol himself. He explains that the palace sought him out because his role in those events has left the Demon Palace exposed and vulnerable. Byunseol calmly admits he already knows the coming exam is really a punishment disguised as a test. Baek Jianshin notes that Byunseol came in fully aware of the hostility waiting for him. Byunseol accepts that reality and declares he will face whatever form the exam takes. Satisfied by that resolve, Baek Jianshin decides to stop circling the issue. He drops the formalities and moves straight to the real purpose of the meeting. He says the Fire Rain Sword Sect and the White Demon Temple have, in their own way, done Byunseal a favor. That favor is access to the 10,000 Demonic Truth Pavilion, the Demon Palace's archive of martial arts manuals. He presents the Golden Ape plaque, which grants entry to the archive's first floor. Baek Jeonchun explains that even the lowest level contains 25,000 martial arts texts, a resource that could greatly strengthen Byunseal. But he immediately warns that this gift is hollow, because Byunseal's chances of safely passing the exam are almost non-existent, and the access is only meant to preserve appearances. When Byunseal asks what the exam actually is, the answer comes without mercy. The test will be surviving 5 attacks from a martial master chosen by the White Demon Temple. Baek Jeonchun adds that the head instructor even surrendered his own position to help secure Byunseal this much of a chance. Yet when Baek Jeonchun asked why that instructor went so far, he received only a cryptic promise that the reason would reveal itself later. Byunseal accepts the plaque and hopes the coming ordeal will finally answer that mystery. With that, he leaves to make use of the little time he has. Outside, he is startled when someone calls out to him unexpectedly. He turns to find instructor Jean, who recognizes him at once. Jean says he has heard about the exam, and Byunseal wonders why he is here. Jean explains that he has strong ties inside the all-encompassing pavilion because he once acted in the pavilion master's place during the events on Hell Island. Byunseal accepts the explanation and listens carefully. When Jean notices the plaque, he confirms that Byunseal is heading to the 10,000 Demonic Truth Pavilion to prepare. Because Byunseal was once his student, Jean decides to offer one last piece of guidance. He warns that in the Jianghu, favors are never free and usually hide calculation or malice. He tells Byunseal the same suspicion should be applied to this entire situation. Still, Jean urges him to search for opportunity inside the danger and reminds him that growth begins from one's roots. Byunseal thanks him, understanding the advice is more than simple encouragement. Jean parts from him with a hopeful smile, wishing him success. Byunseal then heads alone to the mountain-sealed 10,000 Demonic Truth Pavilion. Standing before it, he realizes he has reached the archive that may decide whether he lives or dies. The great doors open for him. Inside, endless shelves of manuals stretch upward, and the scale of the place overwhelms him. He can only stare in disbelief at the sheer amount of knowledge gathered there. He quickly understands this is no ordinary library but a vault of martial inheritance. Instead of being dazzled, he forces himself to think practically about what might actually help him survive. He begins pulling manuals from the shelves, searching for anything useful. He schemes through text after text, trying to judge them by value and speed of learning. Soon he has gathered a stack, but even that feels like a waste of precious time. He realizes the supposed opportunity was indeed designed as a trap. No matter how profound the techniques are, he cannot master them in a single day, and trying to absorb everything would only ruin his focus. He sees through the scheme. His enemies wanted to drown him in options and break his concentration before the exam even began. Remembering Jin's words, he steadies himself and resolves not to be shaken. He starts thinking about roots instead of flashy gains. That thought turns inward, toward the martial foundation he already possesses. A possibility suddenly forms in his mind. He moves at once, abandoning the broad search. He rejects one shelf after another, no longer interested in random secret arts. He keeps discarding possibilities until something finally catches his eye. At last he recognizes the one text he has been looking for. He snatches it from the shelf without hesitation. The manual is titled Wandering Beast Reversal. Byunseal realizes the pavilion did leave behind something connected to the Wandering Beast lineage after all. He opens it expecting a technique manual, only to be stopped by what he finds inside. The contents shock him enough to freeze mid-read. Before the answer can fully settle, the day of the test arrives at the Demon Palace's great training hall. Byunseal enters the arena carrying both his sword and the knowledge he managed to gather. He presents himself with calm determination despite knowing the trial was built to destroy him. Several high-ranking figures are already waiting to witness the outcome. He stands alone before the seated judges, the imbalance of power made plain. He formally identifies himself as Byunseal of the Wandering Beast Pavilion. An elder named Gok Jaebong introduces himself as the former martial master of the Demon Palace and the one overseeing the test. He then presents Yu Unsong of the Fire Rain Sword Sect's secret shadow unit. Next comes Nung Gak of the Wandering Beast Pavilion's profound mystery hall. Finally, he introduces Go Gunpyeong of the White Demon Temple's Silent Dragon Squad. The judges openly state that the White Demon Temple demanded proof that Byunseal deserves to stand among the 10 demon masters, while the Fire Rain Sword Sect insisted the exception made for him was unjust. Gok Jaebong presses them for a promise that if Byunseal passes, they will stop using the past as a weapon against him. The sect representatives agree, at least publicly, to let the matter rest if he succeeds. With that condition set, the test is officially begun. The chosen examiner rises, and the pressure in the arena changes instantly. Go Gunpyeong steps forward to face Byunseal while the others watch from above. The two take their positions, and Byunseal prepares to survive rather than win. Go Gunpyeong states the rule plainly. Byunseal only needs to withstand 5 moves. Byunseal grips his sword and hears the condition repeated with brutal simplicity. Block 5 attacks and he passes. Go Gunpyeong opens with White Demon Heart Seizure, launching the first strike. The technique erupts with overwhelming force, far beyond what Byunseal had expected from the opening move. In that instant, Go Gunpyeong's killing intent becomes unmistakable. Byunseo realizes the White Demon Temple Master had truly been ordered to kill him during this exam. Go Gunpyeong decides that if he cannot kill Byunseo cleanly, he will at least cripple him by taking both arms on the fifth move. The first attack crashes down with lethal speed. Byunseo understands too late that he had not prepared for anything this fast. He throws himself aside and barely avoids being crushed by the opening blow. He lands in a low stance, alive but already forced onto the defensive. Go Gunpyeong counts the first move as complete. Without pause, he declares the second technique, White Demon Heart Seizure, again in a different form. Even while attacking, Go Gunpyeong notes that Byunseo at least has the fundamentals to survive the opening exchange. He immediately transitions into the next assault, giving Byunseo no time to recover. A storm of converging force descends toward Byunseo from every direction. Byunseo senses the real attack hidden within the chaos and braces himself. A sudden clue flashes before him. He realizes the obvious killing line is a feint. Trusting that insight, he sprints through the false opening instead of retreating. The fake strike slams into the ground behind him as he escapes the trap by a hair. He knows he survived only because he saw through the deception in time. Go Gunpyeong names the second move, Descent of the White Demon Spirit, and acknowledges that Byunseo read the feint because he truly learned the wild beast path. But that recognition comes with a warning that the next attacks will be far more dangerous. Go Gunpyeong gathers his power again, preparing a technique with even less room for error. He announces the third move, White Demon Chaotic Shadow. The battlefield seems to split into countless false trajectories, making every angle look lethal. Byunseo immediately realizes he can no longer distinguish the real attack from the fake ones. Unable to read the pattern, he chooses the only option left to him. He commits to pure evasion, trying to slip through the entire barrage instead of identifying a single true strike. The arena erupts as the attacks crash down around him in rapid succession. Go Gunpyeong watches closely, expecting the barrage to maim him at minimum. But something unexpected happens. Blood hits the ground, showing Byunseo was clipped, but not destroyed. He remains standing, wounded and breathing hard, having barely escaped the full force of the technique. Byunseo realizes he survived only by using Swift Phantom at the last possible moment, and that a true follow-up would have killed him. He understands with chilling clarity how close he came to death. Go Gunpyeong admits to himself that the attack should have left far worse damage. He casually accepts the failure and prepares to escalate again. Power surges around him as he readies the fourth move. Byunseo hears the next count and knows he is running out of answers. Go Gunpyeong unleashes White Demon Heart Strike, a technique so refined that its true line of attack vanishes completely. Byunseo cannot read through it at all and knows that if he fails here, he dies. At the edge of panic, his mind returns to the strange book he found in the archive. He remembers that the manual was disguised as an insult against the Wandering Beast Pavilion. That memory suddenly stops feeling like mockery and starts feeling like instruction. A crucial realization hits him. He understands the insults were bait, meant to ensure only a true Wandering Beast disciple would keep reading long enough to find the hidden analysis of the Wild Beast Path's weaknesses. The text had explained that the Wandering Beast Path fails when it relies only on instinct, because beasts move by instinct alone. From that, Byunseo recalls the real lesson: a martial artist must think, not merely react. He remembers that the senses should not be heightened blindly at all times. They must be sharpened only at the exact moment they are needed. Byunseo narrows everything into a single instant of perception. In that focused state, he finally catches the truth of the incoming strike. The moment the opening appears, he moves. He cuts through the attack line with perfect timing instead of fleeing from it. The watching judges are stunned by what they see. Even Gok Jaebong is shaken by the result. Go Gunpyeong stares in disbelief as he realizes Byunseo has just dodged the White Demon Heart Strike. A deadly technique is unleashed, one so relentless that even White Demon Temple masters struggle to evade it. Watching the attack, someone realizes the White Demon Temple and the Fire Rain Sword sect are cooperating because they both want the boy dead before he becomes a future problem. The attacker commits to the fifth move, deciding the source of future trouble must be erased now. He releases the White Demon Divine Serpent with the intent to finish the boy immediately. The boy understands at once that the pressure has become lethal. The serpent-like strike tears across the arena and closes in on him from every angle. Its path curves unnaturally, refusing to miss. He realizes too late that this is not a normal attack he can simply sidestep. As the weapon keeps pursuing him, he grasps that it is actively hunting him down. His opponent coldly confirms that the White Demon Divine Serpent will not stop until it draws blood and takes his head. The boy sees the truth of it and knows he has run out of room. Accepting that he cannot dodge, he chooses to meet the attack head-on. He pours power into his sword in one desperate counter. With everything on the line, he forces his body to keep moving despite the terror. He unleashes Grandmaster Cheon's ultimate technique, Unrivaled Lightning and Thunder. The two ultimate arts collide in a blinding explosion. For a moment, the clash hangs in perfect balance. He manages to catch the attack, but the strain immediately tears through him. Even at full power, he realizes Grandmaster Cheon's technique can only barely hold the serpent back. The pressure keeps grinding forward instead of breaking. His sword begins to fail under the force. He understands the collapse a heartbeat before it happens. The attack punches through, shredding his sword and ripping into his arm. The impact hurls him away in a burst of light. He crashes hard into the wall, his body broken by the recoil. Blood spills from his mouth as the damage catches up to him. From a distance, the attacker watches him drop to his knees amid the rubble, expecting the fight to be over. But the boy still reaches forward, refusing to surrender even with one arm ruined. His remaining hand closes around what is left of his weapon. He forces himself back to his feet and faces his enemy again. Something feral rises in him, turning his battered body into a threat again. The attacker is shaken for the first time. He cannot understand how the boy can still want to fight after losing his sword and arm. That refusal convinces him even more that the boy must be killed here before he grows into a greater danger. He hardens his resolve and prepares to finish the job. Before he can move, another voice cuts in and calls out to Grandmaster Go. The newcomer reminds him that the promised 5 moves have already been used. The confrontation shifts as the observers step into the open and force the duel to stop. A restraining hand halts any further action. Grandmaster Go bristles at being checked in public. The white-haired observer warns that if Go breaks his word, their own agreement with the Demon Palace will also be broken. Another elder urgently intervenes before the situation escalates further. He argues that the boy used unrivaled lightning and thunder during the test, which changes how the results should be judged. Because the test exists specifically to evaluate that technique, he insists the trials should be voided rather than counted normally. The white-haired man rejects that argument, pointing out there was never any rule forbidding the boy from using the technique. He adds that the boy used it for exactly the reason a true disciple should. When accused of insulting them, he calmly turns the accusation back. He states that Grandmaster Go used the White Demon Temple's strongest art, and the boy still stopped it with Grandmaster Chion's ultimate sword technique. By that logic, the real insult would be admitting the White Demon Temple's ultimate art was overpowered by the Fire Rain Sword Sex swordsmanship. Grandmaster Go is left speechless by the trap in that reasoning. The elder who objected is equally stunned into silence. Trying to recover, he claims the real concern is political, since the Fire Rain Sword Sect and White Demon Temple already have a poor relationship and this incident could worsen it. He quickly proposes burying the matter entirely, stressing that the test was secret and should remain unknown. The others pause, weighing the convenience of silence. Someone asks whether, if the matter is hidden, the original promise will still be honored. The answer comes back without hesitation that it will. The old master then formally recognizes Buyunseal of the Wandering Beast Pavilion once more as one of the 10 demon masters and grants him the right to use the sword. The white-haired man is quietly pleased by the outcome. He turns to the wounded boy and begins to praise him for proving himself as a disciple of the Wandering Beast Pavilion. Then he notices something strange. Though barely standing and covered in blood, the boy is still radiating a dangerous will. He looks less like a survivor and more like something that refused to die. The white-haired man understands the boy is finally past the ordeal and tells him it is over. He steps forward and lets the exhausted boy collapse into his arms, telling him he can rest now. That touch jolts the boy back to awareness. His body gives out completely as the tension leaves him. He later wakes in a lavish room, no longer on the battlefield. Disoriented, he wonders where he is and notes that each time he wakes lately, the room around him seems more extravagant. He tries to remember the test, but the most important part remains blurred despite flashes of the battle. He also cannot tell how much time has passed since then. Until he knows whether he passed, he cannot guess what his future will be. Unable to solve it immediately, he decides to wait and circulate his chi. As he meditates, a new current of energy stirs inside him. He senses that something in his body is different. To his surprise, he discovers a large amount of true chi gathered within him. He recalls being told that he already possessed more than 10 years of internal energy in his dantian. Remembering that it was all pure true chi and that activating his latent acupoint would greatly expand his reserves, he wonders if the test triggered that awakening. He tests the feeling in his hand and senses another change. He identifies it as the 3rd level of the reverse polarity cultivation technique. That realization means he has entered the reverse polarity firelight, a state that should make fire and water chi unable to affect him. Even if he cannot yet feel the full improvement, he knows something fundamental has advanced. A servant girl notices he is awake and addresses him gently. He immediately asks where he is and what became of the test. She tells him he is in the Demon Gathering Pavilion. Then she reveals that this is the residence of the Elder Pavilion Master. That answer shocks him far more than the room itself. Even someone as ignorant of Neurim affairs as he is has heard of the Elder Pavilion Master. The title belongs to the Blood Demon, one of the 3 demons and 3 venerables, a figure at the summit of martial power. He cannot understand why someone like him would be brought into that man's residence. The servant, Jean Seol, introduces herself and says the master has summoned him to the inner hall. The mention of the inner hall only deepens his unease. She confirms it plainly, making clear he is being taken directly before the Elder Pavilion Master himself. Soon he stands before the man in person, and the title suddenly feels far more real. On the way, the vast garden around the residence only emphasizes how far above ordinary life this place is. To him, the grounds feel almost unreal in their peace. Jean Seol finally announces that they have arrived. The Elder Pavilion Master waits in a quiet pavilion at the heart of the garden. The old man appears calm and almost harmless at first glance. He casually pours tea as if receiving an ordinary guest. Then he congratulates the boy for passing the joint test of the Fire Rain Sword Sect and White Demon Temple. Relief floods the boy, and he thanks him sincerely. He drinks the offered tea, trying to steady himself. The old man asks how it tastes, probing him with deceptive casualness. The boy admits he cannot judge tea well. When the old man recalls that he once worked as a mortician, the boy apologizes awkwardly for bringing up such a background. The old man introduces himself as Jikbung, the Demon Palace Elder Pavilion Master. The boy remembers the legends of the blood demon who once slaughtered countless orthodox martial artists across the Jianghu. Seeing the gentle old man before him, he struggles to reconcile the myth with reality. He formally offers his greetings as Buyunseal of the Wandering Beast Pavilion. Jikbung laughs and remarks that the boy is not at all what rumor suggested. He notes that despite learning martial arts late, the boy's body is unusually supple and his internal energy foundation is sound. The boy explains that as a child he used to lie in coffins and practice breathing, only recently learning that it had been a cultivation method all along. Jikbung accepts the explanation with amused interest. Then he reveals why he brought the boy here instead of sending him to the medicinal hall. He wanted a private conversation. His proposal is direct. After finishing training at the Wandering Beast Pavilion, the boy should come join the Demon Palace. He explains that although the Wandering Beast Pavilion is counted among the 10 demonic sects, its system does not truly align with the others. He promises that in about 3 years, once the boy joins them, he will personally present him to the Demon Palace Master and have him accepted into the Dark Heaven Squad. The boy knows that squad is one of the Demon Palace's most elite forces, alongside the Heaven Slaying Squad and Soul Annihilation Squad. Jikbung presses the temptation further, saying that path would place him among the future higher-ups of the Demon Palace. To Jikbung's surprise, the boy immediately refuses. The old man's tone sharpens as he demands to know why. The boy explains that the Wandering Beast Pavilion's martial arts can only be mastered by staking one's life, and being guaranteed status beforehand would undermine that resolve. If success were promised in advance, he believes he would grow complacent and fail to truly master his sex arts. Jikbung pauses, intrigued rather than offended. Then he bursts into laughter, and the force of it alone shakes the pavilion. Far from angered, he declares that he likes the answer. He praises that refusal as the proper attitude of a martial artist. The boy, however, is nearly crushed by the sheer pressure hidden inside that laughter and realizes how terrifying the old man truly is. Jikbung lets the pressure fade and says he will watch the boy's progress over the next 3 years. He promises they will meet again when that time comes. The boy understands he is being dismissed and bows his way out. As he leaves, Jikbung watches him go with interest. A subordinate remarks that he has never seen anyone reject such an offer so bluntly, though the boy does seem like the sort who would. Jikbung orders them to keep watching the boy for now. He wants to see which path the boy ultimately chooses. Outside, the boy keeps moving, still unsettled by the encounter. His steps falter, as the delayed fear finally catches up to him. He stumbles, his body still weak from everything he has endured. Only then does he admit to himself how close he came to dying. He had thought the test itself would be the greatest danger he faced. Instead, he realizes that one wrong answer before Jikbung might have placed his life in even greater peril. He exhales in relief as he escapes that presence alive. A hand reaches out to steady him before he falls. A passerby asks whether he is unwell. By then he has wandered all the way into the ordinary streets, back among common people. He assures the stranger he is fine, surprised to find himself in the urban district already. Looking around, he is struck by the calm of everyday life. Simple scenes of ordinary people talking and living suddenly feel precious to him. He realizes with unease that bloodshed and danger have become so normal to him that peace now feels rare, and he wonders when he changed this much. A young swordsman senses danger before he fully understands it. His suspicion hardens into certainty when he realizes someone is trailing him. Rather than panic, he quietly changes course and prepares to respond. He keeps moving through town while gauging the distance of the pursuer behind him. Deciding he may need to fight, he heads to arm himself first. He enters a smith's shop with a practical purpose rather than any interest in fine craftsmanship. He asks for a cheap weapon meant only for training and immediate use. The smith offers him any spare sword for a small price, and the boy accepts the simplicity of the deal. He chooses a plain blade without hesitation, caring only that it can serve him now. Armed at last, he leaves town and deliberately walks toward a more isolated place. He notices the followers still keeping pace and confirms the trap is still active. Once he reaches the reeds outside town, he stops and turns the hunt back on his pursuers. He openly calls for whoever is hiding to reveal themselves. The grass stirs as the concealed attackers answer his challenge. A voice from hiding acknowledges that he noticed them sooner than expected. Masked swordsmen step out one after another, no longer pretending this is anything but an assassination. More of them emerge, showing that he has been lured into a coordinated ambush. They spread out until he is surrounded from every direction. One assassin identifies him as Buyunseal, a trainee who should not have become a threat so soon. The leader makes their intent plain by promising to kill him before he can enter the wider martial world. The ring tightens as they prepare to strike together. Even now, Buyunseal offers them a final chance to leave, making clear he would rather avoid killing. The assassins reject mercy and answer with contempt, convinced their numbers guarantee his death. Seeing they will not back down, he accepts that the fight is now unavoidable. He draws the sword he just bought and commits himself to battle. The first exchange begins with him moving before the formation can fully close. One assassin boasts that drawing a sword is meaningless because their formation already controls his life. Confident in their teamwork, they shift into a formal attack pattern. They rush him from multiple angles in a synchronized assault. Buyunseal immediately recognizes that they intend to overwhelm him all at once. The first attacker launches in with lethal speed. Another follows seamlessly, proving the attacks are chained together without pause. Byunseal is forced into the center of a relentless barrage from every side. The attackers keep rotating positions so no one leaves him a clean opening. One swordsman dives in from above, trying to finish him while the others pin his movement. For a moment, the pressure is so intense that even Byunseal is pushed to the edge. A killing blow nearly reaches him before he slips away at the last instant. He leaps clear, buying a breath of space while the blades continue to chase him. As he studies them mid-fight, he realizes their coordination is excellent because they have trained together for a long time. He admits their teamwork is formidable, but he keeps looking deeper than the surface. Using the insight of the wild beast path, he sees that beneath their polished coordination, their individual skill levels differ sharply. He understands at once that this hidden imbalance is the weakness that can break the whole formation. With a sudden step, he moves to exploit the gap before they can adjust. He cuts through the flow of their formation, forcing the stronger and weaker members out of sync. The first assassin falls in a burst of blood before the others can cover him. The surviving attackers are shaken that he identified the flaw in what they considered an ultimate sword formation. They panic and switch to another pattern, suspecting he learned how to counter orthodox formations from the Demon Palace. Even after changing formation, they still circle him with the same underlying weakness. Byunseal sees no reason to fear the change because their problem is not the pattern itself. He knows that no rearrangement can erase the disparity in their abilities, so their core weakness remains exposed. A faint confidence returns to him as the battle turns in his favor. He strikes again, and another assassin is cut down before the group can recover. A third man dies with his throat opened, the formation collapsing faster with every loss. The wounded and dying can no longer maintain the rhythm that once protected them. The remaining assassins can barely believe how quickly the fight has reversed. They realize the false information they relied on was disastrously wrong, because Byunseal clearly knows far more than they expected. Byunseal rejects their talk of martial honor, and makes clear that this fight is nothing noble to him. For him, this is only a desperate struggle to stay alive. He tells them they are losing because they treated a life-and-death battle like a contest meant to prove superiority. One assassin is forced to confront the terrifying truth that the hunters have become the hunted. In his mind, the roles reverse completely, like prey trapped before a predator. The assassin's confidence dissolves into fear as they realize they are the ones being stalked now. Byunseal embraces that reversal and prepares to begin the slaughter in earnest. The survivors finally admit he is far stronger than expected and consider retreating to report the disaster. Before they can finish the thought, one of them is struck by sudden terror. A wounded assassin coughs blood as the group's collapse becomes irreversible. Another refuses to retreat, insisting that turning their backs would disgrace their honor even if it means death. Byunseal coldly asks whether that honor matters more to them than their lives. The question unsettles them because they have no answer that can save them. He contrasts their pride with his own view that a sword is not wielded for vanity. One assassin still clings to the belief that they fight for honor above all else. Byunseal answers with quiet disbelief, as if hearing something naive. He recalls a dead elder's lesson that honor cannot be carried into a coffin. Drawing on a far deadlier technique, he unleashes unrivaled lightning and thunder. Lightning races along his blade as he turns the battlefield into a killing ground. The assassins realize too late that they are facing a technique beyond what they prepared for. He tears through them in a flash before any warning can be completed. The survivors stand frozen as blood erupts around them and their comrades fall almost instantly. One man remains upright only long enough to register his own death. A thin line of blood at his throat reveals the strike landed before he even felt it. Byunseal stands over the aftermath with a bloodied sword, untouched by their last resistance. The final bodies hit the ground, ending the ambush completely. A dying assassin recognizes with horror that Byunseal has already become something monstrous in their eyes. Even as he fades, he vows to curse Byunseal beyond death. When the dust settles, Byunseal is left alone among the corpses of the men sent to kill him. He remains outwardly calm, but the blood on his face cannot hide what the fight has cost him inside. Looking over the field of bodies and blood, he is reminded that slaughter follows him even after escaping one hellish place. He closes his eyes, weighed down by the scene he has created. He reflects that wherever he stands becomes another hell, and that resentment and grace keep binding him in the same cycle. He accepts this bloodshed as part of the karmic price of walking a path driven by revenge. Even so, he keeps moving, because he believes this burden is his to bear. A new voice breaks the silence and remarks on the carnage with unsettling composure. Byunseal turns to find someone arriving by carriage after the massacre is already over. The newcomer steps down calmly, as if entering a meeting rather than a battlefield. He addresses Byunseal by name, showing he came here with purpose. Byunseal recognizes him as squad leader Beck and is caught off guard by his presence. He starts to ask how Beck found him so quickly. Beck brushes the question aside and says tracking him down was easy. Rather than explain further, Beck inspects the dead with the ease of someone used to violence. He checks one of the bodies for clues instead of offering sympathy. His expression stays controlled as he studies the evidence. What he finds irritates him more than it shocks him. When Byunseal asks what is wrong, Beck refuses to dwell on his own reaction. He tells Byunseal they should return to the Wandering Beast Pavilion for now. The story shifts back to the pavilion, where the consequences of the ambush are about to be discussed. Inside, Byunseal and Beck report to a blonde vice master who receives them over tea. The vice master pours tea with deliberate calm, signaling that he already knows much of what happened. He tells Byunseal the ordeal must have been difficult, but his tone is warm rather than alarmed. He reveals he has already heard the full report and openly praises Byunseol for surviving it. He asks whether the test left Byunseol badly injured. Byunseol explains that he was hurt but treated at the Elder Pavilion Master's residence, which shocks Baek. The Vice Master immediately asks whether Byunseol actually met the Elder Pavilion Master. Byunseol's uncertain answer is enough for the Vice Master to understand the significance. He realizes that the major sects accepted the test results so easily because the supposedly retired Elder Pavilion Master is still active and influential. Byunseol asks whether that position truly carries so much weight, since he only knows the old man as a powerful individual. Baek explains that the Demon Palace's power is split among the Demon Palace Master, the Elder Pavilion, and the 10 demonic sects, with the Elder Pavilion holding enormous authority through the previous generation's masters. He adds that the Elder Pavilion Master, Jik Bung, has also been secretly building his own independent forces. The Vice Master marvels that such a figure asked to see Byunseol privately, taking it as proof that the boy exceeded expectations. Byunseol finally understands that the meeting carried far more political weight than he realized. The Vice Master then asks whether there is anything else from the incident they still need to report. Baek brings up the ambush directly, shifting the room from praise to danger. The Vice Master's composure cracks for the first time as the news lands. Byunseol steadies the tea as the atmosphere turns tense. The Vice Master's anger flares when he hears that someone dared attack one of their disciples. Baek identifies the likely culprits as members of the Murim Alliance. Judging from their gear and possessions, he narrows them to the General Strategist's subordinate squads, likely the Autumn Wind or Flying Cloud squad. The Vice Master absorbs the implication with a dangerous calm. Baek reasons that the attackers were probably meant to be expendable, so the General Strategist could take the blame if the plot failed. He concludes they targeted Byunseol because his talent marks him as a future threat worth killing early. The Vice Master reflects that Byunseol has not even properly learned martial arts yet, and already every major power is watching him. Even so, he frames these dangers as the trials that will force the boy to grow stronger. Byunseol uses the opening to make a request of his own. He says he wants to join the founding Divine Squad, the unit that eliminates threats to the Wandering Beast Pavilion. He explains that he wants real combat experience so he can learn through actual battles instead of sheltered training. Baek immediately objects, warning that the squad is filled with the pavilion's harshest and most violent members. He singles out their leader, Sojeon, as especially notorious for her temper. Her reputation is so brutal that she is said to have killed pavilion disciples she judged unworthy, all under the excuse of testing them. Byunseol accepts that risk without hesitation, saying that if he dies for being too weak, the fault will be his alone. He insists he wants to grow as quickly as possible, and believes the fastest path is to witness and survive real battles. Baek and the Vice Master disagree on the wisdom of this, but the Vice Master chooses to trust Byunseol's resolve. He says the boy's confidence is reason enough to honor his judgment. The Vice Master decides to place Byunseol as a temporary member on the founding Divine Squad's next mission to Wine Thunder Valley. Baek can only react with uneasy disbelief at how quickly the decision is made. Byunseol remains composed, as if he expected this path to open. Baek still looks troubled, knowing exactly what kind of people the boy is about to join. In the end, he reluctantly yields once the Vice Master makes the order final. The Vice Master smiles, satisfied that the matter is settled. The scene shifts to the Thousand Successes Inn, where the squad leader is about to hear the news. The assignment is delivered bluntly, and it immediately provokes outrage. Sojeon, the fearsome leader of the founding Divine Squad, explodes at the idea of taking Byunseol along and refuses to be treated like a babysitter. When the Vice Pavilion Master's direct order is delivered, the scarred woman refuses to submit and insists she would reject it in person. Her defiance falters when she sees the authority behind the summons for herself. The envoy proves the command is genuine by showing the Heavenly Wolf plaque, making clear this is not a request she can brush aside. He bluntly tells her the Vice Pavilion Master is too occupied to argue, forcing her to swallow her anger. He reminds John that the boy they are discussing already survived the Fire Rain Sword Sect and the White Demon Temple's trial, so dismissing him as a child is foolish. That reminder only makes her irritation sharper. She snatches up her drink as if trying to steady her temper. The envoy watches her closely, wary of how badly this conversation is going. John explodes, accusing everyone around her of being blind for protecting the boy so fiercely. Even so, she finally agrees to take him along, but only on the condition that she will test him herself. She declares that this trial will decide whether he deserves to become a disciple of the Wandering Beast Pavilion. The mission then shifts to Wine Thunder Valley, the destination they must infiltrate. The valley belongs to a sect born from heresy. That sect strengthens itself through body modification and strength arts, trafficking humans in the process, and is despised by both Orthodox and unorthodox Murim. Yet despite its crimes, it has endured for a reason. Its valley is a natural fortress so difficult to breach that even the founding Divine Squad hesitated over the mission. When the team arrives, John immediately realizes the gorge is even broader than expected. A squad member explains that the real obstacle is not the distance alone but the violent wind. The gusts are so fierce that crossing safely is nearly impossible. Worse, guards are stationed across the way and will cut the bridge the moment intruders reveal themselves. John privately resents having to handle such a difficult mission while also babysitting the boy. The boy remains calm among the squad, taking in the situation without complaint. John turns to the vice leader and asks whether Jae-woon can handle the problem. Jae-woon accepts the task and prepares to inspect the defenses himself. He draws his paired blades, ready to use them as tools rather than weapons. With practiced precision, he launches them across the gorge. The blades fly like guided stakes through the storm. They cut through the wind and race toward the opposite side. Jae-woon drives them into the guard post to probe its hidden mechanisms. From their side, the squad watches the test strike land cleanly. The boy recognizes the technique at once as the body blade union he learned in the Fire Rain Sword sect. He quietly acknowledges that Jae-woon is genuinely skilled. When John asks whether the probe worked, Jae-woon confirms he sensed something inside the building but warns there may also be a hidden trigger on the bridge itself. John decides she wants every danger removed before risking her squad. So she orders the boy to cross first, treating him as the expendable one. He accepts without protest. While the others hold back, he steps toward the bridge alone. The drop below him makes the crossing instantly perilous. The bridge twists violently in the wind, threatening to throw him off. He realizes ordinary balance will fail here and decides to anchor himself with an absorption technique. He plants his foot onto the bridge and fixes his stance to it. Using that method, he begins advancing across the swaying bridge despite the gale. Watching him, John grudgingly admits his internal energy is stronger than she expected, though she refuses to praise him openly. Jae-woon gently suggests that her standards may be unrealistically high. Before the exchange can continue, the boy catches a dangerous sound from ahead. He immediately warns that something is wrong. A hidden device on the bridge activates beneath the planks. Blades erupt from the mechanism in a lethal sweep. The trap bursts upward in a storm of steel directly into his path. For a split second, he is caught by surprise. Then he stamps down on the bridge to create a new point of force. The trap's killing arc closes in from every direction. He spots the mechanism's pattern in time. Instead of retreating, he launches himself upward through the narrow opening the trap leaves behind. His focus sharpens completely as he commits to the gamble. He kicks off the air itself with a second burst of force. That extra step sends him even higher, beyond the trap's reach. Jae-woon recognizes the move as ladder to heaven and is stunned that the boy anticipated the trap well enough to use such a technique here. The squad can only stare as the impossible maneuver succeeds. But the boy realizes even that escape is not enough to clear the danger entirely. He twists midair, searching for a way to survive the rest of the attack. In that instant, he sees the true line of death closing on him. He understands that one more mistake would have meant being cut apart. Back on the cliff, the squad assumes he cannot avoid the final strike. The trap's killing zone seems to swallow him whole. He answers with swift phantom, accelerating through the opening before the blades can close. That burst carries him across the remaining distance in a single decisive leap. The onlookers are left speechless by what they just saw. He lands safely on the far side in a cloud of force and dust. Without pausing, he heads straight for the guard post that controls the defenses. Inside, he finds the guards already dead, pinned by the blades Jae-woon sent earlier. He reasons that the trap must have a separate deactivation device somewhere nearby. He quickly identifies a lever that looks like the control mechanism. He grabs it without hesitation. Then he forces the lever over with brute certainty. Hidden gears throughout the structure begin turning as the mechanism responds. The bridge's internal blades start retracting. The trap fully shuts down. From across the gorge, he signals that he has deactivated the trap. He calls for the others to cross, leaving John and Jae-woon staring at him in disbelief. John is forced to admit that he handled a technique that could have maimed him instantly even under extreme pressure. Her contempt gives way to genuine confusion about what kind of monster the Vice Pavilion Master sent them. The scene shifts underground, where the mission continues into a cavern system. The squad enters the cave on foot. They move deeper through the rocky passage together. Jae-woon casually approaches the boy, opening conversation now that the crossing is behind them. He praises the boy's footwork and asks whether he learned Master Go's swift phantom, and the boy answers politely. John immediately cuts in, refusing to let Jae-woon flatter him. Jae-woon tries to smooth things over by explaining that John simply never praises anyone. John admits the boy surprised her earlier, but insists that was still not enough to pass her test. She vows she will prove he is not worth much after all, leaving him puzzled by her hostility. Their advance stops at an underground lake that appears to be the next stage of the route. John declares that this is the place and orders the squad onward. One squad member dives in at once, showing this lake is meant to be crossed underwater. The boy asks what exactly they are doing. Jae-woon realizes no one briefed him because he joined the mission at the last moment. He explains that the lake connects to Wine Thunder Valley through an underwater tunnel, but it is filled with ice essences powerful enough to freeze a well with even a small fragment. To survive the passage, everyone must spend about 15 minutes continuously using internal energy to shield their bodies from the cold. Without that protection, a person would freeze instantly and sink. Jae-woon tells the boy to stay behind because attempting such a feat alone at his age is nearly suicidal. The warning only makes Jae-woon realize too late that the boy has already decided to go. The boy leaps in, making clear he would never have come this far if he feared death enough to hesitate now. The freezing water shocks him for an instant as he enters. Underwater, he sees the enormous ice crystals and finally understands what the others meant by ice essence. But almost immediately he notices something is wrong with the expected danger. While the others struggle against the cold, he senses that the ice essence is affecting them in some way. Yet despite not circulating any internal energy, he feels no cold at all. He studies his own hand in disbelief, confirming the sensation is real. A possibility begins to form in his mind. He realizes his recent attainment of invulnerability to fire and water may also be shielding him from the lake's freezing power. What seemed incidental before now becomes a decisive advantage. Freed from the cold, he swims through the tunnel with ease. He rises toward the exit ahead of the others. Breaking the surface, he gasps back into the air. He finds a chamber where the rest of the squad is already seated in the water, circulating chi before a great source of heat to recover from the passage. Seeing them meditating, he understands they are restoring the energy they spent resisting the lake. He walks among them while they remain occupied with recovery. Several squad members notice how relaxed he looks despite passing through the same freezing tunnel and can hardly believe it. The boy's calm only deepens their suspicion that something about him defies common sense. They begin openly wondering how he managed it. John watches in silence, reassessing him again. She concludes that his internal energy must be so stable that he did not even need to circulate it, and reluctantly admits the Vice Pavilion Master had a reason for sending him. Even so, she reminds herself that her real test for him has not started yet. Once the squad has recovered, one member rallies everyone to move because their target is close. John seizes the moment, declaring that the founding divine squad will show its strength now that the enemy is right ahead. The squad charges out with renewed momentum. They immediately crash into the sex-modified fighters, grotesque men driven by drugs and bodily enhancement. The boy joins the battle and cuts into one of the monsters as the melee erupts. The squad presses the attack, carving through the enemy ranks in a bloody opening clash. The boy keeps pace in the chaos, striking down an attacker while others fight around him. When one demon closes in at point-blank range, he blocks and measures the creature instead of panicking. He shifts from defense to a direct counter at close quarters. His counter lands hard enough to tear through the attacker's body, but the monster only grins through the wound, revealing that pain no longer restrains it. The boy realizes these enemies will keep coming even after severe injury. He identifies them as power-seizing demons created through drugs and physical enhancement. Because they feel no pain and never stop attacking, he understands ordinary exchanges will not be enough to handle them. Before he can fully adapt, someone shouts to him from the side. John cuts across his position and drops the demon, threatening him with a single brutal sweep. She snaps at him for interfering with her line of attack and orders him to fall back. He refuses to retreat, holding his ground with his sword ready. As John tears through the power-seizing demons with overwhelming ease, he watches closely instead of arguing. He decides that his purpose here is to learn from real masters in real combat. In the middle of the slaughter, he resolves to study every movement around him. He begins observing John, Jae-woon, and the others as living manuals, comparing their methods in the midst of battle. Rather than merely copying them, he vows to turn what he learns into techniques of his own. Around him, the squad continues cutting down the demons in coordinated bursts. An enemy launches a flying kick at him from behind, trying to catch him while he is thinking. He instantly recognizes the attack and prepares to answer it with the wild beast path and swift phantom he has been studying. As the kick comes in, he commits to dodging and counterattacking with the techniques he has just begun to make his own. Seeing the founding divine squad overwhelm the power-seizing demons, he decides he can afford not to join in and instead use the battle as a lesson. He fixes his attention on the fight with full concentration, determined to learn by watching. He chooses the squad leader as his first model and studies her movements for insight rather than victory. The squad leader meets a demon head-on and begins cutting through his offense with precise counters. She turns a rush from several demons into an opening and controls the exchange before they can surround her. With a single flowing sequence, she lands repeated wounds across multiple targets and shreds their momentum. Watching her, he realizes her blade work is producing multiple hits from what appears to be one attack, and he struggles to understand how. He concludes that her method is not a fixed blade form at all, but something closer to swordsmanship built on stabbing, twisting, and adaptation. Trying to grasp the principle, he mentally follows the path of her weapon through the chaos. He rejects his first interpretation and realizes he still has not reached the core of it. So he decides to imitate her more closely until the hidden logic reveals itself. The squad leader continues fighting with calm confidence, changing posture as naturally as breathing. He keeps watching in silence, measuring every shift in her stance and timing. Another demon falls as she slips through his attack and punishes the opening instantly. At last he understands that her art is not a preset technique, but a method that changes shape to counter whatever the enemy does. A remembered teaching confirms his insight. At true mastery, swordsmanship is no longer bound to named forms, and even posture alone can create a technique. He realizes the squad leader is not relying on a single formal style at all. She is simply reading each demon's flaws and fighting according to those weaknesses in real time. From one exchange he identifies 9 distinct attack paths hidden inside her single motion. He begins testing whether he can apply what he has just learned himself. As he steps forward, the squad leader notices him entering the battle at last. Even while fighting, she senses that he has been studying her for some time and wonders what he is planning. He moves into range of the demons and prepares to reproduce the principle he just deciphered. His body follows the idea before his mastery fully catches up, forcing him to improvise through the motion. A demon charges him directly, giving him a clean chance to test his understanding. He answers with a split attack path that cuts the demon twice in one movement. Afterward he judges his limit honestly and admits that 2 paths are the best he can manage for now. The squad leader notices the result, and is visibly startled by what he has done. She realizes he created a 2-strike variation merely by watching her once, something that should not be possible for a beginner. To her, that feat is especially shocking because the essence he copied took her 2 years to learn. He accepts that he cannot yet improve the imitation any further through observation alone. Still, now that he understands the logic, he calmly decides to move on and study someone else. He turns his attention to the vice leader, believing a different master may reveal a different principle. The vice leader notices his gaze shift to him and realizes the boy has moved on from copying the squad leader to studying him instead. The vice leader judges that the boy may imitate the squad leader somewhat because her art is rooted in the wild beast path. But he reassures himself that his own style combines flying daggers with the dragon's cry sword art, making it far harder to copy. Confident in that difference, he believes the boy cannot steal his methods just by watching briefly. He readies his weapons and continues fighting without holding back. His sword and secondary weapon begin working together in a coordinated rhythm. He cuts down demons while attacking from multiple angles, using both hands to maintain relentless pressure. As he fights, he silently challenges Byunseal, convinced the boy would not dare imitate this style. That confidence breaks the moment he senses something unexpected. He sees the boy has already taken up both a sword and a staff-like weapon to mirror the structure of his art. The boy launches himself into the fray using both hands independently, matching the vice leader's core idea rather than his exact weapons. He cuts one demon with the sword while striking another with the second weapon in the same sequence. The vice leader immediately recognizes what he is seeing. The boy has grasped the true essence of the vice leader's art, a dual-wielding mental discipline that lets each hand perform a different martial art at once. The vice leader is shaken because the boy ignored the obvious detail of the flying daggers and instead saw through to the underlying principle. The boy himself realizes he only copied the framework of the vice leader's technique, and not its full power. He admits that without the text he studied in the archive, he would not even have managed this partial imitation. Satisfied with what he has learned, he looks for the next person to study. His attention shifts toward another squad member whose swordsmanship is quieter and less showy. Watching that fighter, he notes that the man's technique lacks spectacle but remains effective and disciplined. The swordsman dispatches a demon with clean, efficient timing and no wasted motion. He subtly channels power through his blade rather than relying on elaborate forms. The boy realizes that this plain-looking method carries tremendous force at the moment of impact. He concludes that mere observation will not be enough to fully understand such a simple but heavy technique. Instead of continuing to watch from afar, he moves closer to inspect the aftermath directly. He kneels by the battlefield damage, studying the traces left behind by the strike. He examines the torn remains and impact marks for evidence of what made the blows so powerful. The swordsman notices the boy lingering in the middle of the battlefield and wonders what he is doing there. As the boy studies the scene, a sudden realization flashes across his face. He senses a new threat forming behind him before anyone else fully reacts. A surviving demon rises with a grin, preparing a sneak attack while the boy is distracted. The demon strikes from behind and tears into the boy's back before he can turn. Even wounded, the boy remains composed enough to hear the demon's mocking laugh. He answers instantly with a backward slash that kills the attacker without even facing him. The nearby swordsman is stunned by how casually and accurately the boy retaliates. The injury gives the boy the final clue he needed, and he finally understands the hidden principle. He realizes the swordsman's force comes from infusing the blade with true chi at the exact moment it meets the enemy. Having observed enough, he turns his thoughts toward the enemies he still wants to study next. Before he can continue, a furious master from Wind Thunder Valley descends into the battlefield and vows to tear the squad apart. The vice leader recognizes the newcomer at once. The intruder is identified as the Wind Thunder Valley Master, a far more dangerous opponent than the demons around them. The Valley Master gathers violent purple power into his hand as he falls. He unleashes a murderous technique, roaring as he attacks. His descent becomes a devastating poison-charged assault aimed at the squad below. One squad member braces to intercept, but the attack is too sudden and too broad. The technique is recognized as poison palm, and panic spreads as its danger becomes clear. The squad leader orders everyone to move immediately before the strike lands. She leaps up to meet the falling master herself rather than let the others take the blow. The Valley Master drives his poison attack straight at her, intent on killing her in one crushing strike. She remains cold and focused as she commits to the counter. Her blade carves upward with overwhelming speed to meet his descending force. Their powers collide in a violent burst that tears through the air. The Valley Master is shocked when her strike breaks through his attack and reaches his body. As she presses the advantage, she warns Byunseal that he has been watching them through the entire battle. Her words make clear that the boy's ability to copy techniques so quickly is no longer something they can dismiss. She admits to herself that she resisted acknowledging his talent only because he had begun learning martial arts so recently. But after seeing him in action, she can no longer deny what he is. The Valley Master snarls in pain and rage as the fight turns against him. Enraged that she was distracted by the boy while fighting him, he takes it as an insult. He pours even more poison power into his hand and lashes out with wounded pride. The squad leader answers his fury with complete calm. She tells him bluntly that he still does not understand the gap in skill between them. Their next clash erupts with enough force to shake the battlefield. In desperation, the Valley Master tries to force the exchange with a savage finishing blow. She cuts straight through his last effort and drives him down. The Wind Thunder Valley Master crashes to the ground defeated, his body broken in the center of the battlefield. The squad leader immediately advances again, not giving the enemy side any chance to recover. She declares that the head of Wind Thunder Valley has died by her hand. With the enemy leader dead, she orders the others to clean up the remaining foes and return to the Wandering Beast Pavilion. The boy watches her command the field and quietly reflects on everything he has learned. After the battle, he leaves the battlefield and stands alone on a high cliff. A week after completing the mission with the founding Divine Squad, he looks back on what that battle taught him. Watching true masters fight made him wonder how much he has actually improved. He realizes he has been so focused on learning techniques quickly that he never truly learned the standards by which martial artists are measured. Since he has only recently advanced in cultivation, he decides he must understand the path ahead before pushing to the next realm. While thinking this over, he is greeted by his old teacher after a long absence. The monk approaches warmly and says he has heard about the boy's accomplishments. The boy gives him full credit for his progress, and the monk laughs off the praise. The monk correctly guesses that the boy has come because he wants to understand cultivation better. He explains that the boy lacks the basics and was bound to hit a wall eventually, though he had expected that to happen much later. The teacher smiles, amused that the boy's growth has already surpassed his earlier expectations. He openly admits he misjudged how quickly the boy would advance. To begin properly, he decides to examine the boy's internal energy directly. After checking, he reveals that the boy possesses more than 60 years' worth of internal energy, transformed into antipolar true chi when his dormant vessels awakened. The boy is relieved to learn that the strange power he sensed before was real and not his imagination. The monk then begins explaining the hierarchy of martial attainment the boy asked about. He says peak realm lies above first-rate mastery, where the body and internal energy have both reached their maximum capacity. Beyond that is supreme peak, then the ultimate divine realm. At the ultimate divine realm, one can freely control body and spirit and begin to transcend the normal limits of internal energy and the human body. When the boy asks whether there is anything above even that, the monk answers yes. He explains that the infinite realm is the state of perfect martial completion, and that only the greatest figures in the world are known to have reached it. Those figures include the Murim Alliance leader and the Demon Palace master, the Orthodox-Unorthodox Heavenly Emperor duo. The boy recognizes the title and understands these two stand at the summit of the martial world. The monk adds that below them are the 3 demons, the 3 venerables, the 4 divines, and the 7 kings, all still within the infinite realm. Hearing this vast scale, the boy realizes just how much he still has to learn. The monk finally reveals that the highest known stage is called the Divine Intent Realm. He describes it as a state of becoming one with the beings of origin and understanding the will of the heavens, a realm beyond ordinary martial attainment. No one has ever reached that realm, and the boy is left stunned by the idea. The monk tells him that such matters are far beyond his reach for now and brings the discussion back to his current level. He explains that the boy is only at the beginning of peak realm because he has reached the 3rd realm of the reverse polarity cultivation technique. The 4th realm will let him manifest body protective true chi, marking the threshold of supreme peak. The 5th realm will allow him to shape his internal energy itself. The monk continues the lesson into the higher stages. At the 6th realm, internal energy will circulate endlessly through the body, and at the 7th, he will begin to escape the body's restraints. The explanation turns from abstract ranks to the inner transformation required to reach them. In the 8th and final realm, he says, one gains the power of great nature and the authority to intervene in all living things. The boy cannot even grasp what that last description truly means. The monk admits he cannot explain it clearly because he himself only reached the later stages of the 5th realm. Then, changing the subject, he asks whether the boy has finally decided to enter the Jianghu. When the boy asks how he knew, the monk points out that he would not be asking these questions otherwise. The boy confirms it and says real battles are the fastest way to grow stronger, which is why he wants to go. He also decides that roaming the Jianghu will be a better way to investigate the assassin who killed his grandfather than remaining in the demon palace. The monk understands his reasoning and accepts the choice. He warns that the boy will need information about the Jianghu as much as strength. To help, he tells him to find Master Chiol, who can provide what he needs. The boy thanks him sincerely, and the monk sends him off with a warning that the Jianghu is dangerous and he must be careful. The boy accepts the warning with a small, resolved smile, ready to step into the wider martial world. A parting wish for safety hangs over a quiet compound as someone prepares to step into danger. Inside, a blacksmith drives his hammer down, continuing his work with steady force. The long-haired young man watches in silence, still carrying the weight of his unresolved pursuit. The blacksmith keeps forging, unhurried and in control of the meeting. The visitor accepts the blacksmith's attention and waits for him to finish. Once the work pauses, the blacksmith asks what has brought him here. Instead of answering directly, the young man presents a bound book. When the blacksmith asks what it is, the young man reveals that it contains the knowledge he has been seeking. He opens the book and begins checking its contents carefully. What he finds shocks him enough that he can barely put it into words. The book lays out the political state of the Jianghu and detailed information on sects and clans. It even contains intelligence on famous masters, including the 10 demon masters. The sheer depth of the material makes him realize the blacksmith cannot be an ordinary craftsman. The blacksmith tells him the book should solve his lack of information, but orders him to destroy it after reading. As the blacksmith turns away, the young man begins to suspect he may be dealing with someone with immense hidden influence. He stops the man and asks a question that has been troubling him. The blacksmith pauses, giving him permission to continue. The young man asks whether a swordsman capable of severing both hands in a rising strike would need extraordinary bodily control. He adds the use of rotting poison and hidden weapons, trying to define the killer's methods. The blacksmith notes that such a person would be a superb swordsman who deliberately resorts to dirty methods. That answer sharpens the young man's suspicion rather than easing it. He concludes the killer is likely a spy concealing his true identity in the Jianghu. When he asks if that means the killer is not truly from the demonic path, the blacksmith agrees and says those traces were probably planted as camouflage. That realization widens the field of suspects and forces the young man to consider orthodox martial artists as well. Frustrated, he realizes the clues may have been designed to mislead everyone from the start. He admits he no longer knows how he is supposed to find the murderer. The blacksmith addresses him by name, Byunseal, and interrupts his despair. He offers Byunseal another path forward. The scene shifts as that offer leads Byunseal toward a new decision. Byunseal declares that he wants to go out into the Jianghu. A blonde vice pavilion master asks why he has come so suddenly and teases him about whether his earlier field experience was not enough. Byunseal answers that while that experience was valuable, he needs harsher real situations to improve his martial arts. The vice master understands his desire, but reminds him he cannot simply release him on a whim. He explains that anyone leaving for the Jianghu must belong to a hall or squad and receive permission from its leader. Byunseal already knows the rule and reveals that he has a specific destination in mind. He says he wants to join the Salvation Squad, stunning the vice master. The vice master springs up in disbelief, unable to accept what he just heard. Byunseal calmly explains that Master Chiol told him about it. That confirmation makes clear the blacksmith himself directed Byunseal toward this path. The Salvation Squad is described as the Demon Palace's deniable force, handling assassinations, kidnappings, and thefts the palace will not officially acknowledge. Master Chiol's point is simple. Joining it would give Byunseal access to exactly the kind of hidden world he wants. Byunseal realizes that if he enters the squad, he may finally find a clue to the killer. He also sees that its dangerous missions would force him to grow stronger. The vice master refuses immediately, because he knows exactly how brutal that organization is. Byunseal shows he understands the cost. His identity would be erased and every mission would put his life at risk. The vice master confirms all of it, and warns that squad members do the Demon Palace's filthiest work without support. He adds that only the desperate or the damned usually choose that road and demands to know whether Byunseal is serious. Byunseal answers without hesitation that he wants power quickly and will do whatever that requires. He sees the 10 demon masters themselves as tools in a larger struggle, so becoming stronger matters more than anything else. The vice master counters that most demonic sects exploit their masters for selfish ends, but insists their pavilion is different. He refuses to let Byunseal throw himself away because he wants him to become a true member of the pavilion. He even frames the offer as a future within their own ranks rather than a descent into the Salvation Squad. Byunseal is briefly shaken by the sincerity behind that plea. He acknowledges the vice master's feelings but does not back down. Instead, he says those dangers are exactly why he should join, forcing the vice master to ask why. The vice master answers his own question with a hard truth. People do not grow stronger while sheltered in comfort. That leaves the room in a heavy silence. At last, the vice master accepts that Byunseal will not change his mind. He reluctantly agrees to let him go, but only for 1 year. Byunseal gratefully accepts the condition, and the vice master tells him he can return if he is satisfied with his growth. With the decision made, the vice master offers one final piece of practical help before Byunseal leaves. He points out that Byunseal's face is far too famous and distinctive for covert work. As one of the best-known 10 demon masters, Byunseal would benefit greatly from hiding his identity. Soon afterward, Byunseal moves to a crowded city under a new appearance. He arrives at Dongting Lake, where the next stage of his plan begins. He steps forward with purpose, fully committed to the disguise. Now dressed as an ordinary young traveler, he adjusts his hat and blends into the street. He reflects that people used to whisper whenever he appeared as himself, so this new face is a welcome shield. That disguise leads him to a seemingly ordinary bookstore, which he recognizes as the Salvation Squad's Yang branch. He announces himself by knocking in the agreed way. When the door opens, he stands there as a stranger rather than Byunseal. Inside, the place looks harmless and mundane. Nothing about the quiet interior suggests an assassin network. He is led deeper into the building, past shelves and stacks of books. The peaceful library atmosphere makes him question whether this can really be the squad's base. A voice welcomes him before he can settle that doubt. An older bookseller asks what he is looking for, treating the encounter like a normal trade. Byunseal plays along, and says he has come to sell a book. He presents the volume that serves as his token. A hidden mark on the cover identifies it to the bookseller. The old man immediately understands what kind of visitor has arrived. Still maintaining the cover, he dismisses the book's value, and Byunseal asks to exchange it for another. The bookseller calls for Ma Woon, signaling that the real business can begin. Ma Woon appears and is told to show the visitor the books kept inside. He politely leads Byunseal farther in. A hidden mechanism opens the way to the true meeting area. Ma Woon turns back once the passage is secured. He introduces himself as the mediator in charge of secret meetings for the Yang branch. Byunseal senses at once that Ma Woon's harmless demeanor is only a surface. Ma Woon explains that Salvation Squad members are stripped of names and known only by numbers, and assigns Byunseal the number 18. He hands over the mission book and tells him to choose one so the details can be explained. Byunseo begins reading, searching for something worthy of him. One mission offers 500 silver nyang to retrieve Bashan incense. When Byunseo asks what the issue count means, Ma Woon explains that it shows how many times the mission has been posted. That means either previous takers failed or no one wanted it for a long time. Byunseo dismisses the ordinary theft and misinformation jobs as meaningless to him. What he wants is a fight that will test him and make him stronger. He keeps searching, convinced there must be a mission like that. Then he finds one that has been issued 9 times. The mission offers 3,000 silver nyang to discreetly eliminate the Vice Hall Master of the Blood Ean cult's soul-sparing hall. Ma Woon immediately tells him not to even consider that one, but Byunseo demands to know why. Ma Woon explains that missions are ranked from level 4 to level 1, with lower numbers meaning far greater difficulty, and that level 2 is usually for veterans of several years. Level 1 is reserved for the very best, so level 2 is already the highest Byunseo is even allowed to choose. He warns that the target is a long-famous martial master who has survived countless assassination attempts, making ordinary tactics useless. The enormous reward exists because the mission is genuinely lethal. Byunseo thinks only one thing as he weighs the risk. He recognizes this impossible mission as exactly what he has been looking for. Ma Woon notices the dangerous resolve in him and grows uneasy. Byunseo closes the book with his decision made. When Ma Woon tries to stop him again, Byunseo cuts him off and says he does not care. He trusts the information Master Chio gave him and believes the target is not beyond reach. Ma Woon realizes this newcomer is far more reckless than he first thought. He concludes that Byunseo is not extraordinary after all, just eager to die. Even so, the process moves forward. Ma Woon says the clothes and equipment needed for the mission have already been prepared. Byunseo takes the offered gear without hesitation. He is led to another hidden room. Inside is an armory filled with weapons and tools for covert killing. Ma Woon tells him to take what he wants. Byunseo inspects the supplies laid out for him. He notices that everything is old and rusted, and understands they expect him to die before better equipment would matter. Rather than taking offense, he decides he will prove himself by surviving and succeeding. After he leaves, the room is left in tense silence. Someone can no longer hold back his reaction. The old bookseller returns and asks Ma Woon how the meeting went. Ma Woon says the newcomer chose a level 2 mission immediately and assumes he will never see him again. When the bookseller hears the target is Suk Jong of the Blood Ean cult, he is stunned. That mission is notorious because even elite members have failed it. Ma Woon admits he gave the boy random equipment to avoid wasting resources, convinced the Blood Ean cult will soon be dealing with a corpse. The story shifts to Blood Ean Island, where Byunseo's chosen mission leads him. The island belongs to a vicious sect of the demonic path, cut off from the outside world. Yet even on this isolated stronghold, ordinary life and labor continue. Workers unload cargo at the docks under shouted orders. Among them, Byunseo moves in disguise as a nervous first-time laborer, apologizing for his clumsiness. He uses the supply ships as planned to infiltrate the island without drawing suspicion. The busy harbor gives him the cover he needs to slip into the cult's operations. He blends into the work crew, carrying loads and obeying commands like everyone else. A nearby overseer notices him and singles him out. When called, Byunseo answers meekly, staying in character. But the next instant, he realizes too late that the man is testing him. The overseer suddenly drives a blade into Byunseo's throat to see how he reacts under surprise. Byunseo screams in genuine terror as blood appears at his neck. The overseer judges from that raw panic that this newcomer has no martial training and therefore is not a spy. Satisfied, he orders someone to treat the wound and moves on. The workers gather around the injured boy while the overseer leaves. A rough treatment area is quickly prepared with basic medical supplies. As the wound is stitched, Byunseo keeps up the act of a frightened novice who can barely endure the pain. Once the bandage is tied, the treatment is finished. He is told the cut was shallow, the bleeding is under control, and the wound should close within a week. Byunseo thanks them gratefully, and the workers are left thinking the timid newcomer is harmless even as his infiltration succeeds. After narrowly slipping past suspicion at the docks, the infiltrator feels a wave of relief. He steadies himself and lets the immediate danger pass. Inside his disguise, he admits he was only moments away from being exposed. He reflects that posing as a skilled physician is the perfect cover because sailors readily trust and welcome one. He credits his survival to body transformation and aura concealment techniques that let him pass flawlessly as someone else. With the ship set to leave the next day, he realizes his window is now. He resolves to kill Suk Jong that very night before escape becomes impossible. By dusk, he reaches the island stronghold where the target is based. When night falls, the cult compound glows with activity, confirming the place is still heavily occupied. He slips through the surrounding forest under cover of darkness. Moving fast and low, he closes in on the compound without alerting anyone. From above, he finally sees the full Blood Ean cult complex spread beneath the cliffs. The sight confirms he has indeed penetrated the Blood Ean cult's territory. That realization sharpens the risk, but he presses on. Below him, masked cult members patrol and converse, showing the grounds are guarded but not on high alert. He commits to the infiltration and drops into the compound. Using Swift Phantom, he descends in a blur meant to leave no trace. His arrival goes unnoticed by the people below, who remain focused on their own business. From concealment, he locks onto a familiar presence. He recognizes Suk-jong among the cult members and immediately fixes him as the target. From the rooftop, he senses Suk-jong's internal energy and confirms the man is every bit as formidable as rumored. What unsettles him is that Suk-jong radiates that power openly despite surviving many assassination attempts, as if he wants to be found. Suspecting bait, he decides to proceed with extreme caution instead of striking at once. He slips deeper into the compound to observe from closer range. Following a distinctive medicinal smell, he deduces Suk-jong is heading toward the cult's underground medicine storage. He remembers hearing that the storage lies below ground and decides it would be the ideal isolated place to kill the target. As he tails Suk-jong through the corridor, a sudden shift in the target's awareness makes him tense. Suk-jong gives no obvious sign, but his composure suggests he may already know he is being followed. The assassin hides behind a pillar and waits for proof that he has been noticed. When nothing happens immediately, he convinces himself he has not been discovered. He descends into the underground chamber after Suk-jong. At the bottom, he finds a sealed stone room that feels cut off from the outside world. Inside the storage, Suk-jong appears to lower his guard while inspecting jars of medicine. Seeing the target seemingly exposed, the assassin decides this is his best chance to finish everything in a single strike. He steps into position to launch the killing blow. At the last instant, his instincts scream that something is wrong. He unleashes Swift Phantom anyway, committing fully to the attack. The room answers with hidden mechanisms, and he realizes too late that the entire chamber was a trap. Suk-jong calmly mocks him, treating the ambush as just another routine attempt on his life. He reveals that assassins always choose this same room to corner him, making their tactics painfully predictable. The assassin answers with grim focus, accepting the confrontation now that stealth has failed. A glimpse of severed heads stored in jars reveals what kind of monster Suk-jong truly is. Suk-jong boasts that he has room for one more head, making clear he intends not just to kill the intruder but to keep him as a trophy. He enjoys the assassin's shock and begins to toy with him. Suk-jong explains that infiltrators keep sneaking in on incoming ships and trying to kill him here, so he prepared for them long ago. He shows the small disc-like devices spread across the floor and proudly identifies them as the traps he set for this exact situation. The assassin bitterly realizes the Salvation Squad's secrecy has backfired, since each member keeps falling for the same setup without warning the others. He understands that the squad's anonymity protects missions but also prevents them from sharing life-saving information. Suk-jong dismisses him as just another young fool and decides he does not even need his favorite weapon to win. Instead of killing him quickly, Suk-jong invites him forward with the promise of mutilation first. He openly savors the thought of making the assassin suffer before death. The assassin accepts that the assassination itself has failed, but he is almost relieved because a real fight is what he wanted all along. He charges straight at Suk-jong, turning the encounter into a direct duel. Their blades meet head-on, and the clash immediately proves that neither man can overwhelm the other by force alone. The assassin presses with disciplined technique rather than panic. Suk-jong is briefly surprised that the attacker can match him at close range. He retaliates with a sudden follow-up meant to break the assassin's rhythm. Even while fighting, Suk-jong praises the assassin's internal energy and notes that his swordsmanship is far too refined for an ordinary killer. Intrigued, Suk-jong unveils the black serpent blade technique and attacks with deceptive, coiling strikes. The assassin braces himself and studies the movement instead of retreating blindly. A storm of red-edged slashes rains down around him, forcing him to defend from every angle. He judges the attack fast but readable and believes he can survive if he calmly deflects each trajectory. That confidence is shattered when one of the false motions changes at the last instant and cuts into him. Coughing blood, he realizes he did not truly understand the technique at all. Suk-jong laughs and taunts him for being unable to counter the trick behind the attack. He keeps piling on slashes, driving the wounded assassin backward. The assassin still manages to parry enough to avoid being carved apart immediately. As both men take minor wounds, Suk-jong notices something odd. The assassin is not exploiting obvious openings or aiming for weak points. That observation makes the assassin suspect Suk-jong wants something other than a clean kill. He plants his foot and changes his approach. Deciding he needs understanding more than caution, he resolves to attack more boldly and force the technique to reveal itself. He launches himself back into the storm of false slashes, drawing delighted praise from Suk-jong. Suk-jong adds another deceptive cut, and the assassin begins identifying the pattern behind the feints. A sudden realization flashes across his face. He intercepts the next strike at the exact moment the false motion turns real. By seeing the trajectory change in an instant, he finally grasps the core of the technique. He confirms to himself that he understands it now. The black serpent blade technique is not true unpredictability but a style built on fake motions that redirect at the decisive moment. Armed with that insight, he steadies completely. He closes his eyes, abandoning sight so the feints can no longer mislead him. Suk-jong notices the change and mocks him for trying to show off after figuring out the false moves. Confident that closed eyes cannot save him, Suk-jong attacks again from multiple angles. The assassin trusts that it can be done and commits to fighting without being deceived by appearances. In his mind, he strips away the false motions and isolates only the true killing lines among the many possibilities. He recognizes the real path of the attack as the wild beast path hidden beneath the feints. Acting on that insight, he blocks the genuine strikes while ignoring the illusions, shocking Suk-jong. For the first time, Suk-jong loses composure and demands to know how the assassin saw through it. The assassin surges forward through the collapsing web of feints and turns defense into offense. He cuts through the remaining false lines and forces Suk-jong onto the back foot. Suk-jong retreats in frustration, realizing his signature technique is no longer controlling the fight. The two separate for a heartbeat, and the balance of power has clearly shifted. The assassin gathers himself for a finishing move. He uses Swift Phantom again, multiplying his presence and attack lines until Suk-jong can no longer tell where the real strike is. Suk-jong is rattled by the absurdity of the technique and can no longer read the battlefield. The assassin understands that Suk-jong has now made two fatal mistakes. The first was giving him enough time to decipher and counter the Black Serpent Blade technique. The assassin raises his sword for the second and final lesson. The second mistake was Suk-jong's arrogance in refusing to use his own proper weapon from the start. As death closes in, Suk-jong can only stare in disbelief and ask how this happened. He makes one desperate attempt to stop the finishing blow with brute force. The assassin breaks through that last defense and descends with lethal precision. Suk-jong realizes too late that he is about to lose and reaches for a whistle to summon the guards outside. Before the call can sound, the assassin notices the move. He instantly switches from sword to hidden blade, prioritizing silence over style. The concealed strike pierces Suk-jong's chest and stops the alarm before it begins. Dying, Suk-jong can barely comprehend that he has been defeated by someone he dismissed as a mere assassin. The assassin finishes him with a final slash that sends the body flying. The whistle falls uselessly away. Suk-jong dies in a pool of blood while the assassin stands over him, victorious but winded. Catching his breath, the assassin reflects that even a famed martial master of the Jianghu can die the moment he lets his guard down. With the target dead, he prepares to leave before anyone discovers the scene. By daylight, the story shifts back to the bookshop that serves as the branch's front. The old branch handler sits in apparent peace until the quiet is broken. A subordinate bursts in with urgent news, and the old man immediately senses trouble. The messenger struggles to get the words out, naming Suk-jong. When he hears that Suk-jong is dead, the old man is stunned into disbelief. The report spreads that Suk-jong was killed by someone inside the Blood-Ean cult, and that it was not an assassination but an outright duel. Worse, the shattered remains of the blade Suk-jong had wielded for 10 years were found at the scene, proving he was overpowered in direct combat. Everyone is left wondering what kind of person could have defeated him. The answer walks in casually, and the old man greets the returning assassin with forced warmth while hiding his shock. He ushers the others aside and tries to regain control of the conversation. Unable to contain himself, he bluntly asks whether the assassin really killed Suk-jong. The assassin offers no explanation, leaving the old man grasping at the impossible. When pressed further, he reminds the handler that his job is only to assign missions, not interrogate him. The old man swallows his curiosity and backs down, at least outwardly. He pays the promised reward of 3,000 yang, and tells the assassin he can take another mission in 3 days. The assassin accepts the payment without ceremony. The old man notices an extra note, and awkwardly tells him to keep it for a drink, trying to appear generous. After the assassin turns away, the old man's expression sours. He mutters that the young man is unbearably arrogant, offended that he was treated like an ordinary shopkeeper. Yet his irritation gives way to excitement as he realizes what kind of talent has fallen into his branch. He orders Ma Wun to keep assigning the assassin the hardest missions, hoping the branch's reputation will soar because of him. Privately, he starts dreaming that this rising talent might become their way out of obscurity. 6 months pass, and the once quiet branch now stands in a brighter, more prosperous mood. Someone excitedly announces the arrival of a familiar figure. The old man hails him as the pillar of their branch, number 18, and credits him with transforming their future. The assassin ignores the flattery and states that he is only here for a new mission, sensing they want something more from him. The old man and Ma Wun exchange eager looks before broaching the real matter. The old man explains that the higher-ups have taken notice of him. Because of that attention, a mission has come directly from above rather than through the branch. The job is not to kill but to protect someone important, and the assassin rejects it immediately. Ma Wun physically stops him from walking out before the offer is fully explained. He argues that it is the highest difficulty assignment, and pays 10,000 yang a day, but the assassin dismisses money as irrelevant. The old man pleads with him to reconsider, stressing that this order comes straight from the higher-ups. He warns that refusing could bring ruin down on the entire branch, though inwardly he is furious at having to beg. Trying another angle, he promises the best equipment, and a constant stream of intelligence if the assassin accepts. That finally catches the assassin's interest, and he asks how long they would keep feeding him information. The old man eagerly promises support for as long as needed, calling them family to seal the bargain. The assassin agrees, but only for this one mission. After he leaves, the 2 branch men are left staring after him, knowing they have secured his help for now but not his loyalty. When his subordinate protests that revealing everything to an outsider is reckless, the older man shuts him down and insists on his plan. He promises that if this mission succeeds, they will finally be able to return to the Demon Palace. That possibility shocks the younger listener, who had not expected such a reward. The elder refuses to explain the full method, but makes clear that the assignment concerns something far bigger than usual. He reveals that the target they must protect is an extremely important figure staying in a grand riverside restaurant. At the restaurant, The supposed target appears to be casually dining with her uncle as if nothing dangerous is happening. The scene looks ordinary enough that even the pouring of drinks feels like part of a peaceful outing. Number 18 arrives quietly and studies the pair from a distance before making contact. He formally identifies himself as number 18 of the Luoyang Salvation Squad and states that he has come to serve as their guard. The young woman immediately recognizes him as the protector sent for her. Her uncle reacts with open annoyance, insisting they never needed outside help. The woman, so okay, gently introduces herself and begins introducing the man beside her. The older martial artist gives his name as Wu Moon Wong. At that name, number 18's attention sharpens at once. He quickly assesses the situation. A richly treated young woman dining lavishly beside an unidentified martial master can only mean influence and power. Wu Moon Wong dismisses him as unnecessary and orders him to stay out of sight while he handles everything himself. He goes further, warning number 18 not to interfere with So Ok's outing. Number 18 feels the crushing force of Wu's aura and realizes the man is overwhelmingly strong. He is stunned that Wu can project such pressure through chi alone. So Ok scolds her uncle for threatening someone who came to help them. Trying to smooth things over, she checks on number 18 and awkwardly suggests that her uncle may truly be skilled enough not to need him. She asks for understanding and explains that her uncle left the martial world long ago. Wu rejects the idea that the Demon Palace is merely being cautious and tells So Ok to trust his judgment instead. Number 18 revises his estimate, concluding that Wu is a retired martial master whose instincts may have dulled with time. Because Hunan is a battleground for many factions, he decides his role is to prevent any trouble that Wu might fail to notice. So Ok changes the subject and curiously asks why he is called number 18 instead of using a real name. He explains that Salvation Squad members remain anonymous and are known only by assigned titles. Amused, So Ok asks if she may call him Mr. 18 instead. He accepts politely and answers by calling her Miss So. The exchange softens the atmosphere for a moment. Then So Ok abruptly asks whether his anonymity is also why he is wearing a false face. The question catches him completely off guard, because no one has ever noticed the disguise before. She casually explains that she simply has a sharp eye and saw his facial muscles move unnaturally. Number 18 immediately realizes So Ok is far from ordinary, and may be even more important than he was told. That realization makes him pause and reconsider everything around him. As So Ok starts to mention their next plan to go boating after dinner, he suddenly interrupts. A wrong miss he could not ignore finally crystallizes in his mind. He notices that the other diners have been repeating the same conversations over and over, as if the whole place were staged. He concludes that everyone in the restaurant is an assassin in disguise. A tiny disturbance in the room confirms that the trap is already tightening. Number 18's focus narrows as he prepares for the attack he now knows is coming. He realizes the danger is total. Every person in the building is part of the ambush. His only comfort is that their table sits in a corner, so at least no one can strike from directly behind. He starts planning to draw out any hidden weapons first, but Wu still arrogantly tells him to stay out of it. Wu insists he alone is enough to guard So Ok and seems eager to prove it. Before number 18 can argue further, the first hidden attack is launched. Wu explodes in fury at the assassins for daring to move. The disguised killers realize at once that their cover has been broken. Their leader abandons subtlety and orders everyone to attack together. Wu meets the first rush head-on without hesitation. He seizes an attacker before the man can complete his strike. With a single palm, Wu unleashes a devastating blast that tears through the room. Number 18 instantly shifts to protect So Ok while the shockwave rips the restaurant apart. Seeing multiple assassins thrown down at once, he admits Wu is far stronger than he first judged. The surviving attackers stagger but are not yet broken. One of them rallies the others by pointing out that they still outnumber the three defenders. The assassins are ordered to kill them all without holding back. A new wave closes in from every direction around Wu. Wu dismisses the attackers as laughable and prepares to finish the fight quickly. He stamps down with force that cracks the floor and sends power racing outward. The shock tears through the assassins' footing and disrupts their coordinated charge. The fractured floor becomes another weapon under Wu's control. The upheaval throws enemies and debris into the air, but it also threatens So Ok's safety. Wu charges through the chaos with savage confidence, enjoying the slaughter. So Ok can only watch in alarm as the violence closes around her. A hidden projectile slips through the confusion toward her position. Number 18 intercepts the attack and plants himself directly in front of So Ok, turning his body into her shield. He orders her to stay within 3 steps of him at all times. Shaken but obedient, she agrees. Even as more assassins descend, she calls out to warn him. He remains calm and alert, refusing to be distracted by the pressure. Another concealed strike flashes toward them through the melee. Wu wipes out more attackers and sneers that weaklings like these are only a nuisance. He checks on So Ok while striding through the wreckage, still acting as though the situation is under control. So Ok credits Mr. 18 for keeping her safe amid the chaos. Wu dismisses that praise and starts to accuse number 18 of being present for the wrong reasons. Number 18 cuts him down verbally, saying Wu seems less interested in protecting So Ok than in showing off his own strength. Wu is taken aback by the blunt accusation. He steps in close, furious that someone he sees as a mere youth would speak to him so boldly. For a moment, his anger falters as the reality of the battlefield presses in. The dead and the hidden weapons scattered around them show how dangerous the ambush truly is. The three stand amid the ruined restaurant, surrounded by bodies and silence that feels temporary. Wu grudgingly admits to himself that the young guard is more useful than he expected. He awkwardly offers a reluctant compliment. Number 18 immediately urges them to leave and return to the inn. But he stops himself and argues that they cannot go back, because the inn may already be compromised in the same way. He proposes hiding somewhere safer until they learn who orchestrated the attack. Wu rejects the idea, insisting that the assassins are no threat to him even if they might endanger So-Okay. So-Okay calmly adds that this is not the first ambush she has faced, and that she has survived such attempts before. Number 18 suggests disguising themselves to reduce the risk, but Wu mocks the idea as cowardice. Realizing Wu cannot be reasoned with, Number 18 decides to work around him instead of against him. He turns away from the argument and begins planning his own response. He quietly instructs So-Okay to stay directly behind him the moment they enter the inn again, already assuming another attack awaits there. Privately, he sees the likelihood of more enemies at the inn as an opportunity to uncover the larger plot. So-Okay watches him with growing interest rather than fear. Outside the grand building in the rain, the three prepare to depart, but the danger follows them into the open courtyard. They start moving together across the stone path, with Wu leading and Number 18 keeping close to So-Okay. Assassins burst from hiding around the courtyard and launch a fresh ambush. Wu greets the attack with a grim, eager smile. He explodes upward into motion before the assassins can close their trap. His speed leaves only a violent streak across the ground. He rises above the attackers and turns the height of the leap into another killing strike. Number 18 tracks the movement and understands how dangerous Wu truly is in open combat. Wu crashes down with overwhelming force and blasts the surrounding assassins apart. The courtyard fills with smoke and shattered stone from the impact. Standing among fallen enemies, Wu boasts that he had said there would be no real problem. Number 18 immediately warns him that the battle is far from finished. Wu turns in surprise at the sudden seriousness in his voice. More assassins flood into the courtyard from every direction, revealing that the first wave was only the beginning. Even Wu is shaken by the sheer scale of the force assembled against them. Number 18 realizes that only someone of extraordinary importance could draw this many killers. So-Okay herself is startled by the question of just how valuable a target she must be. A hidden attacker tries to seize the advantage in the confusion. Wu curses as he realizes the assault is effectively endless. He estimates that the courtyard force is several times larger than the one in the restaurant. Worse, he recognizes that these are trained swordsmen using real martial techniques rather than disposable thugs. The assassins press in with coordinated killing intent and try to overwhelm him at close range. One attacker slips through with a decisive strike aimed to finish him. Wu narrowly avoids a fatal blow but is forced into a dangerous position. He realizes too late that So-Okay is exposed behind him. Number 18 responds instantly and moves before Wu can recover. A blinding slash cuts through the attacker's momentum. He carves down the assassin threatening So-Okay and clears the immediate space around her. Blood sprays across his face, but his expression remains cold and controlled. So-Okay thanks him in shock and relief. Number 18 says nothing, already measuring the next danger. He sees that Wu is tiring, and understands that protecting So-Okay is draining the older man's efficiency. Wu plants himself again and forces his battered body to keep fighting. He unleashes another burst of power that hurls back the nearest attackers and buys a little space. After the blast, he is left breathing hard, the strain finally visible. For the first time, Wu looks genuinely unsettled by the situation. The courtyard is littered with bodies, yet more assassins continue advancing through the rain. Even the killers are shaken by how many of their own have already fallen. Wu can hardly believe there are still so many enemies left. He admits to himself that he can keep fighting them, but not easily while also shielding So-Okay. Seeing Number 18 cutting through enemies nearby, Wu finally calls out to him in earnest. He orders Number 18 to take So-Okay and escape while he stays behind to hold the assassins off alone. Number 18 refuses, arguing that the area is already surrounded and that splitting up would only make them easier to kill. He reveals that reinforcements from their side should arrive in about 2 hours if they can endure until then. Wu, now speaking without arrogance, pleads with him to obey and get So-Okay out. Number 18 hesitates, torn between strategy and the old man's resolve. So-Okay protests that they cannot simply abandon Wu to die. Then, with sudden politeness, she asks Number 18 to excuse her. Before he can stop her, she startles him by climbing into his arms herself, forcing him to carry her. Wu seizes the moment and vows to open a path for them. He detonates another massive attack into the surrounding assassins, blasting a corridor through the encirclement. Number 18 realizes the opening is real and that hesitation will waste Wu's sacrifice. Wu roars at him to go now. At last Number 18 turns and flees with So-Okay in his arms while Wu remains behind to hold the line. The assassins immediately realize the target is escaping and shout for pursuit. Surrounded by assassins, the swordsman decides that technique matters less than escaping with the young woman alive. He commits to raw speed as the only thing that can break the encirclement. In a burst too fast to follow, he tears through the siege and opens a path out. He carries the frightened woman in his arms and flees under the night sky. Without slowing down, he keeps her close and races toward shelter. The assassins immediately regroup and are ordered to pursue him. As he runs, he realizes the enemy force is even larger than expected, with killers hidden beyond the garden as well. He vanishes ahead before the pursuers can close the distance. A quiet building becomes his chosen refuge. He crashes straight through the entrance rather than waste time with caution. The startled men inside barely begin to greet a visitor before he appears carrying the woman. Ignoring their confusion, he bluntly demands a room to borrow. The woman is too stunned by the sudden turn to understand what he is planning. When the men notice light from the hidden storage room, he immediately claims it and insists there is no time to explain. He moves to secure the place while the woman hesitates behind him. He activates the mechanism that opens the concealed room. A hidden armory slides open, revealing a secret storage space. He places the woman inside and orders her to stay there. To the two branch leaders, he gives a harsher command: patrol the store and kill any assassins who come near. He explains that the target is being hunted by a storm of assassins who have already surrounded the entire area. Reminding them that they said this mission was a matter of life and death, he demands they act like it. His killing intent surges as he makes clear he expects absolute commitment. The two men are shaken by how serious and dangerous he suddenly becomes. The room falls into a tense standoff as they weigh his order. One of the men bitterly repeats his challenge and accepts the stakes. The pair eagerly choose violence, deciding survival means slaughtering the attackers first. They finally introduce themselves as Sang Riang and Ma Woon, the men in charge of this branch. The woman recognizes them as the once feared Gong demon duo. She recalls hearing they had been reassigned to the demon palace and promises to report their service to her father if she survives. The two men are overjoyed to be recognized and praised by her. She remembers that they were once powerful figures who were demoted here after mistakenly killing demon palace spies disguised as orthodox martial artists. Fired up by a chance at redemption, the duo rushes out to butcher the assassins. They politely tell the young woman to rest while they handle the bloodshed outside. The swordsman also prepares to leave, warning her not to come out until he opens the doors himself. Before he can go, she stops him by addressing him more personally. With quiet honesty, she admits she fears this place may become her grave. He answers without hesitation that she will not die. He vows that no matter what happens, he will not allow her to be killed. His certainty leaves her staring at him in surprise. That promise softens her fear into trust. She gathers her courage and says there is something important he must know. Even if everything goes wrong, she begs him to remember what she is about to reveal. He turns back as she begins to confess the truth about her identity. She tells him the name he knows is false and reveals that her real name is Dan So-okay. The revelation hits him hard enough to stop him cold. He realizes she is the treasured daughter of the House of Demon Gathering, the family that commands the Demon Palace military. He recalls that although she was born with an absolute physique and could not learn martial arts, she was still chosen as a future overseer because of her intelligence. He immediately understands that this attack is tied to a major political struggle inside the Demon Palace, and that she is at the center of it. Now that she has trusted him with her true self, she asks him to tell her his name as well. The request catches him off guard more than the danger outside. He refuses for now and says it can wait. He promises that once this crisis is over, he will tell her. As he moves away, she watches him go but refuses to let the promise stay vague. She makes him swear he will keep that promise. He pauses under the weight of her trust and the danger closing in. Something about her insistence unsettles him in a way battle never does. He cannot understand why someone of her rank would care so much about the name of an ordinary Salvation Squad member. To protect her, he destroys the hidden entrance so no one can easily reach the storage room. Once the passage is sealed, he notes that the enemy found them faster than he expected. Facing the doors with sword in hand, he realizes the two branch leaders were not enough to stop the incoming wave. He warns the unseen enemy that they can still save themselves by fleeing now. He even offers mercy, saying there is no point in a young assassin throwing away a life. But he immediately recognizes the reply for what it is. An assassin only talks this much when uncertain of victory. Silence answers him for a moment from beyond the doors. He dismisses the hidden foe as arrogant. Thin killing lines suddenly spread across the doors. A squad of assassins explodes through the shattered entrance and charges him at once. He meets the rush head-on, drawing both blades into a killing stance. He cuts into the first wave before they can surround him. His blades carve through bodies in a blur, turning the room into a slaughterhouse. Even wounded, he keeps pressing through the crowd with relentless precision. The massacre continues until the attackers are reduced to falling bodies and blood. A single drop of blood hangs from his blade, marking the end of the charge. That drop falls in the sudden stillness after the killing. One surviving assassin realizes too late that death has already reached him. The swordsman stands over the corpses, bloodied himself but still unbroken. The room is left wrecked and piled with dead assassins, yet the battle is not over. He senses another presence and turns, knowing the true threat has not shown itself yet. Frustrated, he realizes the enemy numbers seem endless. He had believed he had wiped them all out, but something still remains hidden. A new voice praises him for detecting its presence, revealing a far more dangerous opponent. He demands to know where this hidden enemy came from. The newcomer admits that if he had known a fighter like this was here, he would have changed the plan from the start. When the swordsman says he only joined the Salvation Squad 6 months ago, he presses the stranger on whether Dan So-okay's murder had been planned even before that. The stranger answers that it is still not too late for him to back off. He is told to step aside and avoid being harmed. The masked man reveals himself enough to make clear he is not speaking from fear of losing. The swordsman answers with cold focus rather than intimidation. He throws the offer back at the intruder and repeats that stepping aside is the only way to avoid bloodshed. He says nothing more, letting his resolve speak for him. Tightening his grip, he draws a hard line the enemy will not cross. He openly declares that the masked man will not take a single step beyond that point. The intruder is amused and notes that the young man's inner energy is unusually strong for an assassin. He readies a sword with a strange hilt and decides to show mercy only because he still underestimates his opponent. Confident in his superiority, he even grants the first move. The swordsman studies the stance and realizes this is no ordinary assassin's swordsmanship. He concludes that a man who speaks of initiative like this is not an assassin at all. As the enemy attacks, he wonders what reason such a swordsman could have for interfering in this political killing. The masked man closes the distance with terrifying speed. The swordsman answers by entering the essence of the dual-wielding mind art, splitting offense and defense between both hands. His concentration sharpens to a single point as he commits fully to the technique. A vast, water-like field of sword energy unfolds around him. The two techniques collide in a blinding clash of force. He immediately recognizes that the enemy is using an immense heavy sword technique. He realizes a direct clash will shatter his blade unless he answers with heavy sword force of his own. So he changes tactics in the middle of the exchange. Their weapons crash again in a burst of light. The collision tears through the room with explosive force. He survives by redirecting the strike instead of meeting it head-on. The masked man is impressed that his sword was deflected at all. But he immediately turns that praise into pressure, claiming the deflection only proved the young swordsman cannot truly block him. Forced back, the swordsman absorbs the next wave while searching for an opening. He keeps parrying at the edge of disaster rather than trying to overpower the attack. Inside that defense, he hides a crucial secret. He can use a heavy sword technique too, and his enemy does not know it. He decides to wait until the masked man grows careless from superiority and commits to a decisive blow. He recognizes that reckless confidence as the opening he needs. He shifts his footing and prepares both blades for a counter. The masked man finally understands that all the retreating and deflecting was only a way to buy time. He refuses to let that plan succeed and launches a finishing attack. A devastating slash crashes down with crushing force. The masked man pours even more power into it and dares him to deflect this strike too. The swordsman seizes the instant he was waiting for. He slips through the attack line and drives into counter at close range. Using the essence of the dual-wielding mind art, he splits his will between two perfectly coordinated actions. One blade moves first with impossible speed. That hand unleashes the Heavenly Overlord ultimate blade momentum. The other hand follows without hesitation. He reveals that he too can wield the heavy sword technique, bringing both arts together in one counterstroke. The masked man is caught completely off guard. The swordsman roars as he commits everything to the blow. The strike lands with explosive impact. The masked man is blasted away across the ruined room, coughing blood. The force keeps driving him back through wreckage and corpses. Enraged, he realizes too late that the young swordsman had been capable of heavy sword force all along. He understands that his own carelessness nearly got him killed, and that only an emergency expansion of his technique saved him. Now treating the swordsman as a true threat, he decides he cannot leave him alive. He gathers himself for another killing blow. Then something in the air changes enough to stop him cold. He senses a new pressure entering the battlefield from behind him. Recognizing that Wu Moonwang may have returned, he immediately loses his appetite for continuing the fight. Unlike the wounded young swordsman, that possible arrival is an opponent he cannot confidently defeat. He decides that staying any longer would be reckless. The decision hardens into retreat. He tells the swordsman that luck saved him today and promises to kill him slowly another time. The battered swordsman answers that the threat belongs to him instead. The intruder backs away with a mocking laugh. Before disappearing, he says he looks forward to their next meeting. He slips out of sight and abandons the fight. Left alone in the wreckage, the swordsman remains standing despite his injuries. Even after the enemy retreats, he is shaken by the fact that someone could release such crushing pressure from nothing more than a preparatory stance. The wounded swordsman collapses after a battle fierce enough to leave the room wrecked, raising the question of whether he had been concealing far greater strength all along. Lying bloodied on the floor, he clings to consciousness by a thread. So-okay rushes to his side in panic, blaming herself for drawing him into this. Even as she begs him not to die, he weakly reminds her that she was supposed to stay hidden until he called for her. She tearfully admits that fear for him made her disobey. He steadies himself enough to look at her properly. With his strength fading, he prepares to say something important before he loses the chance. He finally gives So-okay the name she had wanted to know, Byunseol. He frames it as the answer to the question she once asked about who he really was. By naming himself, he offers her a final piece of trust while still sprawled on the floor. He repeats the name clearly so she will remember it. After revealing himself, he waits to see how she will take it. So-okay is stunned by the intimacy of the moment. Through tears, she promises to remember both his name and his face. Her words make him realize that the disguise hiding his true appearance has already worn off. He understands that she has now seen his real face as well as learned his real name. Still too weak to stand, he asks her to help him up, and she agrees at once. Before they can recover, So-okay's uncle bursts in, frantic to confirm whether she survived. His alarm shifts into confusion as he senses something is far from ordinary here. Seeing the room littered with fallen attackers, he can barely process what happened. The sheer number of defeated enemies leaves the adults awestruck at the swordsman's feat. From the floor, Byunseol reassures the uncle that So-okay is safe. Supported by So-okay, he manages to sit up and face the newcomers. So-okay quickly composes herself, trying not to reveal too much in front of the others. She insists she is unharmed and credits her protector, nearly using his name before correcting herself. More allies from the Salvation Squad arrive, saying they came to help but clearly too late to matter. They report that although they defended as best they could, some enemies escaped. The scene makes clear that far more people were involved than the few they thought they were chasing. The survivors realize this attack was larger and more organized than anyone expected, and they do not know who all these people are. The uncle identifies the young man as Salvation Squad, Yang Branch, number 18. Recognizing who saved his niece, he openly praises Byunseal's work. Byunseel answers with humility, claiming he only fulfilled his duty. The uncle rejects that modesty and lowers himself in sincere respect. He apologizes for having judged Byunseel harshly and for treating him unfairly before. Overcome with gratitude, he says there is no obvious way to repay someone who protected So Okay despite that treatment. Byunseel listens in silence, unmoved by flattery but not dismissive of the sincerity. So Okay quietly urges him to respond to her uncle. Instead of accepting the apology from a distance, Byunseel steps forward. He offers the older man a hand, choosing dignity over resentment. The uncle is startled by such generosity from someone he had wronged. As he takes the offered hand, he privately concludes that Byunseal's character is as exceptional as his skill. Once the immediate gratitude settles, attention turns back to the attackers and whether any clue to their identities remains. The answer is grim. The enemy left no useful traces, suggesting careful planning from the very beginning, and Byunseel vows to uncover them after reporting to headquarters. He senses that this failed assassination is only the start of wider bloodshed in the martial world. The threat is framed as an omen of death spreading again. With that warning hanging over the aftermath, he prepares to depart. Outside, So Okay is escorted away through the busy street under her uncle's protection. Byunseel watches from a distance as she is helped into a carriage. Even after everything, she looks back toward him before leaving. She parts from him with the hope that they will meet again. He remains standing in the street, absorbing her farewell in silence. As the carriage rolls away, he watches until it disappears from sight. The story then shifts to the blood-killing sect, the group behind the attack. Within the sect, the failure to assassinate the House of Demon Gathering leader's daughter causes immediate outrage because even their main force could not finish the job. Their superior demands to know how they could fail and whether Wu Moonhuang was at least eliminated. The subordinate can only falter, already sensing disaster. Before he can answer properly, noise outside interrupts the interrogation. One man goes to investigate, only to realize something is terribly wrong. He sees a body suddenly drop into view, confirming that someone has begun killing their own people. In horror, the subordinate understands that the sect is erasing witnesses and cutting loose ends. The purge begins in a burst of blood. The killers move through the compound without hesitation. At the same time, forces from the House of Demon Gathering are mobilized to identify the mastermind behind the Blood Slaughter sect's attack. Their men are startled by the urgency and scale of the response. A report is then delivered to the House of Demon Gathering leader. Dan Wulhun, the House of Demon Gathering leader, coldly demands to know why not even one enemy was captured. His subordinate explains that by the time they arrived, the attackers had already vanished. What they found instead was a site already cleaned of living suspects. The report clarifies that after learning So Okay had been targeted, they activated every intelligence network they had to trace the culprits. That investigation confirmed the Blood Slaughter sect's involvement, but also suggested that an assassination sect would never provoke the entire House of Demon Gathering unless someone more powerful stood behind them. Dan Wulhun concludes that a far greater hidden player orchestrated the massacre. He orders his men to find that mastermind without fail and make them pay. Only after issuing vengeance does he ask how So Okay is faring. He is told that she is physically fine but has become fixated on the warrior who saved her. Her attendants say she has spoken of little else since the attack, clearly deeply impressed by her protector. When his subordinate identifies that protector as Salvation Squad, Yang Branch, number 18, Byunseel, Dan Wulhun immediately commits the name to memory. He decides that Byunseel is someone worth remembering. 6 months pass. A bell marks the start of a new day in winter. Byunseel, now recovered, brushes snow from his shoulder as he moves through the branch grounds. His 2 branch superiors greet him warmly, and jokingly ask whether he has finished another mission. Rather than discussing work, they immediately try to drag him out for drinks. He meets their enthusiasm with his usual quiet reluctance. Inwardly, he reflects that over the past 6 months he has completed every mission considered nearly impossible and earned the recognition of the 2 men running the branch. Because of those achievements, their attitude toward him has changed completely. The relationship has grown beyond mere assignments, and they now spend time together joking and drinking. Even when they tease him, he no longer stands apart from them as a stranger. One of them argues that drinking again is perfectly reasonable because every day deserves its own celebration. They remind him that in 10 days they will all return to the demonic palace, and that he plans to quit around then. Since their time together is running short, they insist they should drink as much as possible now, especially because his accomplishments are the reason they are returning in triumph. Byunseel tries to decline, saying he needs to spend the remaining days packing his room. His companions immediately volunteer to handle that for him, so he has no excuse left. They haul him off toward a drinking spot, determined to celebrate no matter what he says. He follows along despite himself. Under a bright winter moon, the 3 settle onto a rooftop to drink. His companions complain that he chose the roof over the private room they reserved, but they indulge him because they know this is the kind of place he prefers. He compromises by suggesting they start with one jar there and move later if the others still dislike it. They begin drinking together in the cold night air. The first toast seals the easy camaraderie between them. Almost immediately, the others admit the rooftop atmosphere is better than expected. One of them praises Byunseol for anticipating that, and says he understood the mood before they did. Byunseol brushes the compliment aside, saying he simply dislikes crowded places. His older companion reflects that more than a year has already passed since Byunseol first arrived. He recalls how he initially dismissed Byunseol as an arrogant youth, only to watch him succeed on a brutal first mission and continue taking on jobs veteran members avoided. To him, Byunseol's defining accomplishment remains the day he protected the House of Demon Gatherings heir. He jokes about how terrifying it was when Byunseol burst into the library and ordered them to stop the assassins. Remembering that moment still leaves both older men shaken and impressed. They laugh about the chaos they returned to after the battle and how unbelievable the aftermath looked. Yet beneath the joking, the older man admits that many things have happened since then. He confesses that he still does not know what originally drove Byunseol to join the Salvation Squad. But he says the world is chaotic for everyone, and all anyone can do is try to find some joy within it. So he offers Byunseol a place to return to whenever he grows tired, promising that they will always have a drink waiting for him. The sincerity of that invitation catches Byunseol off guard. After a pause, he quietly accepts it. For a moment, words fail him. Then one of the others groans, sensing the mood has turned too heavy. He abruptly raises his cup and insists they stop being sentimental and keep drinking instead. The other joins in at once, turning the moment back into loud celebration. Their laughter carries across the snowy rooftops. Later, Byunseol leaves the rooftop gathering alone. As he walks back, he thinks of his two companions as troublesome but with unmistakable fondness. A faint smile shows how much they have come to matter to him. He reflects clearly on their natures. Sangryang is shamelessly practical and flattering when money is involved, yet easygoing at heart. Ma Woon is hot-blooded and arrogant, but also disarmingly innocent in his own way. Whatever their flaws, he has come to a simple conclusion about them. He recognizes them as genuine people and realizes he feels attached to them for reasons he cannot fully explain. Carrying that warmth with him, he returns to his room. He reaches for the door ring to enter. At the threshold, his instincts suddenly sharpen. He immediately senses that someone is already inside waiting for him. Instead of retreating, he opens the door and steps in. He scans the room in silence, searching for the hidden presence. His measured steps show he is no longer off guard at all. He draws his blade, ready for the intruder to reveal themselves. A masked figure appears behind him and remarks that the famed Salvation Squad members seem to have let his guard down. Byunseol calmly denies that assumption. He reveals that he noticed the intruder from the start and deliberately led them into a room rigged with traps to test who was careless. The masked visitor is forced to acknowledge that the advantage has shifted. The hidden crossbow in the room proves Byunseol had prepared for exactly this kind of encounter. With the intruder checked, Byunseol demands their identity. The masked figure claims to be from the demonic palace and says they have a message to deliver. To prove they are not here to kill him, the visitor flicks a sealed document toward him. Byunseol catches the letter effortlessly without lowering his guard. The messenger even notes, almost sheepishly, that they used an assassination technique just to throw the letter. The seal identifies the contents as a level 4 matter. The messenger explains that level 4 missions are reserved only for the Salvation Squad's absolute elite, and that there have been only a dozen such assignments. He adds that Byunseol is the youngest person ever chosen for one, making the messenger openly envious. Instead of pride, Byunseol feels only unease. He asks what kind of mission would warrant that level of secrecy and danger. The order begins with a direct summons to Yeyang Branch number 18 for a level 4 mission to be carried out within 4 days, before the branch transfer is complete. A covert order is revealed. The Gong Demon duo, identified as spies within the Murim Alliance, are to be eliminated, and the reader absorbs the mission with sudden, grave focus.